Hello. Welcome to the Fanfic Majesty. If you want more content, you can follow me on Patreon. I will be uploading more content on there that will be exclusive. The link is in the description. Please support me.
4 Leaders Chapter 17. The straw hats were spread out everywhere, dripping wet and panting for air as if they had all just run a marathon. The air seemed to be so thin that it was difficult for them to draw breath. There was bright sunlight all around, and it took them all several minutes for their eyes to make anything out. The first thing they noticed through the light was that the ride had taken its toll. Both of Mary's wings on her sides had been broken clean off and the sails had been torn to shreds. They were all gasping and coughing, and then Zora's voice croaked out, What just happened to us? Everyone alright? No one answered him, too exhausted to speak. Luffy finally got back up and was looking around excitedly. Hey guys, look out there, what is that? The others were slowly getting to their feet, and their jaws all hit the deck when they saw. They were sitting afloat on a sea of white, fluffy clouds. What in the world? Sanji gasped, truly not believing what he was seeing. It's solid white, Luffy cried out joyfully. They're clouds? Chopper yelled. His eyes were practically glowing, looking like he wanted to jump into the clouds and see for himself. Nami was gasping at it all, wanting to know how it was possible, and what was keeping them from falling. Luffy tried to reason that since both clouds and boats floated, it was the same thing. Rolling their eyes, the crew tried to explain to him that it was completely different until Chopper realized that Usopp had stopped breathing. Apparently the shock of breaking through the clouds was too much for him to take. After a little panicking and CPR, Chopper was able to get him breathing again, but it looked like he was going to pass out again when he got a good look at his surroundings, as if truly not believing that he was alive. He screamed in panic, crying out to know where exactly they were. Basically, Nami whispered, it's an ocean in the sky. No way, Usopp said to what Nami stated, running to the side of Mary to look down at the clouds, seriously. Nami was then staring down at the log pose and gave a sharp intake of breath when she noticed the needle. She looked up to Robin and told her that the needle was still pointing straight up. Robin answered reasonably, so we must still be somewhere in the middle of the cumulus cloud. Wait, Chopper asked, sitting next to her, you mean you have to travel even higher? That's what the log pose says at least, she answered. Usopp laughing triumphantly, and when they looked back, he had taken the top of his overalls off and he posed on the side of Mary. Here I go, Usopp cried out, cloud swimming champ, Usopp. Chopper and Luffy both whistled and cried out, happily rooting Usopp on. Sanji tried to warn Usopp not to do anything since they still didn't know much about this place, but naturally, Usopp didn't listen as he did a perfect dive right in the sea. Sanji held Luffy back from jumping as well while Chopper was pouting as he looked down where Usopp had disappeared, wishing that he could swim like that as he frowned down at the sea, but as they waited, they slowly began to realize that he wasn't coming back up. As the others joined Luffy and Chopper at the side, Robin spoke up, you know, it's possible that this ocean may not have an actual bottom. Say what? Sanji cried out. Once Robin's words had sunk in, they all realized what she was talking about and looked ready to panic themselves as they stared in horror at the sea before them. Idiot, Zoro cried out, sweat falling from his face. Did the fool just fall through the clouds? Eyes wide, Luffy cried out Usopp's name before he jumped up in the air, turning into an eagle hybrid as he went, and dived into the clouds with Sanji yelling out that he just told him not to do something so stupid. Robin called for Luffy to fly as fast as he could go. Luffy flew as fast as his wings could go, though the thickness of the clouds made even his sharp vision obstructed. Fortunately, the consistency of the cloud was soft enough and he had little resistance on his body. Finally, he was able to catch an echoing girlish scream a short ways away from him. Luffy, with a final burst of speed, was able to get out of the cloud cover just in time to see Usopp start to fall out of the sky sea. Reaching out with his talon feet, Luffy was able to snag the Snapper's arms before he fell too far. Don't worry, Usopp, I've got you, Luffy called out as he went back into the clouds to fly back up to Mary. Halfway through, however, Luffy experienced some resistance coming from his form. Luffy burst back up to the clouds a few feet from Mary, much to the crew's relief. Luffy seemed to struggle a bit getting his lower half clutching Usopp out of the clouds. With a great tug, Usopp came bursting through the clouds, and he was apparently out cold. Yes, Nami cried happily, he's back, but just then something beneath them began to rise up and Luffy cried out, but he's not alone. A giant octopus and with a long, colorful snake-like fish burst through the clouds underneath them, both of them treating Usopp like he was a worm on a hook as they went to try and eat him. Thankfully, Zoro and Sanji took care of both of them. As Luffy pulled Usopp safely on board, Zoro slashed at the octopus and Sanji kicked the fish. But then, the strange thing was that when they did attack, it was like they were fighting giant balloons. They both seemed to pop in the air when out of them. The monster trio were all gasping for air, already looking tired after eating something as simple as that. Zoro was suddenly struggling for breath as he croaked out, this air, it's so thin, it's hard to breathe. What do you make of this? Sanji asked, looking over the dead fish, that was now flat as a pancake. I've never seen anything like it before, I'm not even sure if it's even a fish. That octopus thing was more like a big balloon, Luffy pointed to the remains of the creature. Yeah, Zoro agreed darkly, except balloons don't have teeth. How can there be fish up here in the clouds? Nami asked them all, clearly not understanding any of this as much as the rest of them. You said it best yourself, Robin answered her softly, basically it's an ocean in the sky. As they examined the dead fish, Usopp, who had been laying frozen on the deck, suddenly came back to life, now thrashing around. Sanji looked at him in annoyance, asking what the problem was now, and Usopp cried out as he reached his hand into his pants, there's something in my pants, and suddenly he pulled out blue fish before he fainted. Chopper cried out in worry as he ran over to see if he was alright, but Usopp just lay there in fetal position muttering, Sky Island scary, Sky Island scary. Not his day, Robin said before she noticed the strange fish on the floor. As Robin examined the fish with Nami, they came to the suggestion that these creatures seemed to have evolved to become flat or balloon-like to make themselves even lighter, but when their backs were turned, they saw that Sanji had already cooked it up and Luffy was gasping out how good it was. Nami, however, spotted them eating the fish and began yelling at them. Hey, we were still examining that. She began shouting at them until she tried it and suddenly her anger disappeared. Her taste buds melting as she took several more pieces and Luffy was telling Sanji they should cook the bigger fish. Meanwhile, Chopper was on one of Mary's broken wings and was looking through the binoculars, trying to find any signs of land. Hey guys, he suddenly called excitedly, there they. But his voice died in his throat so quickly that it was as if he hadn't said anything at all. He just continued to stare, turning bone white. Hey, what's wrong, Chopper? Sanji asked when he noticed that he had frozen up. But then Chopper dropped the binoculars and fell back, looking like he was about to faint. What's the deal? Do you see something out there? Sanji went on. But now Chopper was freaking out as he began to scream out when he saw a ship out there that had just been destroyed, and a guy running around the clouds with wings. Now he was heading straight towards them, so they had to get out of there. The straw hats were all looking skeptical, but when they looked up and saw that he was right, a man, tall and muscular, sporting a pair of hanging wings on his back, and various tribal tattoos across his left shoulder was heading straight towards them. They couldn't see his face, however, because he was wearing a large horn mask and was moving along the clouds as if he had little rockets attached to his feet. Check it out, he's right, Sanji said in mild surprise as he glanced out at the figure speeding towards them. As if this happened every day, there's a guy running around out there. He then called out to him, hey stop, what do you want? To destroy you, he yelled back with a deadly voice. Oh, is that all? Sanji asked, sounding ready for a fight as he moved into a fighting stance, with Zoro stepping up as well, snarling that he'd deal with him. Luffy came running up behind them, asking what was going on, but the guy with the mask was already there. The battle after that was short. Even though they had him outnumbered, this guy was able to fight all three of them off. Their movements were slow and sluggish, and so it was easy for he was able to kick all three of them down before he pointed his bazooka down at them, getting ready to fire. Chopper was screaming, sure that he was going to blow up their ship, but then something else came. That's enough, yelled an aged voice, and they looked up to see two figures coming right at them. They turned back to the battle to see that it was old man with a long white mustache and beard, dressed in armor made of solid metal, who had come to their rescue on the back of a large pink bird with red polka dots all over his body and horn-like ears. But the two obviously knew each other so well, they had no problem working together, and though he was old, he was light and nimble. He jumped from the bird's back and clashed his lance against the attacker's shield, sending the attacker back through the clouds. Gracefully, the old man landed on the side of the ship, with Nami now looking terrified. Oh, great, now who's this guy? The old man turned and stepped on the deck. Miss, he said blithely, you may call me the Sky Knight. The Sky Knight was looking around them, as if still expecting trouble, but soon sighed as he muttered in grim satisfaction, he's gone. What's going on here? Nami demanded, looking at the knight. Who was that guy? But rather than wait for an answer, she glared back at all three men who were lying there having a hard time breathing. And you, could you be any more useless? You've had number 3-1. Chopper was thanking the old man for saving them, who replied that he was just doing his duty and this was on the house. What gives? Sanji gasped and seemed unable to sit up. I feel so weak. Yeah, Luffy wheezed. I could barely move. Robin reminded them that it had to do with the thin air as the old man walked up the stairs, asking if they were Blue Sea people. Blue Sea people? Nami asked in confusion. What's that? And who are you? As I said, I'm the Sky Knight, he answered calmly, and Blue Sea people are what we call those who live below the clouds. I'm assuming you traveled here from Blue Sea. Yeah, that's right, Luffy said, looking up at him. Then that explains it, the Sky Knight answered in understanding as he sat on the railing, observing them all with interest. You have reached White Sea, 7,000 meters in the air. The Great White Sea, where I assume you're heading, is still further up, he went on, about 10,000 meters. Ordinary Blue Sea people can't possibly endure it here. Luffy was sitting up, giving his chest a little punch before he began to say that he thought he got used to it, which the others agreed. No, that's just not possible, the old man said, clearly sounding like he didn't believe them. Chopper then tried to ask him who attacked them and why, but the old man stated that they had other business to talk about. He told them that he was a soldier for hire, that the Great White Sea was dangerous since at least gorilla, like the one who attacked them, wouldn't hesitate to kill them, but if they bought a one whistle for 5 million extols, he would protect them. The straw hats were lost, clearly not having any idea what he was talking about. The old man was looking put out, saying there was a reasonable price and that he couldn't afford to lower it any more than that. But when Sanji asked what he was talking about, saying that they didn't know anything about extols with his whistle, it was the old man who had lost his time. You don't know? He asked in puzzlement. I don't understand. You came here from the summit of High West, didn't you? Surely you must have passed an island or two? I still don't know what you're talking about, Luffy said to Gonfall. Wait, let me get this straight. Nami yelled up at him, now sounding truly ticked off this time. You're saying that there was another way we could have gotten up here, where you would have passed an island or two, as in there's more than one Sky Island. What? Gonfall said, realization coming over his face. Don't tell me you traveled by way of, but it was Robin who interrupted him. We rode up here on the north upstream. My word, he said in amazement, staring at them all with a great deal more interest. That monstrous current? So there are still souls in the world brave enough to make the attempt? Nami was now crying. I knew it, she whispered. Then we risked our lives for nothing. To vent some of her anger, she grabbed hold of Luffy, shaking him violently as she began to scream at him and how she was going to kill him for almost getting him killed and how if they had asked around a little more, they could have found another way up here. The Sky Knight asked them if they lost any of their crewmates. No, we all made it. Luffy yelled up at him. Then you can consider yourselves fortunate. He answered him. If you had taken another route, one or two of you would have survived, but the rest of you would have perished. That's the gamble. By way of enough upstream, either everyone dies or everyone survives, he stated. Those will be only two possible outcomes. Not many are willing to accept such an all-or-nothing risk, the Sky Knight continued, especially these days. If nothing else, I see that you are a navigator with exceptional bravery and skill. Usopp smirked, trying to take the credit for that before he changed his mind as Nami grabbed his face finally. But the old knight was now looking deeply impressed, and was surprised to see him pull out a whistle and toss it down to them. Should you find yourselves in danger, you have it to blow it and I will come to your aid, he called as he turned around dramatically. As I said, normally I would charge 5 million extols, but for today please consider this as my gift to you. Nami quickly asked his name. The old man turned back to her. I am Gonfall, and this is my partner, Pierre. He gestured to the bird next to him. The bird only got weirder, for as the Sky Knight jumped on his back and bade them farewell, the bird transformed. A horse with wings that maintained the pink body and red polka dots but with white feathers. It turned out that he had eaten the horse fruit, Pegasus model. It was a bit of a letdown for them all as they watched him fly off, having expected to see it look cooler. Even Luffy thought that for a Pegasus, that was super lame. In the end, Robin said, once the duo were both gone, he really didn't tell us anything, did he? They all agreed as they left a little whistle on the deck. As they began to look around for a way to go, Luffy stated that they should call the knight back and ask him. Nami, Chopper, and Usopp all jumped forward and began to fight over it, struggling over which one of them should have it. It was really quite funny to hear them fighting over which one of them was weakest and why they should be the one to carry it, with Luffy, naturally, just wanting to be the one to blow it. In the end, since none of them could agree on anything, Nami fixed the whistle to the mast, saying that if anyone got into trouble, all they had to do was run over here and blow it. Now it was fair to them all, which Usopp and Chopper agreed. Nami then turned her wrath on Robin and the boys, telling them that they were not to blow the whistle under any circumstance. Luffy groaned out that he wanted to blow it just once, with Nami threatening that if he so much as touched the whistle, he'd be swimming with the skyfish, and they all promised they wouldn't touch it. Once that was settled, they noticed what appeared to be a waterfall in the distance and decided to head for that. They sailed easily through the clouds, much smoother than on water, but as they went further on, they soon found their path blocked by clouds so thick that they couldn't move. Those big clouds seemed to be floating on top of the ocean, sort of like icebergs, Sanji said pointed out as they tried to figure out what the problem was. So what, they're cloudbergs? Usopp asked skeptically. Well, there's obviously something different about them, Nami said as Luffy offered to transform into a sparrow, fly over and grab a piece, but when he did, it ended up bouncing back like a ball. Seeing Luffy's talons bounce back was all it took and soon he turned into his human form and jumped right onto them, bouncing around on it like it was a giant marshmallow. Usopp and Chopper quickly joined him and they were all bouncing around, loving everything here. Getting frustrated with them, Nami was telling them to quit playing around and that they should be looking for a way to get around them. But Usopp solved that problem. He was standing near the top of the cloud and was looking off in the distance when he obviously spied something. Hey, Usopp yelled as he and Luffy both came running back down to them. There's a gate up there. A gate? Nami repeated, sounding skeptic. Yeah, Luffy yelled joyfully as he jumped down on the deck with them all. A big one? It's up ahead underneath that waterfall thingy. Chopper also jumped down from the marshmallow cloud, crashing into Usopp's head, but he was having so much fun that he didn't seem to notice at all even as Usopp yelled in pain. So there's a man-made structure in the middle of the clouds? Sanji asked as they continued sailing on. At this point, I'm not sure anything you find up here would surprise me, Robin answered him. After a little arguing, they soon reached the waterfall on top of the cloudbergs, and just at the base was a large and elaborate gold and white gate there, the name, Heaven's Gate, carved right above it. Yep, that's a gate alright, Sanji stated, in a little impressed tone. Hold on, Usopp said nervously once he read the name. Am I reading this right? Heaven's Gate, what's that about? Sounds like a place you go when you die. Yeah, Zoro asked Usopp's worry, an evil smirk on his face. Well, now that you mention it, maybe we are dead, you ever think about that? Ha, Sanji stated, thinking that over, you know that would go a long way to explaining this weird place. But I don't want to be dead, Chopper screamed out. Luffy just laughed, who cares, we're here aren't we? Wherever this gate goes, I'm going. Nami was getting really angry at the boys for trying to scare them and hit them over the heads to tell them to start acting serious, but as they neared the gate, a very old woman came outside, something in her hand, some kind of camera, and began to take pictures. They were all startled by her as she called to them all that she was Amazon, the Heaven's Gate Inspector, and she wanted to know what their business was. Sightseeing, warmongering, other. I guess it's kinda like sightseeing, Nami called. We want to go to the Sky Island, Luffy added, looking unsure as what to say, it's past this gate right? Can we say all the above? Zoro offered. The old woman said that it didn't make much difference to her, but that they were to pay 7 billion extol for the entrance fee if they wanted to go any further. The Straw Hats started to quietly talk amongst themselves that they had no idea what extol was, and even if they did, they doubted that they had enough for that. Usopp pissed the others that this had to be some kind of scam, but Nami covered his mouth to shut him up and instead asked Amazon what would happen if it didn't pay. You may still pass, Amazon stated. Usopp almost choked on that answer. The choice is yours, she answered. I certainly won't try to stop you. When they looked startled, she added, my job description doesn't require me to actually guard the gate. I'm really here to ask your intentions. Well, that settles it, Luffy called agreeably. We won't go to the Sky Islands. But we don't have money, so we can't pay you, Usopp added. Very well, she said. The 7 of you then, Luffy, still looking surprised at how easily she was letting them go, answered yes, but they still needed her to tell them how to get there. Rather than tell them, 2 giant pinchers came out of nowhere and grabbed down on their broken wings. As they screamed what it was, she answered that it was the Great White Seas Express Lobster. Just then they shot forward. The creature was taking them up waterfall at breakneck speeds. When they left the Dixie Road, spiraling up to the heavens in front of them, and they began to ride it, the Milky Rose. Soon they saw the sign that read, Godland Thepia, but then they saw a bright light from above them and Chopper cried out, pointing at the exit, but Luffy was grinning as he screamed out excitedly, this isn't the exit, it's the entrance. Up and up they rode, and when they burst through the clouds and were in the right sunlight, blinking through the blindness of it all, there was, like they were dreaming. In the bright sunshine there was an island made up of clouds, filled with sparkling buildings and roads made up of what looked like cotton candy. There were several small clouds that left shops and trees, and there were several large roads made up of clouds and embedded with what looked like twisted up vines across the smaller islands. It was gorgeous. The Merry came to a cloudy beach with a little bump and they heard Luffy took a deep breath. I can smell the adventure, he gasped out, his eyes wide, potent as a seaweed in summer. And he then jumped, with Usopp right behind him running ashore on the soft clouds, and that's how it was. They were like a bunch of little kids during a snow day. They were running around the marshmallow-like beach, with Chopper rolled around, looking like he was drifting off as Usopp began building a cloud castle. Luffy was hanging from a tree, laughing as he pulled some strange fruit off the tree and almost ended up breaking his teeth on how hard they were. This is why we came here. Nami laughed as Sanji ran around with flowers for the girls before they heard the sound of gentle music being played. Looking around, they saw a very pale girl with long blonde hair tied in 2 braided pigtails. She also had what looked like antennas sticking out at the top of her head and miniature wings on her back. They all stared at her, with Sanji naturally claiming that she was an angel. She played her harp for a few more minutes before she lifted them. The girl slowly turned with a smile at the Straw Hats, as she had been expecting them. Peso, she said with a smile and a soft voice. The Straw Hats stared at her in confusion as they tried to figure it out, but then the angelic girl called to a furry creature they didn't notice before. Sue, come here, she called. A solid white fox with squinted eyes and mouth that looked a little like a snap happily went over to the girl, flicking her bushy tail. As she walked out to Sue as well she addressed the Straw Hats, did you come from the Blue Sea World? If that's what you call it, Luffy called in front of the voice. We sailed up river clouds to get here. Speaking of here, is this your home? Yes, it sure is, she said, putting the harp on her back, and I'd like to welcome you to Stepia's Angel Beach. She noticed the large fruit in Luffy's hand and she laughed a little sweetly as she offered to help him open it. She showed them that you had to cut through the underside to get the sweet stuff inside. My name is Conus, she told them as she picked up the fox and ate it, and this little one's name is Sue. She's a cloud fox. If you need anything at all, please, let me be of service. Sanji, naturally, tried to start giving her romantic words, until Nami pulled his ear and threw him down to get him to behave himself. But she beamed at Conus as she walked over to her and started to ask questions. But they didn't get too far with that as Conus' father showed up on a waiver on the sea, and almost crashed into them as he tried to stop. He was almost bald, but had those strange antennae sticking out his head, with a round beard around his mouth. However, he was just as, if not even more, hospitable as his daughter and he even invited them to their house for lunch. Nami stared in amazement at Waver and asking Conus' dad, Pagaya, all about it. They were in a bright, wide open house that overlooked the sea of clouds. It was very strange for them all to see the ocean become white instead of blue, but at the same time, this place was so welcoming that it was almost like home. Most of the crew was in his room with Conus, and they could hear the sounds of Sanji and Pagaya in the kitchen making lunch. Nami meanwhile had taken Pagaya's Waver out for a ride. Conus was explaining the working of dials, how there were strange devices made from the remains of particular shellfish, which have the ability to store energy and matter. The shellfish remains are gathered from the shallows near the shore of Wide White Sea, and how there are many different types of dials that store various things depending on their type, and how the content can be released by pressing the apex on the other side of the dial. As long as they're not used for damage, dials seem to be capable of storing their contents indefinitely. Sanji then came in with Pagaya, carrying trays of food that they hadn't seen before, and they began to enjoy their meal, marveling at the exact taste. Sanji went to the window, staring out at the sea, and asked them where Nami was. I think she's riding Waver, Luffy said through a mouthful of food. I don't see her, Sanji spoke up, now sounding worried, and Usopp told him to relax, that she probably just went too far out for them to see her. I'm worried, Conus said nervously to her father. Do you think she's okay? I have my concerns, he answered back, sounding apprehensive, but I can't say one way or another. Luffy noticed the uneasy looks and asked what the problem was. Conus looked at him and answered, in the clouds, there's a place called the Upper Yard that no one is ever allowed to step foot on. It's not too far away, it will only be a short trip by Waver from here. I'm afraid your friend Nami may have set ashore there out of curiosity. What's so bad about this place that no one's ever allowed to go there? Usopp asked after a large swallow of food. Is it full of monsters? It's sacred ground, Conus answered him. Robin was looking at Conus in real surprise. But it's so much more than that, Conus said, her face darkening slightly. It's the island where God lives. There's actually a god, Luffy exclaimed loudly, and he lives on an island up here that no one's allowed to walk on? You mean the god? Chopper asked startled. The same one from all the old stories, and he actually lives on the island next door to you? He does, Conus said almost regretfully. I'm sure that everybody noticed the big sign that said Godland Thepia. That means that this land is ruled by the almighty god Enru. Sanji looked like he couldn't believe that God would have such a stupid name. He knows and sees everything, Conus went on. He's truly omniscient. He keeps his all-seeing eyes on everyone, always. The Straw Hats were all staring at her, wondering if what she was saying was true, but Pat Zoro merely leaned back skeptically. God, huh? He asked. Wait, you mean you don't believe in God? Chopper asked, but why? Zoro explained, well for me, it's not a matter of belief. I don't see proof of one way or the other. And to be honest, I don't really care to, but if you want to, go right ahead. It's not up to me to deny anyone their little beliefs. Sanji then looked back to Conus and asked that if this god lived so close to them, then she must have seen him before. Her eyes widened at once, trying to say absolutely not, that she knew that the Upper Yard was a place where only God could live. but the way she spoke made it sound as though she was reciting something that she had memorized countless times before. I see, Luffy said, and a dangerous sparkle was in his eyes, a place we're not allowed to go to no matter what. Usopp noticed the danger signs. He screamed in terror before he grabbed hold of his captain's vest and began to shake him hard. I've seen the look in your eyes before, Luffy, and it always gets us into trouble. When the lady tells us not to go because it's sacred or whatever, then that's exactly what she means. We cannot go there. I'm not letting you drag me down with you this time. Hey, Luffy said in a falsely innocent voice that none of them believed. I know that we're not supposed to go there. Come on, you really think I'm the kind of guy who would do that? Without hesitation, the Straw Hats all said, yes, absolutely, with Robin giggling at it all. But then Luffy asked Conus that if his really was God, shouldn't he forgive him no matter what, and that walking around on the upper yard didn't seem too serious to him. Conus tried to tell him that any law set by Enro was always met with punishment. Robin then asked her what these punishments were, and Pagaya told them that they believed that anyone who set foot in the upper yard never returns. Everyone WHO goes there dies. Usopp yelled out as the cigarette fell from Sanji's mouth when he finally understood why they were so worried about Nami going out far. I must admit, Pagaya said softly, I'm as worried about Nami as all of you are. I hope she hasn't sailed too close to the upper yard. Sanji spun around and began screaming Nami's name out the window, as if hoping she could hear him, and Luffy was already saying that they should go out and look for her. You don't care about saving Nami, Usopp yelled, shaking him one again. You just want to satisfy your twisted desire to do the exact opposite of what you've been told. Soon they were all back on Andal Island Beach. The Straw Hats, Conus, and Pagaya were all standing in front of them, where a large group of men with uniforms consisted of light purple t-shirts, blue, white cloud-shaped spots, white trousers. Well, look at what we have here. The man in the front, wearing a long cape, obviously their leader. As I looked at the 6 present Straw Hats, you must be the blue sea dwellers who have illegally entered the land of Thepia, prepared to have the full weight of heaven's judgment brought down upon you. These men served as Thepia's lowest level of law enforcement, white berets. You're calling them criminals? Pagaya asked in astonishment as Conus looked fearfully at them all. Luffy asked the two of them what they meant by legal entry, and Pagaya responded that it just wasn't a good thing. The captain pulled out a stack of photos from his coat and stated that Amazon took those photos and there was no point in denying anything. As Pagaya tried to explain to the white berets that they weren't the criminals they thought they were, Sanji quickly got annoyed and asked for what felt the 100th time, just what this whole thing was about. Does this have to do with that ridiculous 1 billion external entrance fee? Robin asked, but we didn't pay her a thing. But didn't the old lady say that we didn't have to pay for it? Usopp asked, it's not like she tried to stop us. Yeah, that's true, Chopper said. Enough. The captain, whose name they learned was McKinley, said loudly, there's no sense in denying it, now fess up. When no one spoke, he went on, don't worry, you need not become panicked just yet. According to heaven's judgment, legal entry is only an 11th degree crime. Once you accept your punishment, which will be minimal, you become legal tourists on the spot and may go about your business. Well, you should have told us that sooner, Sanji said, but he sounded highly suspicious about the whole thing before he demanded to know what they had planned for them as far as punishment before they accepted anything. A mere slap on the wrist, McKinley answered. All you need to do is pay 10 times the entry fee. Of course, if you pay immediately, we forget this little episode never happened. So 10 billion per person, times 7 people, makes your total 70 billion extols. Cash only. Usopp was calling out to know just how much that was embarrassed. McKinley told them that the payment would have been 7 million berries, and Sanji dropped his cigarette once again as he yelled out, get real, do you realize how expensive that is? After risking our lives coming to this place, why should you have to pay a stupid fee just to enter your precious city? We can't agree to that. You brought this upon yourself, McKinley yelled, still in that annoyingly loud voice. If you had just paid the 700,000 berries in the first place, we wouldn't be having this talk. That's still way too much money, Sanji yelled, and the others all nodded at that. But the white berets were clearly not interested in listening anymore. This is your first warning, McKinley yelled threateningly. The white berets serve under the vessels of Almighty Enro. Arguing with us will only raise the number of her crime. The Straw Hats all chose to ignore what McKinley was saying, talking among themselves about what it was they should do. With the white berets watching them, Usopp managed to buy them time by convincing Luffy that they should wait for Nami where they were in case she came back for them. But as they waited, every minor thing they did seemed to raise their crime level, such as the broken waver they brought with them, which they were accused of destroying before stealing. This waver looks downright abused. McKinley yelled as Luffy told Pagaya that he hoped that he could fix it. If I find out you're responsible for this damage, you're looking at a 10th degree crime, destruction of Sky Island property by a blue sea dweller. Pagaya tried to explain that he was the one who broke it as Luffy added that this one belonged to them anyway. McKinley looked skeptical as he went in and went on. Is that right? Sounds suspicious to me. I was under the impression that waivers didn't exist in the blue sea world. If this one was stolen from Thepia, the degree of her crime will increase. It's not stolen, Luffy snarled. Want to fight about it? And it went downhill from there. Usopp was running around, trying desperately to keep the fragile peace between them and the white berets, hoping that Nami would be able to bail them out when she got back. But when he tried a simple distraction, fishing, they ended up catching a rare sky fish that tried to eat Conus, and Zoro attacked it. The white berets declared that this fish was so rare that it was legal to catch it and their crime level was now the 9th degree. Why is that a crime? Chopper screamed out just as angrily. That thing was gonna eat Zoan. Zoro saved her life. But the white berets just seemed to be glad for any excuse to declare that they were in trouble. Even when it turned out that Zoro didn't kill the stupid fish, Luffy still tried to eat it, which went to their 8th degree crime. After they sent it off on its way, Luffy, Zoro, and even Chopper were all growing more and more irritated with the white berets, and even when they tried to take a nap and started to snore, their crime only increased. The Straw Hats had just about reached their limit. Luffy was all for beating them up and Zoro was already getting his swords out of that order. Usopp was doing his best to try and prevent a fight breaking out, but they all knew that these guys weren't going to take it for much longer. But just when things were getting serious, Nami finally returned, calling out to them from the waiver. Luffy, promise you won't start any trouble, okay? Don't know if I can keep that promise, he yelled back. Hey Nami, Usopp screamed out desperately. We need you to fork up 7 million berries from her stash to pay for all the fines we got. Oh good, so we paid the fine and we're clear, she called before she seemed to realize what he said, and a very dangerous smile came over her look. She suddenly spit out and rammed the waiver right at McKinley's face, screaming out, you're ripping us off. Time seemed to freeze for a moment before McKinley was sent flying off, crashing through the ground and lay there with blood dripping down his face. Nami brought the waiver back to its owners before she turned to the crew and said that it was time to make them feel scarce, telling them that Enro wasn't someone they wanted to mess with. As they all looked over at McKinley laying there, Zoro asked Pagaya, sounding like he already knew the answer, I assume that's another crime on our records. Oh yes, Pagaya said fearfully, quite, nothing unofficial is a crime of the 5th degree. 5th huh? Usopp asked, not looking too worried, could be worse. That's not good at all, Conus said, shaking Lil. Once you're found guilty of committing a 5th degree crime, Almighty Enro will banish you to the land of the drifting clouds. Usopp asked what was so bad about it and Luffy commented that it sounded like fun to him. It's a death sentence, she cried out, you die. We die, Chopper, Usopp, and Nami cried out in horror, looking close running to the Mary and getting the heck out of here. You got him good, Nami, Zoro stated as he pointed at McKinley, who was still out, and the other white berets were examining him worriedly. But come on, a death sentence in God's land? That's quite the contradiction. But it's the truth, Conus cried out, sounding close to screaming. This is very serious. They'll put you in your ship on a small cloud and set you adrift in the sea with no hope of rescue or escape. You'll eventually die a very slow and painful death. It's terrible. Sanji shivered at the thought, knowing how painful that would be, and she would be right. There wouldn't be any hope of escaping this situation. After all, who would think to look for you on the cloud? Robin thought that over before mentioning that was probably what happened to that ship that fell on top of them. When they looked to her, she reminded them of the St. Brice, the incident that started them on their quest to find Thebia, and for all they knew the crew could have been punished just like that over 200 years ago. At those words, Nami went deathly pale and went to the other white berets and tried to trick them into believing that she hit their captain by accident when she lost control of Waver. Luffy started to say they looked like she knew what she was doing to him, with Usopp having to drag him away, hissing at him to keep his mouth shut. Pagaya stepped in and suggested that they should carry McKinley up to his house to treat him. Once understanding their priorities, the white berets, for some reason, crawled away before warning the Straw Hats not to go anywhere. Once they were gone, Konis told the Straw Hats that she truly didn't believe that they were as bad as they were made out to be, but she screamed at them that they should take the chance to leave before it was too late. As Konis went running off, Nami quickly explained to the others that they were going to do what she suggested. That she saw the island and it was full of monsters. Luffy was looking excited at the very thought, but Nami snapped at him that they were leaving now, and if they hurried they shouldn't cause Konis or Pagaya any trouble. Since they were white berets, they shouldn't be suspected of helping them. Robin, Usopp, and Chopper were all climbing on board, with Sanji and Zoro halfway out as well, but Luffy hadn't moved, staring at Angel Beach with Nami asking what the problem was. Why are we running away? Luffy asked her, his voice oddly emotionless. Because we're in trouble, she said loudly as if it was obvious. So what? We're always in trouble, he said, in that same calm tone. Nami tried reasoning with him by saying that if they didn't leave then Konis and Pagaya could get arrested too. But they haven't done anything. Luffy stated coldly. Whoever arrests them is an idiot. Nami was staring at Luffy, muttering that she already knew that, but however Usopp interrupted her, yelling that they could argue on the boat, and they were getting ready to leave. Nami nodded at Usopp's words and understood that they were out of time. Glaring back at Luffy she yelled loudly and slowly so that he couldn't open his ear. How many times do I have to tell you? Staying here means more trouble for everybody. But Luffy was still calm. In fact he was starting to creep some of them out by how calm he was here. Before he answered, we're in trouble no matter what. Nami was looking at him in surprise, probably just as confused by his sudden tone as they were, but then they heard Konis' voice call out behind them, save yourselves, please go. All of them spun around to see that the white berets were back. McKinley was on his feet, his face heavily bruised and showed signs of former bleeding, but he was smirking at them triumphantly, as if they had just caught a bunch of kids breaking the rules, which in a way they did. But he warned Konis that if she said anything else, he'll label them as accomplices, so they had no choice but to keep their mouths shut. But then the white berets began their attack on them. Luffy told Nami to head back to the ship, which she did without complaint as the white berets created long, purple clouds from them to ride on with skates that were powered by jet dials. The fight was fun to watch to say the least, if very short. Luffy jumped in the middle of the group of berets, turning into his namesake when he landed. The monkey man gave a cry of monkey mayhem, and he unleashed a flurry of punches and kicks of increased speed that went every direction due to his body's natural flexibility. As expected, Sanji laughed before he noticed the tip of an arrow aimed from the monkey idiot, sticking through the purple clouds. That's dirty, attacking when her back's turned, Zoro said as he and Sanji took out the man with the arrows easily. The monster trio were now turned back to look at Mary, asking how their money situation was and they learned that they were practically broke, only enough to last them one more day at most. McKinley was on his feet again, though barely as he smirked evilly at them all. Sorry criminals, but you have no chance of escape, he declared and the Straw Hats all looked back at him. You should have behaved and done what I told you to do. Of all the upholders of law here in Thebia, we white berets were the most lenient, McKinley went on. However, they're not nearly as forgiving. He laughed cruelly as he declared, congratulations, you are now considered second-degree criminals. You can try to cry for mercy, but you will all be judged. He pointed a finger dramatically at them, by the priests of Abriart, HESO. Later, the Straw Hats were there with Konis and Pagaya, but the white berets had cleared the beach, with Luffy glaring at their retreating backs. What's wrong with those guys? A lot of you asked me, Zoro yawned, wondering when they would get to see more fighting. It was starting to get boring. Forget them, Nami yelled, turning them back to the matter at hand. That old lady ratted us out. She lied to us. She said it was okay for us to pass through, but when we did, they accused us of legal entry. That's flat-out fraud. Exactly, Usopp said, but then even if we were told we couldn't pass, we would have just forced our way through anyway. I mean, how was that little old lady gonna stop us? Nami told Usopp to shut up as Pagaya told them roughly that since they were now second-degree criminals, he and Konis couldn't help them anymore and moved back far away, as if afraid of catching something. But Nami didn't seem upset at them before she turned her anger to Luffy, who still wanted to go to the upper yard. She began giving him a pounding, telling him that they didn't know who or what Enver was, but his powers were deadly and that she wasn't going anywhere near there again. It was here the Straw Hats realized that they didn't know how to get back down. Usopp turned to Konis and her father, asking if there was any way back to the Blue Sea. Konis told them that there was, but that meant that they had to go to a place called Cloud End. It was far to the east of here and they had to cross the White Sea. Some of them were looking relieved at that, but naturally Luffy was whining that he didn't want to go yet. Your only other option is to stay here and get sentenced to death, Usopp hissed. What's the problem with that? Zoro asked with a shrug. Nami lost whatever patience she had as she snapped at Luffy that she didn't want him causing Konis and their dad any more trouble, and even if they left now, there was no guarantee that they would make a clean escape. As the crew started packing up to leave with Nami, Chopper, Robin, and Zoro at the ship, it was decided that Luffy, Sanji, and Usopp would have food and whatever supplies from Pagaya's home. They followed Rube up to the house and Miri watched as they packed. Sanji was mixing box lunches and Usopp was taking some spare tools and parts that Pagaya said they no longer needed.
Usopp was walking to the window. Konis had walked in at that moment, and Sanji was the first to present her a beautiful box lunch made just for her. But as they were getting ready to leave, Usopp was yelling from the window, screaming that there was something wrong with the ship. Sanji and Luffy jumped to their feet, asking what was wrong as they stood together, staring out at the sea. Usopp just pointed and they could see that the ship was rocking violently back and forth.
Sanji had taken a small telescope from Usopp's bag and looked through it, screaming that he could see Nami on deck. When his face suddenly turned blue, some of them had become anxious that something happened, but instead he whispered, wait, why in the world is she wearing a t-shirt? Usopp smacked him, screaming out, I'm pretty sure we've got more pressing concerns right now. Guys look, Luffy yelled. The ship started moving. He jumped up so that he was crouching on the sill, but why? They wouldn't just leave us here, would they? The ship was not only moving backwards, but a large and dark shadow appeared beneath them. Whoa, I don't think I've ever seen a ship sailing backwards before, Luffy yelled. But Usopp gasped, pointing dramatically, but they haven't even set the sails yet. With everyone's attention focused on the ship, most of them didn't notice how Konis sighed miserably behind them. Luffy glanced back at her for a moment before Usopp gasped. It was then that a lobster, at least twice the size of one that brought them up the Milky Road, had burst out through the sea and beneath the ship. With Mary on its back, they were carried off at high speeds. Before the ship was out of their sights, they could hear Nami's familiar voice screaming out at the top of her lungs before they faded away. Help us, her voice echoed. Sanji, Usopp. And then they were out of their sights. There was stunned silence all around them. No one could think of anything to say before Sanji muttered about the t-shirt again. You're still thinking about that, Usopp screamed before he turned to Luffy and began ran to try and rescue the others. I wonder, Luffy said thoughtfully, where are they going? Where are they going? Usopp repeated, trying to calm down. Yes, right. I got nothing, Luffy said, and it truly looked bad until Pagaya had a very odd choke in his throat and they looked at him as he jumped. Pagaya informed them that the others were being taken to the sacrificial altar. Say what? Sanji gasped in horror. You don't mean that Nami and Robin and the rest? The rest, Usopp smacked him before Sanji went on, shaking in rage, are gonna be sacrificed to that one we got. That creep, he better not touch a hair on my pretty Nami's head. Pagaya then went on, telling them the rest that in Heaven's judgment, there were actually two types of criminal punishments, being taken to the altar and waiting to die by priest was first, but the second was a challenge in which the rest of their crew were now hostages in Enro's hands and they had to try to rescue them before they died. Hostages, Usopp gasped, getting what Pagaya was trying to say. I'm afraid I must tell you, Pagaya said grimly, that the ones who would receive the punishment are the three of you standing before me. Wait, what are you trying to say? Sanji asked, but it was clear from his tone that he didn't understand, though he didn't want to admit it. If we only had a map, Pagaya said, and Usopp quickly turned to the old one that he had in his bag and showed it to them. Pagaya showed them where the altar was, and how to get there. They were to head to the upper yard where the priests were waiting for them. There were 4 of them in all, and they had to get through them to get their friends back. Luffy was smirking, finally, a little action. After a few tense minutes, the 3 of them all had large bags on their back with Konas was leading them through a crowded street, at least it was crowded before they arrived. The angels on either side shied away from them as if they were all carrying something contagious, their faces held fear and anxiety. Konas was telling them that this was called Lovely Street, and she started to go into some real details about it. Sanji was especially depressed that the girls were shunning him and was softly groaning about it. As they followed them, some of them noticed out of the corners of their eyes, several of white berets always following them, as if making sure that they were heading to the right place. Luffy was fascinated by everything he saw, stopping to look at everything until Sanji snapped at them, "Hey Luffy, when you're done fooling around there's still the matter of rescuing Nami and the others. If you don't get serious, and soon, they're gonna be sacrificed, you know that?" But Luffy didn't seem concerned at all. "You worry too much," he said, "they're fine. Don't forget, Zoro with them." "Yeah, like we can really count on that guy," Sanji said doubtfully. "I just hope the ship hasn't sustained any more damage," Usopp muttered worried. "I mean, she's had more than her fair share of abuse lately." But Luffy suddenly ran right through them. His eyes set on something a little ways ahead. It appeared to have been some kind of statue made of mud, encased behind glass. Konas answered for him, "This is Earth. You might say, it represents the eternal yearnings of the people of the sky." Luffy said that it sounded crazy that they worshipped this mud statue. Konas laughed a little. "Well, I guess it would be difficult for someone from the Blue Sea to understand." She then looked up, realizing where they were. "Oh, we're almost in docks, right this way." They followed her past all sorts of ships, of different sizes and colors. Of course Luffy wanted the biggest gondola that he could find, but instead she led them to a tiny ship with a figurehead of a crow and a red umbrella above their heads. Presenting the crow, Konas said cheerfully, "You're getting me right," Luffy asked her. "Wait all, crows don't even swim," Sanji said slowly. They watched as Konas explained that she used this to get around until she learned to drive a waver, so she had no problem lending it to them now. She then led them a little further ahead, telling them to take gate number 2, that would lead them to the upper yard. That was when they noticed that she seemed to have a lot on her mind. Luffy seemed to have noticed this as he frowned in concern and asked, "Hey, Konas?" "Yes," she asked nervously. "You've been trembling ever since we left," Luffy said, his tone now serious. "Is everything okay?" Her whole body was trembling slightly, and she was suddenly unable to look at them as her eyes widened at Luffy's words. "Is it that noticeable?" she asked. "Yeah," Luffy said, surprisingly soft, it's like you're scared or something. Sanji at once started to say how sweet it was of her to worry about them, but then Usopp brought up another good question. "Speaking of being worried," he said, "are you and Pagaya gonna be alright? I mean, everyone in town is avoiding us left with late, but you're leading us around, lending us your boat, giving us directions, is helping us gonna get you in trouble. Doesn't that make you like our accomplices?" Luffy noticed how pale she had become. "Konas," he said gently, "don't cry. You're gonna be fine, okay? You should have told us you were scared. Really, we could have just come here on our own." "No," she said, unable to look at them. It's not." Sweat was falling from her face and she was shaking worse than ever. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Don't you get it? Even after I told you how terrifying Upper Yard is, I still lead you here. I even got you a boat and told you which route to take. Don't you find that odd? Is it obvious what's going on here?" Out of sight, McKinley started yelling at Konas not to say anything foolish before he hit as a straw hat flipped around from the source of his voice. The others in town slowly began to back even farther away, as if there was a bomb about to go off. Suddenly she fell to her knees. "Just run away, please," she begged. She started crying as she apologized over and over again. The citizens were all freaking out at her tears, yelling at her, demanding to know what she was doing. Konas was already confessing everything. She revealed to them that she was the one who called the Skyfish to take Mary and the crew away. "You mean that thing that took Nami and the others away?" Sanji yelled out. "You called it Konas?" Konas continued to cry, telling them that while they were inside talking to her dad, she went aboard and lied to the others about a current that leads to Cloud End, and she hadn't raised anchor, which was a signal for that lobster, and took them away. Konas finally cried out the reason that she did it. "Once we know someone's a criminal, we must lead them to Upper Yard. If we don't, then the penalty is death." The boys' faces were frozen, darkened as she sobbed openly. "It's our duty," she croaked out. "It's the duty of every citizen." "That's crazy," Usopp gasped out. "I know," Konas confessed. "Tears falling fast. I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner." "Wait a second," Luffy said, his voice full of anger, and now he was trembling like Konas had been, only out of fury. "You're saying that they forced you to lead us all here?" Two choked up to speak. She merely nodded. The 3 of their faces still dark. Luffy started, "If that's true," and suddenly all 3 of them were yelling. "Then why even tell you us at all?" Konas, stunned by their words, stopped crying and stared up at them, clearly not understanding. "Are you nuts?" Luffy asked, grabbing her shoulder. "Now your life's in danger." Suddenly all the townspeople were all running now, looking just as terrified as they cried out that the judgment was coming. Just then the skies above them opened up and there was a bright light above them. They looked up and there was a pillar of light flying down towards them. Luffy saw it coming and his face turned deadly white as he grabbed hold of Konas as they ran for it. But it was too big. They would never hope to avoid it even when Luffy swished out Perchy legs. The force of the impact was so great that it seemed to shake the whole island, blinding them all as they covered their faces from the brilliance of them all. But as soon as it had come, it disappeared. Shaking at the display of power they just saw, the citizens all stood there, staring at the damage that had been caused. There was so much smoke that they couldn't see anything in front of them for a moment. Sanji and Usopp were both alive and untouched, but they were screaming in horror, calling for Luffy and Konas where there was an enormous crater there. For a horrible second, they truly thought the worst for Luffy and Konas until they heard another voice from above them call, "Do not fear, they are both safe." They looked up and there was Godfall, on the back of the air, with the 2 safely on his back. The citizens around were staring at him as Usopp said, "Weird old man?" "Me? Weird?" Godfall asked humorously. "No, I'm a Skynet friend, and this one's on the house." He tossed Luffy down to them, but promised that he would keep Konas safe with him, that he gave them his word. Luffy stood up and gave him his thanks, and after he helped them like this, they truly believed that she would be safe for now. But as Godfall looked down at them, his expression was unusually stony as he asked them, "Now that you've seen the scope of Enro's power and anger, what are you going to do next?" "The same thing we were going to do from the start," Luffy called. "Go to Upper Yard and rescue our friends." Godfall was looking at him with new respect as he said, "I see, may luck be with you." And with that, he took Konas and they headed off across the city. The 3 waited until they watched them fly off into the distance before they head back over to the Crow and threw their bags into it. Usopp was already starting to give them words of farewell before Sanji pulled him into the boat and he looked ready to cry. Luffy got behind the wheel and said eagerly as he started up, "Alright, Upper Yard, here we come." The citizens behind them were all gaping at the three of them in amazement, as if they couldn't believe what they were seeing, as they pushed off and head off towards the gate and down the Milky Road, towards their friends, and closer to danger. I really hope Conus is alright, Usopp said worriedly, looking behind them at the ever-shrinking Angel Island. You know she's going to get grief when Wyberries catch up with her, and it's our own stupid fault. She'd be okay if she hadn't helped us, and I'm not sure we can trust that Finite. He pretty much gives me the creeps. He's kinda old and weird, but he doesn't seem like that bad of a guy, Luffy said. There was no other choice, Sanji said regretfully. I want to protect her, but it's not like we could have brought her along with us. Well, then she probably is in less danger without us. Usopp admitted, not able to think of anything to disagree with that. Usopp then counted off, sacrificial altars, ordeals. From the sound of it I wish I was the one flying off with the old geezer. The boat continued down a little slope and they could just make out the upper yard. As they drew nearer, some of them gasped when they saw it. Hey guys, Usopp cried out in shock. Where did that huge forest come from? Is it the upper yard? Sanji yelled as Usopp went to the map, trying to make sense of this. Though the upper yard reminded them a great deal of the middle forest in Goa, only the trees were easily at least twice as big. Onwards they went, Luffy admiring the foliage, and talking about how much he wanted to climb them. A little further ahead, they spotted the statues up ahead, similar to the one they saw on Lovely Street, only they seemed to be much older and made of solid stone rather than mud. There were also several torches that marked the entry. Look, the entrance, Luffy yelled excitedly. Well, this is it, Usopp, Sanji said. If you're gonna chicken out, now's the time. Actually, if you don't mind, Usopp said, I was kinda thinking I'd like to go back. Luffy laughed at Usopp. Too late, then why do you ask me? He screamed at the two as they laughed at how freaked out he was. They soon passed the statues. Usopp's face was contorted with fear as they sailed on, the faces looking like they were leering at them the whole way. As they went further on, they saw the remains of ships scattered on either side of them, each of them run aground and sliced right in half as a giant knife cut them. Just then they heard the sounds of a large bird somewhere in the distance that startled Usopp so much that he shrieked. Would you calm down? Luffy asked him, turning the wheel a little to avoid a broken mast sticking up through clouds. Yeah, take it easy, Sanji agreed. Usopp was yelling at the other two to notice the shipwrecks and the veil looked like they had been sliced up. They heard a slight rustle through the trees and Usopp began pushing at that, asking if they heard it. The woods are full of noises. Just relax, Luffy told him calmly. I heard that, Sanji yelled. That was finally too much for Usopp. He started screaming and broke out the two paddles that were attached to the ship and tried to go faster. It was a good thing because, out of nowhere, there was a large scythe came flying from behind the trees, its blade large and sharp. Though the three in the boat were able to miss it by the skin of their teeth, it turned out that wasn't the only one. Dozens of them started to appear and Luffy screamed out orders to start paddling like crazy, which the other two had no complaints following. It was all they could do to keep avoiding being sliced in half. It was a good thing that they didn't take the gauntlet that Luffy had wanted before, because the crow was small and nimble enough to avoid blades, though there were still narrow misses each time. Usopp was yelling out confusing orders, and Luffy finally yelled at him to take the wheel as he turned him back and launched him in the air, sending them flying right past the scythe. With Usopp at the wheel, the other two began to paddle like mad, going much faster than before, but then large wooden spears came flying at them from above. The three in the boat did everything they could to keep the crow from being hit. In the end, Luffy was able to use the senses his Chimera form gave him to hit them and bat them away until they were safely out of the way. They were breathing hard, glad to have escaped that obstacle, but their bad luck didn't end there. They looked on to see something was glinting ahead of them through the trees. They found out what was when a large spinning buzzsaw came flying right towards them. The buzzsaw narrowly avoided them. It thought, Luffy cried as it flew past them. Not yet, Sanji yelled. Now breathing hard as Usopp screamed they was coming right back at them and they were now struggling to stay afloat. The blade spun in the air and like it was being drawn to them like a magnet. They hurtled back towards them. Again and again the buzzsaw kept flying at them, trying to cut them to pieces. Usopp was freaking out, wanting to go back, but there was no point right now. There was no guarantee that they would survive it. Luckily they ended up outrunning it when it slammed into one of the trees, cutting it in half. I think we finally outran it. Usopp sighed in relief before he looked behind them and groaned out miserably. Oh, but this is bad. Now it's too late to go back. I can't even see the entrance anymore. Then stay here, Luffy offered. I die, you idiot, Usopp screamed back at him. Sanji agreed with what Usopp said and pointed as a giant snake-like creature with row after row of razor-sharp teeth burst through the Milky Road and attacked. But Sanji was more than ready for it. He jumped up and with a single kick, it was sent flying from them. As he looked back at it anxiously, Luffy commented on that this was the neatest forest he'd ever been in. Neat forest, my butt. Usopp snapped. If this is our so-called ordeal, then I quit. You can't quit yet. We just got here, Luffy laughed. Sanji muttered anxiously. We've got to keep moving. We can't spend more time than necessary on this Milky Road, otherwise we're asking for certain death. They began to talk about how they were sure that the priests were all waiting for them on the island. Usopp realized what Luffy was saying and cried out in horror. So you're telling me that nothing that we've gone through doesn't have anything to do with our actual ordeal? I don't know. I kinda doubt it, Sanji said, especially considering the magnitude of that attack back at the docks. I couldn't tell you how it all works, but it's serious power. Take even one hit and you're a goner. This Enru shouldn't be taken lightly, and I have a feeling that he's watching us even now. Luffy then asked Sanji in surprise if he thought that this Enru was hiding somewhere in the trees, to which Sanji agreed, stating that he had to have been close by to have been able to attack as accurately as he did. But Usopp then pointed out that didn't have to be the case. If this really was a god, he could probably be watching them right now. Sanji rolled his eyes at Usopp's words as he asked, yeah, and since when did you become such a devoted follower? You're not even from around here. You're missing the point completely. Usopp hissed back at him. Everyone says that God is great, right? I was taught to respect those with power. You don't have to mean it, it's self-preservation. Sanji shrugged in a bored way, letting him believe what he wanted, but also reminding him that not everything considered God is good, but he added that they could talk more about it later when another lamprey appeared, his rows of teeth bearing at them. Usopp screamed as Luffy took care of it, punching it so hard with a rollless fist that it was slammed into a tree branch from above and it fell back behind them with a splash. I hate the islands, Usopp whispered, they're scary. Wanna get out here? Sanji asked almost easily. What kind of question is that? Usopp screamed, actually standing up and spinning around to glare at him. You want me to die? I'm loud but scared. Cut me some slack. Luffy pointing ahead of them, yelling that a giant head was blocking their way. They all looked ahead to see the giant's stone face, with his hand held up to his mouth as if keeping a secret. Sanji told Luffy that it was just a sculpture, to which Luffy responded that either way it was still a dead end. No, look, Usopp yelled, there are 4 entrances. And he was right, the river branching off into 4 paths going through each finger, each labeled with a different ordeal. Ordeal of swamp, ordeal of iron, ordeal of string, and ordeal of spheres. Usopp looked back at them, asking which one they should take, with Luffy pointing to the last one, saying that spheres sounded like fun. That's your only reason? Usopp yelled, they're ordeals, they're not supposed to be fun. He then looked back at their choices and added, not that I'm disagreeing with you, spheres is definitely the one that doesn't sound too violent. He then started to imagine what the other ordeals would be like, with each one worse than the other, and in the end, his active imagination got the better of him and he didn't know which one to take. We don't have time for a debate here, Sanji stated in annoyance. They had to make a choice now. We're right on top of it. Alright, spheres it is, Luffy decided. Looking like he was doing this against his better judgment, Usopp turned the wheel hard and they headed the doorway into Pinky, shutting his eyes as he did so, as if hoping that he could somehow protect himself from whatever was coming. When they entered the long tunnel and found that they were in the pitch darkness, they couldn't see anything in front of them. Sanji then poked fun at Usopp, asking him not to shut his eyes since he was the one driving. Not that this made any difference, it was just as dark either way. Luffy suddenly had a very interesting idea and I heard his voice call out, "Hey guys, what if this is One Buzz Games?" Usopp asked what he was talking about. You know, if you pick the right door then you get a prize. Luffy asked, "But if you pick the wrong one?" "What are you talking about? What if you pick wrong? Why didn't you mention this before Luffy?" Usopp yelled at him. "Well, let's see here," Luffy's voice said, sounding thoughtful as he thought it all over. "If you pick the wrong one, then you fall off the island?" Usopp lost it. "How can you say something so stupid?" He screamed out. "We're thousands of meters in the air. I don't know how many times your life can flash before your eyes during a fall like that, and I don't want to know." Light suddenly appeared in front of them and they spotted the exit. "You both are being idiots," Sanji said as they headed through. "Nothing like that is gonna." But then as they went out, they went right over the edge of the cliff. The crow hung in the air almost comically for several seconds before they fell, looking down to see nothing but clouds below them. The three in the boat screamed wildly as they did so, Usopp screaming at the top of his lungs, "You about to be kidding me." But when they went through one cloud and, to everyone's relief, they landed on another milky road that had been directly beneath them, but they hadn't been able to see it with all the clouds. Sanji was asking, as if making sure that they weren't dead, were alive? Usopp was twitched horribly. "I seriously thought we were falling all the way back into the blue sea." Sanji was now kicking Luffy hard in the head. "That's because someone had to make up a lame story to scare us." "I was scared," Luffy laughed. "I thought I was a goner too." "Idiot," Sanji hissed to himself. Once he finished laughing and everything calmed down, Sanji pulled the traumatized Usopp from his seat at the crow and took over at the controls this time. Here, they looked around cautiously, trying to get their bearings right. They were still in large forest, not unlike the road they took to get here, but the milky roads were all crossing and overlapping with each other, even sometimes going up high in the trees and under branches. But what was really different was that this forest was filled with hundreds of large white balls. They seemed to have been made of violent cloud, and they were simply floating, not moving, but hanging in the air, drifting around innocently. The three and the crow sailed around for some time, just looking around at all the balls that resembled giant flakes of snow, their eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary. After a while though, Luffy and Usopp dropped their guards and began poking their heads in the bag for a snack. Only Sanji remained fully aware, looking around watchfully as if expecting someone to jump out and attack at any moment. Soon their captain and sniper had gotten bored, and the two of them were playing with one of the balls, passing it back and forth like a beach ball. Sanji looked back at them and began to tell them off before a snake burst out and went for Usopp, bearing its fangs. "A snake!" Sanji screamed out in shock as Luffy kicked at it, sending it flying away, but then Usopp pointed out another, snake ball, in front of them, and when Sanji tried to kick it, this time, it ended up exploding, burning them all. "For crying out loud, what's with these things?" Usopp screamed out in fear before he broke down crying. It was obvious to them all that he had finally reached a breaking point. They then heard someone laughing. "Oh, silly children, these are surprise clouds, you never know what's going to come out of them." Luffy and the other boys were all looking around, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from when they heard the childish laugh once again. Peso, they all looked back and they saw him. A man who hardly looked any different from a round cloud that he was floating on, with long, dark red hair and little wings, dressed in a white jumpsuit with a vertical line of golden rings that ran from front to back, and bright yellow sunglasses as he gave them all a stupid grin. "I'm so glad you picked my challenge, the ordeal of fears," he said, bursting out laughing. The Straw Hats all had sweat drop falling as they looked at this guy. "Yeah, is that a talking dumpling?" Sanji asked. The talking dumpling suddenly got up and began dancing and spinning around happily on the cloud as they all stared at him. "That's the ordeal," Luffy yelled out, now sounding furiously disappointed. "Ball guy? Stop with the dancing, and tell us who you are," Sanji yelled. The dumpling didn't answer at first, still doing his dance as Usopp and Luffy whispered to each other, not really seeing him as much of a threat. Sanji lost his temper and yelled out, "Hey, dumpling, Nami and the others better be safe." "The sacrifices?" he asked happily as he continued to dance and spin around. "They'll escape, or they won't, doesn't really matter which. If they escape they'll die, if they're sacrificed, well they'll die then too." "What's that mean?" Sanji demanded, sounding angry. "But I would be more worried about yourselves," the dumpling went on. "You'll have to beat me if you plan on going any further, and I really don't see that happening." He laughed an annoying laugh once more as he jumped, heading right for them. Luffy was in front, looking ready to throw a punch. "Ooh," the dumpling said interested, "you're gonna change into an animal?" Luffy looked startled that the dumpling had said that, but went for the punch anyway while going into his chimera form as he did. The dumpling danced out of the way, missing it completely before he held his hand up Luffy's lion-like face, and with some kind of shockwave from his hand, Luffy was sent flying. His hat was blown off like a kite before he was slammed right into the tree, crashing into it, and for a moment his vision faded before he came back and found he was on his face, leaving a deep crater in the tree behind him. A trail of blood was dripping from his mouth as Usopp and Sanji yelled at him, trying to know if he was alright. "Luffy," Usopp called in terror, "you're okay, aren't you? A head like that couldn't have hurt you that much." The dumpling laughed as he held up his slightly smoking hand. "Well, you see, it's not what you call a normal hit." Enraged, Sanji charged at him, but once again the dumpling was able to dodge it by merely stepping to the side, almost twirling around. Only the most well-trained are granted the power of mantra. Sanji was staring at the dumpling in shock, unable to believe that he was able to predict his attack, before the fat freak held up his hand and sent him crashing to the ground as well. Usopp screamed out Sanji's name, not noticing the dumpling right behind him before he was also sent flying down to join them. All three of them were bleeding and hurt, but they didn't seem to be too badly hurt because they were already starting to get back up. Luffy looked at the others, and Sanji confirmed that they were alright as he reached for his hat. Sanji was then demanding to know what that roly-poly did. "I've got no idea," Luffy confessed, wiping some of the blood from his mouth. "Who is this guy anyway?" Resuming his dance on the crow, the dumpling answered, "My name is Satori. I am one of the 4 priests of the Almighty Enru who watch over the upper yard and seated in judgment of criminals such as yourselves. I own the birth in this lost forest." "The lost forest?" Luffy repeated, sounding just as lost. "Why yes," Satori smiled evilly, "my forest and all its glory. Ho, ho, hoo." Satori stepped on the accelerator and caused the crow to start moving once again. He went on speaking, telling them that the boat would continue going along without them until it reached the exit. If they were unable to find the boat before then, they would lose their only way to the sacrificial altar and be lost in this forest forever. That was what this trial was, to try and find the boat once again while avoiding him and his surprise clouds, which could be holding anything. "The ordeal of fears," Satori yelled joyfully. "There's a 10% survival rate, so good luck." He laughed a little more. "You boys better catch up to her real soon, she's getting away." Luffy offered to stay behind and deal with Satori while Sanji and Usopp went looking for the boat. Sanji hesitated for only a moment before he nodded in understanding, but before he left, he warned him to be careful. Luffy jumped up and began swinging around fighting with Satori. However, with mantra it was impossible for Luffy to be able to make a move without him already knowing it. In the end, the fight ended quickly and Luffy's head was slammed right through a thick tree, his goat horns sticking into wood. Luffy tried desperately to pull his head out of the tree trunk as Satori continued to laugh. "Aren't you stubborn?" he asked freely before he went floating away on his spear, clearly going after the others. After several tense minutes, Luffy was able to pull his head back out. Luckily, after using his battle wings to glide through the forest, Luffy found that he hadn't gone far. He spotted the priest tormenting the other boys and Luffy went running along the tree branches to reach him, sending a punch with the force of a speeding train right at him. "Luffy, stop!" Sanji screamed. "Use your head, you're only making things worse." Luffy realized this as well, but it was too late. As Satori nimbly dodged out of the way of the attack, the punch made a large shockwave which had caused all the surprise clouds around them to start flying every which way. They would then hit other surprise clouds and then they would go flying in all directions as well, so there was like a snowstorm. They were soon forced to run around, avoiding them at all costs. A variety of things emerged from them. Things like spears, giant crabs, fire. Usopp even had 4 giant singing birds appear out of some and start punching him like a boxing match. Luffy, through a series of acrobatics while trying to avoid drowning and being eaten by skyfish, was forced to go into his monkey form and start swinging around on vines. His fear turned to laughter as he let out a loud jungle call. Will you get serious? Sanji roared at him. After seeing Luffy swinging around on vines, Usopp got an idea and went to his newest invention that he called the Usopp Awe. A special belt that he made that could fire a grappling hook for him to swing from tree to tree with. He was able to hook onto a tree, and when swinging over to the crow, everyone thought for sure he was going to make it. Even Satori was looking surprised by this, at least until they found out that Usopp forgot to put away to the death rope and missed the boat. Finally losing his temper, Sanji got them both down in front of him and beat them both black and blue. Here's the deal, the cook said once he had cooled off and took several deep breaths on his cigarette. I'm gonna forget what just happened, now you do what I say. Both boys nodded, having no problem with that, and clearly not wanting to get beaten up again. Okay then, he said as he went on, first thing you forget about the boat for now, then we're all gonna charge that fat freak at once. I don't care what kind of powers he's got, Sanji continued, with all 3 of us attack at the same time, if there's a way to beat him we'll find it. Oh, Satori's voice called from somewhere above them, obviously having heard everything he said, don't be so sure. They all jumped up, staring around to try and find him. When Sanji turned his back to keep looking, Satori fell from the branches above and jumped behind him, hitting him with another impact and sending him crashing to the ground. Luffy and Usopp both tried to fight, but soon they joined Sanji as well. All 3 of them were lying bruised, bloody, and burned on the ground as Satori continued to jump around happily on the surprise clouds. By this point, Luffy was struggling to push himself back up as Satori laughed again. You're still alive, I'm impressed, and, as a reward for good behavior, we're gonna finish off our fun today with a move I've received several awards for. Ho, ho, hoo. He then pulled out a strip cane of giant candy cane, my super secret surprise, Sphere Dragon. And then, Satori connects several surprise balls together with dragon head on top so they look like some strange kind of caterpillar. Introducing the Sphere Dragon, he called Topply. But Luffy looked far from impressed as he got back to his feet, now panting hard. He healed up. It looks like all you did was string a bunch of surprise clouds together. Is that the best you can do? I have to say I'm disappointed. Oh, you won't be for long, Satori promised. You see my friend, the dragon is loaded with explosive surprises and all sorts of delightful shrapnel. Usopp paled before he squeaked out, but that means. If you even touch the fireball sphere somewhere on his body it'll be over for you and your friends, Satori said happily. You'll be blown to bits in the incinerating inferno. Hope you like fireworks. He then held the cane high and the dragon went straight for them. Luffy clearly didn't care if the dragon exploded or not. He was going to attack anyway, but just as the dragon went straight for him, Usopp charged in, tackling him out of the way just in time. You idiot, he yelled, holding Luffy down to keep him from attacking the dragon again. That freak just told us if we touch the thing it'll explode. Do you want to die a fiery death? Luffy practically threw Usopp off him, demanding, well how are we gonna fight it if we can't touch it? That's just it, Usopp yelled at him in frustration. We can't fight it, I think now is the time to run. Satori sent the dragon after them again, and they were forced to run. What do we do? Luffy yelled, jumping around wildly, the dragon head quickly catching up. I don't know, you're the captain, Usopp yelled before he had an idea. On 3, we jump, 3. The 2 did jump out of the way, missing the dragon completely, but they ended up landing on another surprise cloud. They didn't realize it at once, but once the dragon missed them it turned blue in the face before it exploded once again. Ho, ho, hoo, well, you're quite the little survivors, aren't you? Satori asked, still as gleeful as he had been before, and they were all growing sick of listening to this guy. The 2 rolled over, with Usopp yelling at him that he was just toying with them. Correct? It wouldn't be as much fun if you didn't experience the full power of the Sphere Dragon, Satori asked, as if they were 2 night boys who were being punished for doing something stupid. Shall we continue? There's no way you can win, he bragged. After all, I'm a priest, and you all look so tired. Why don't you just end this now and die? My heart can't take any more of this, Usopp gasped, now looking like he was fighting to breathe. Too many surprises. How, it hurts. You'll be out of options quite soon, Satori said. Looking back up, it's sad really, your little boat has almost reached the exit, and when that happens, it's all over for you. Ho, ho, hoo. You'll have nowhere to go unless you all suddenly learn to fly, Satori went on just as Luffy was sitting up. You wander around their terribly confusing forest until you die of exhaustion. Luffy was up again, trying to attack by becoming a rhino hybrid and attempted to get the man with his horn, but he might as well have just told Satori what he was going to do. He dodged it and had the dragon going after him once again. As Luffy ran, he noticed himself slipping off into the forest. As Luffy continued to run, he finally caught a break when he ran up a tree, and almost ended up falling back on the dragon. But something caught him before he did and he discovered the wire that was connected to Satori's cane, and what caused him to control the dragon like a puppet. It only took him a few seconds to realize what it was and then he snapped the wire in half. Seeing the wire break, Satori gasped in horror. You ruined my Sphere Dragon, you impudent little brat, he yelled, and for the first time he sounded angry. Now you die, get over here this instant. But as he pulled the cane, he pulled Luffy with him, who hadn't let go of the other half rope and was pulling the dragon with him. Satori realized what was happening. Let go of the dragon fool, he screamed, but Luffy was still hurtling towards him, still pulling the dragon behind him, perhaps having instincts holding on to the other rope. Satori screamed out just as it crashed into him and the explosion after that was enormous. A giant fireball went up around them, burning the trees as shrapnel went flying in all directions. There was a giant black crater in the ground, blowing parts of trees away, the ground completely burned to a crisp. It was smoking and filled with things like swords, arrows, spears. Satori was there on another surprise cloud as he gasped for breath and severely burned. That was close, Satori wheezed. That maniac must have had a death wish. This isn't good. He looked at the damage and added to himself. I've got to intensify my training. I can't let a weakling like him get the upper hand and fight. Not even for a second. That might block me from using my mantra. You're right, Luffy's voice said, and Satori was looking around anxiously. That was close. Luffy was clinging to Satori's back, also burned and injured, but not nearly as bad thanks to his thick rhino hide. It's you? How are you still alive? Satori said, finally noticing where he was, and seemed stunned that he hadn't noticed it before. Then suddenly Satori was trying to throw Luffy off desperately, trying to get rid of him and screaming out, Get off me, you horrible little man. I'll get you for this. Let go of me right now. I said let go. Do not let him go, Luffy, called a familiar voice, and Sanji was sitting on top of that of a surprise cloud that had flowers sticking out of it. Satori looked up in horror. You too? Hey Sanji, Luffy said, pushing Satori's head down so that he could see him. Where have you been? I was out cold on the forest floor, he screamed. Where else would I have been, you idiot? Sanji calmed down almost at once as he said, but that's beside the point. He lit a cigarette and turned his attention back to Satori. The point is you keep saying challenge this, and challenge that, which normally wouldn't interest me. However, there are 2 helpless ladies who are waiting for me to come to their rescue, and I refuse to let them down. So I'm proposing this, and I think you'll like it, Past Sanji said as he looked up, his face dark as finish. Ordeal of love. Satori freaked out and tried to escape, but Luffy quickly transformed himself back into his human form before becoming a large anaconda and wrapping his body around the man to keep him from moving anywhere. Satori realized that he was trapped and began to scream out that they had no honor gaining up 2 against 1. We have no honor, Sanji repeated in disgust. You creeps kidnapped our friends and tried to murder a beautiful young angel, and you accuse us of not having any honor. Luffy smirked as he added to Satori, I've been thinking, it's pretty amazing you're able to predict our movements, but what good is that, when you can't do anything to avoid them? Satori turned blue in the face and began to thrash around more desperately than ever. He screamed out that they release him at once, that he was a priest and not being judged by him was first-degree crime in Skypia, that attacking him meant declaring war on Enru. Sanji and Luffy couldn't have cared less what Satori said anymore. Sanji then leapt high in the air and started flipping over rapidly to gain speed. When he fell down, he brought the heel of his foot down on Satori's head, shattering his glasses and causing a few teeth to pop out of his head as he screamed, and that was the end of the fight. After meeting up with Usopp, they were continuing on once they found the boat. They had left the forest and had entered a great grassy field. Only there was something wrong here. There were skulls set up on stakes, scattered everywhere. What is this? Luffy gasped, shielding his eyes from the sun as he looked ahead. My money is, this is where we're supposed to find the ordeal, which means another priest, Sanji said, so you two stay awake. Oh no, Usopp moaned out. I think one ordeal is enough of a nightmare today. Which one seems like it can be out here? String, iron, swamp, I'm so nervous. Relax, it's just a grassy field, Luffy told him. Open your eyes, Usopp cried out with a strangled scream. It's not just a field, it's a field with 1,000 impaled skulls set up like trophies to scare us, and it's working. Luffy looked over the edge and saw that he was right as they passed the skulls. Yeah, you're right, I wonder who did this. Usopp then began to cry again, gasping out that it had to be another one of those priests behind this and he was going to tear their bodies in half. Another priest with another ordeal? Sounds like fun, Luffy said. Are you out of your mind? Usopp demanded, now sounding hysterical. There's our heads on sticks back there, on sticks, that's no BS. Oh, don't worry so much, Usopp, we'll beat him, Luffy said when they suddenly heard a blast a little ways of them. Looking up, several figures came bursting out and flying at them on those strange skates once again. One of them was carrying a large bazooka and noticed them as well when they flew overhead. He then flipped upside down and sent a cannonball at them, which Luffy reflected and redirected. We're ready, Luffy screamed at him angrily. Now right up for some action. Come on down, we cream you. Make your move, big guy. That remark seemed to tick the man off, even at this distance. He then stood up and shouted back, you sound instinct of blue sea people, which means you're one causing all the chaos in Skypia. Sanji then said quickly to Luffy that he was the one who attacked them when they first arrived, which only infuriated Luffy all the more. Now that they could see his face, half of it was also covered with similar travel marks that his arm had. He was also smoking a cigarillo when he glared down at them with cold eyes. Usopp screamed in fear, cowering in his seat as he cried out, just hurry up and blow them up and get over with. If you don't want to die, then go back to your blue sea immediately, the man yelled, because I promise if you do anything stupid on this island, we'll execute you with Enru. They were all startled to hear that he wanted to kill this so-called god. Sanji stated that these guys weren't like the Skypians who didn't seem to have the nerve to stand up to him, but Usopp was now begging Luffy that if they weren't Enru's priests there was no reason to fight them and that they should just sail on. But Luffy was too angry to listen, clearly wanting to go over there to fight him, but Usopp had to jump on him, keeping him down. But then the four of them disappeared, no longer interested in saying. Usopp lay back as Luffy stared after them. I wonder why they're up here, he said softly. I'm not sure, Sanji said seriously, must be pretty serious, but they seem to be enemies of Enru as well as us. You know, Usopp whimpered softly, I really do hate this place. They continued to ride the crow along the milky roads, only now the sun was going down. The sky was a mixture of red and gold, and they knew there wasn't going to be much longer before sunset. They took a road that was climbing over the largest tree that any of them had ever seen. Luffy's eyes were wide like a child's as Usopp began muttering that he had a bad feeling that something bad was waiting for them over that treetop. He was sure of it. It turned out to be a right guess when they got to the top. It led to an incredibly unsafe draw. And like they were on a roller coaster, they went into almost a free fall, sliding down at a breakneck speed. Sanji suddenly called over a rush of wind. Do you see them down there? Are those the priests? Usopp cried fearfully. No, just sky sharks, Sanji said, and Usopp sighed in relief. Oh, thank goodness, I thought for sure that we were goners. Whoa, 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 what do you mean sky sharks? Sharks, the size of whales, bright blue with stripes were there at the bottom of their descent. Their mouths filled with razor-sharp teeth, and large enough to swallow them whole, were wide open. Usopp started panicking, but Luffy took care of them all by jumping to a crow's head and dived into water like clouds. Suddenly, they saw a sky octopus left from earlier, except with Luffy's straw hat and scar, and it was using its tentacles to punch each one of them out cold. Once the danger was out of the way, they ended up skiing to a rough stop and looked like lake clouds and splashed water everywhere. Luffy noticed something up ahead as he gasped and yelled to the other two once they got their bearings. Check it out, we found it. There's the altar with Going Merry sitting right on top. He was right, on the top of a pyramid-shaped structure was the ship, and over on the shore were Nami, Robin, and Zoro, all of them alive and unscathed. Even from this far away, they could see that the ship was a mess. She was burned in several places and the mast was lying at the foot of the stairs that led up it. But none of them seemed to have noticed at first. Luffy and the others were also glad to see them, to meet familiar faces that weren't trying to kill them. They started to cheer and celebrate. It was a touching scene. They went over to the shore to pick up the three there before they headed to the foot of the stairs and raced up to be greeted by a big hug from Chopper. But Chopper was in just as rough shape as the boat. His fur was scorched, and there's still bleeding cuts. He had covered his chest with bandages and he had treated his own injuries. Chopper told them that soon after Zoro, Nami and Robin headed off into the woods. A priest called Shiro appeared at the sacrificial altar to take care of the offering. He was burning everything around him with lance and bird that breathed fire, and managed to destroy parts of Mary before he finally got bored and tried to kill Chopper. After hugs all around, asking each other if they were alright, with Sanji particularly asking the woman, who informed him that they were just fine, Usopp finally noticed what was left of the mast and asked what happened. Chopper tried to apologize, letting him know that he tried everything he could to protect the ship, but that priest kept burning everything. Usopp nodded slowly, telling Chopper not to worry about the ship, that they'll figure it out later and was just glad that he was alright. At his words, Chopper looked ready to cry as he ran to the edge of the ship, climbed up it and began to declare to the rest of the world, I promise to become a more reliable man starting right now. Luffy told him to stop yelling at the altar and asked how he was able to get rid of that priest. Chopper looked back and explained that he used the whistle to call Gonfall. In the nick of time, the Sky Knight appeared and the two fought battle in the sky. After an even match, Shiro used his ordeal to trap Gonfall and pierce him with his lance. Chopper then took them all inside the cabin to where he had been tending to his wounds, promising that though he was badly injured, he had a good chance of recovering if he rested. We owe him 3 times now, Zoro said as Luffy crouched down at Gonfall's bedside and said softly, he was willing to sacrifice as much for us, even though he gave us that whistle for free. If it wasn't for the Sky Knight, you guys probably wouldn't have a ship and I'd for sure be dead, Chopper said softly. I've got a bunch of questions for him, Sanji stated, but his serious tone had respect and gratitude in. But I guess I'll wait until he wakes up. He finished before he glanced at the air and added thanks to him as well. They soon decided to move to land and make camp there for the night, with Usopp explaining to Luffy and annoyance that if they were attacked, their ship would be the first to take a beating and they couldn't risk her suffering any more damage than she had so far. After they took the crow over to shore, they got their camp set up. It was strange how causal everyone was acting after everything that had happened today. Luffy complained about being hungry and while one of the sky sharks out of water so that Sanji could roast over with fire for him. They set up the tents and Chopper made some medicine for Luffy, Sanji, Usopp and Gonfall, before passing some medicinal herbs to Robin and Sanji, asking them to grind it up for him for the old man. None of them said much as Usopp set up a chalkboard and turned to the others, getting their attention. Quiet down now, he called. It's time to hear everyone's field reports. Sanji, still grinding up the medicine, spoke first. We ran into this priest named Satori who uses spheres with different kinds of threats inside each one. Explosives, dragons, the usual, but what really hung us out dry in the fight was that this guy kept predicting our moves with power called mantra or something. The priest who attacked me was named Shira, and he used a spear that set fire to anything. Chopper then spoke up. He seemed like he could predict my moves just like that Satori guy, and I tried to attack him, but he trailed off, sounding ashamed. He dodged me every single time. Then the bird he was riding burned down the mast, and Sky Knight was defeated. Nami patted Chopper's shoulder in a consoling way as he sighed. Sounds like you all had a rough time, Nami says sympathetically. Well, what we found is that this island we're on is actually the missing part of Jaya. You see, the city of gold didn't sink in the ocean, but it was shot in the sky like us. We saw the other half of Cricket's house, which proves this theory. Usopp called victoriously after he finished writing it all down on the board. Excellent work, he cried to them all. Now, based on your reports, we learned that the priest can predict our movements with the power of the Galactic Mantra, and the word blows flames and the spear burns you. But most importantly, we learned this. He jabbed at the board with a stick of notes. The city of gold is not 1,000 leagues under the sea like we thought, but it's hidden somewhere on this very island. Wow, after all the trouble we went through to get here, who would imagine that it'd be the city of gold? Nami whispered to herself. Luffy was yelling out in shock at what Usopp said. No way. That was the first thing I told you. Nami yelled at him in frustration, but Zoro and Sanji both began conversation, sounding civil with each other for once, about what mantra was all about. Sanji offered that perhaps it was some kind of sixth sense that you could only learn up here, which Zoro looked highly doubtful here. But it was clear that there was only one thing on Luffy's mind as he stood up, his eyes shining as he whispered in wonder. This is an adventure with gold at the end. I can't wait. Nami was smiling at Luffy, and even gave him a wink as she said, glad to see someone on my side. I'm ready. Luffy no, Usopp said, turning pale again as the excitement quickly drained out of his face. Did you forget what the scary girl guy said about execution? God will be really mad, Chopper said nervously. Robin giggled to herself. Sounds like fun, she said, sounding excited for the chance to look at this ancient city with her own eyes. Well, we wouldn't be very good pirates if we turned our backs on gold. Sanji reasoned with a smirk, so let's not. Won't be easy, Zoro added with an evil grin. You know everyone up here already hates us, which means I'm in. Come on, Usopp said tearfully, aren't you even a little frightened of the wrath of God? I mean, I won't live, don't you? But they were all smiling. Each one of them had clearly made up their minds about what they were going to do, and Luffy only confirmed it as he stood up tall, laughing his head off as he declared, gold, and it's all waiting for US. Later, all the Straw Hats were gathered around the fire, enjoying some stew from a large cooking pot that Sanji obviously prepared for them all, and Nami had her glasses on as she was speaking to them all. Anyway, let's review Noland's logbook. He discovered the city of gold 400 years ago. However, after leaving the island and returning to his king, he discovered that the gold ruins had vanished. Luckily, we now know what happened to these ruins. Before Nami went on, there was a loud clang noise. Apparently Sanji had hit Luffy over the head with the pot lid for something again. Getting ticked off, Nami was telling him off before he retorted something about Luffy's manners. Looking annoyed at the boys, Nami turned back to the others and started to talk about how it had been enough upstream that brought this place to the sky. Do you really think a whole island could have done that? Chopper asked her as he passed several bowls to the others. Well, it's the only thing that makes sense, Nami answered. Remember, Cricket said whenever this phenomenon occurs it's in a different location. Usopp agreed with them all, stating how enormous the explosion was and he wasn't surprised they lifted up part of the island. Zoro looked up at the trees, muttering that he found it hard to believe that this giant forest was the same one they saw back on Jaya. Robin agreed, but also stated that there must have been something special about the environment here in the clouds that dramatically increased growth rate, just looking at the trees and animals they had seen. Chopper added that it had been a large flock of south birds who saved him in Dawnfall, and they were at least 10 times bigger than the ones they saw on Jaya. At those words, Sanji then asked Chopper why the birds saved them, and the little reindeer confessed that he wasn't sure about that, but he did say that when he woke up and saw them there, they referred to Sky Knight as God. They stared at him. He's God? Luffy screamed out, food actually falling from his mouth as he pointed wildly over his shoulder at the sleeping knight. So if we need to crud out of this guy, then our job here is done? Usopp began yelling at Luffy, before Nami brought them back to the matter at hand, asking if any of them remember what Noland wrote about in his log about the city of gold. The last thing he wrote in his log before he died is something odd, Robin answered. It's something I still can't figure out, even after seeing this island. It said that the city of gold was in Skull's right eye. That's it, Nami declared before she went into 2 maps with her. Nami was pulling out 2 maps and was spreading them out in front of her. I mashed up Robin's map of Jaya, along with the old Skype map that we found in the shipwreck, she said, carefully folding one of the maps and putting them together like a puzzle. As everyone got up and went over to see what she was talking about, she added, of course, this isn't exact and there may be some incorrect overlap, but if you match up the location of Cricket House with the broken one we found up here, this is what Jaya looked like 400 years ago. Neat, Luffy said beaming. It's a skull. It is a skull, Chopper chirped. The Straw Hats had a bright shine in their eyes and they were already starting to celebrate until Usopp asked exactly where in Skull's right eye they were supposed to look. Nami figured that out as well as she pointed to a small monument in the center of the eye. It's one structure that's actually inside the eye, she explained, and no one found it yet because of all the people who tried. We were ones with both maps. They were all getting excited. Some of them looked like they were ready to go off into the forest now for it. But Nami came up with the game plan. Since it couldn't leave the ship unguarded, it was decided that in the morning they would break the crew into 2 groups, and hopefully by this time tomorrow they will have more gold than they ever dreamed as well as finally leave this island behind. They then went on to finish their meal and talk excitedly about their plans, each sounding as crazy as the next, but Nami was promising them that they would think of something after they fixed the ship and got her off the altar. It was funny to watch as some of the boys were starting to get into an argument with Nami about having a big bonfire to put out. The boys were all for the idea, but Nami was getting angry, reminding them of the danger that they were all in and that the forest didn't need any help in killing them. But as they argued, they had some more unexpected visitors. A large pack of cloud wolves appeared. After a few harsh words exchanged, and Nami ended up clobbering the leader of the pack, they seemed to have developed a grudging respect, and no one was able to see how it happened, but to their amazement, it ended up becoming a party. The Straw Hats and the Cloud Wolves were all dancing, singing and laughing around the fire, the festival of the Eve of the Gold Hunt. It hazy morning and they were standing at the foot of the stair of the altar. Usopp was pointing wildly to the ship, yelling to the others and practically crying, it's true, I wasn't dreaming, someone was here last night. They glanced up in time to see that the Mary had been repaired. They climbed the stairs to see that the ship was now full of mismatched patches, but the mast with the backwire with the fore and side were fixed with extra boards. Even the flying gear had also been taken off her, so she lived as she always been. I knew it, Usopp yelled out. See guys, I told you I wasn't insane. He was then crying as he was relieved to know that as well just as Nami put her hand on the mast, looking pleased, and unable to believe it. Hey, now that's service. Sanji said, I hate to say it, but they did a lousy job.
Luffy laughed happily that whoever did sure was nice. Usopp was now pacing the deck, saying that he knew that he saw someone here last night. Zoro began speaking again, asking how he couldn't see how anyone would want to help them. As far as he knew, the only other people up here with them were their enemies, so why would any of them want to risk crossing a river of sky sharks to fix their ship? As Chopper swung happily from rope call to Usopp, asking who he thought he saw, though Usopp couldn't think of an answer to that. But for Nami, the curiosity had worn off and she told them that it didn't matter anymore and that they still had a lot of work to do. As they started to get to work they heard Usopp whisper to the ship, how could he have possibly known? Come on Mary, just tell me who I saw. Usopp and Chopper headed back down the stairs to the Crow to try and figure out a way to get the ship off the altar. Usopp and Chopper were in the Crow and now making their way around the altar. In the end, Usopp came up with an idea. Using his Usopp he was able to hook it around the Mary's bow and tried to pull it off themselves. However, the Crow just didn't have enough strength for something like this. But Usopp soon came up with another way. Usopp hung Chopper to a large pole like a fishing line and tried to tempt a sky shark to eat him. Usopp was able to hook the rope onto the shark and used its strength to heave the ship off the altar, down the stairs, and back into the water. After they took the time to untie Chopper, calm him down, and convince him that they were his friends, Nami pulled out the map and came up with the plan. Since Luffy and Robin insisted on going to the City of Gold, and Nami had to stay on the Merry to guide it out of the upper yard into the meeting place, she came up with the two teams. Okay, let's look at the map, she said, pulling out her pencil and began drawing arrows on it. The exploration team will be taking this route, moving south, she said, drawing an arrow directly to the right eye. There should be some old ruins near the skull's right eye. Keep an eye out for enemies and bring back that gold, she told them. Huh, you make it sound so easy, Zoro said. I'm looking forward to investigating those old ruins, Robin said, smiling widely. Hold on, Luffy said, looking to Nami, you're the one who keeps talking about gold and more gold but you're not coming. Well, of course not, she said, it's way too scary. Nami seemed to notice the look on Chopper's face and gave him a dark look, asking if he said anything, and he shook his head hurriedly as she went back to the map. We'll be in danger too, you know, she added. We'll be taking the Merry down river through the island. Then, we head for the beach near the ruins as fast as possible. She drew the arrows so that even a child could understand them. We'll meet up here, she finished, pointing to a spot near the right eye, and then we can escape this stupid sky island. She sighed happily as she thought about it, muttering dreamily, at long last we'll be a rich and powerful pirate crew. Able to buy anything. The groups were divided with Luffy, Zoro, Chopper, and Robin in the group going to get the gold, while Nami, Usopp and Sanji were to stay on the Merry with Gonfal and Pierre and hopefully meet up with them. Okay, Zoro said agreeably as they all picked up their bags after Sanji packed them all box lunches. We'll all meet safely on the east coast. The Merry stopped by the south shore, where the four of them jumped to land. They hung around long enough to wave the Merry off before they turned and went their separate ways for the day. Chapter 18. Luffy, Chopper, Zoro and Robin had split from the group to go looking for the City of Gold. After some debate, namely the captain and first mate's complete lack of direction, they were soon on their way. As they walked, Luffy remembered the giant bell mentioned in Nolan's logbook, and decided that when he found it the animal boy would ring it in order to let the Alliance back down in the blue sea to hear it and let them know that the City of Gold does exist. They all agreed that it was actually a good plan, and they set off with a newfound determination. Along the way, Chopper seemed to have a confidence boost as nothing bad had happened to the group yet. This lasted only a few minutes, however, until he spotted a strange, strict route that seemed to follow them. When asked what was wrong, Chopper denied seeing anything as he didn't know if he was simply imagining the route or not and didn't want to seem foolish. Just then, however, the wind shifted and both Chopper and Luffy were able to smell something that had Chopper's face go white as a ghost while Luffy's grin seemed to threaten to break his face in two. Hey guys, Luffy started, looking like a little kid about to reveal a huge secret to his friends.
The other two turned to Luffy, but before they could ask what it would, Chopper screamed out, run for your lives.
At that, the root burst through the foliage, showing that it was no root but the tail of an ENOURMOUS snake, big enough to easily swallow the going merry hole and have some room to spare. The Straw Hats took Chopper's advice and began to flee, though Luffy was treating it more of a game of tag than anything else, and he went to his monkey form and began swinging from the vines out of the snake's reach, laughing all the way. Zoro, eventually growing tired of running from an opponent, turned and tried to cut the snake, but it was no use as his swords bounced off the iron-hard scales. The snake tried to bite the swordsman in half, but he dodged in time, causing the snake's jaws to clamp around a tree. It was then they saw the venom leaking out of the snake's fangs was potent enough to melt the wood like acid. This encouraged the Straw Hats to run away with even more effort than they had before. Luffy, eventually getting tired of being ignored by the snake as it seemed like he was the only one who wanted to play with the serpent, started throwing some coconuts he found in one of the trees at the snake's head.
They didn't hurt the giant reptile, but one lucky shot in the eye definitely got its attention.
With an angry hiss, the snake launched itself at the laughing monkey boy. This went on for a while, the snake chasing after each of the Straw Hats in turn with them running away, leaving one of the others to try and gain the snake's attention. Luffy then decided to have a turn at being it, and, shifting his body so he had the powerful hind legs of a kangaroo, leapt off the tree he was in to deliver a kick right to the snake's snout. With a roar that sounded more like from Godzilla than a snake, its deceptively fast tail swung around and nailed Luffy right in the stomach, sending him hurtling off into the distance.
As Luffy saw the ground fast approaching, he quickly turned his body into that of a turtle, and when he landed, he made a crater nearly 30 feet wide and 10 feet deep.
Pulling himself both out of his shell and the crater, Luffy looked around at his surroundings. Noticing no trace of his crew or any familiar surroundings, Luffy grew seagull wings and flew to the tops of the tall trees. However, even with a bird's eye view of the forest, Luffy couldn't see any sign of his crew nor the snake he was fighting. And, thanks to the crazy flight that brought him there, he had no direction to follow. Even taking on a bloodhound form didn't help, as he was too far away from the crew to pick up any sense. Sitting down on the branch of a nearby tree, Luffy hummed. Well, I'm pretty sure if they can't find me, Zoro and the others would head to the City of Gold to meet up there, so that's where I'll go. Robin said we were supposed to go south to get to the skull's right eye, so all I need to do is figure out which way south is. Luffy sat there for a few minutes trying to figure out which way was south. Normally he'd just head right in order to find the skull's right eye, but a part of him shivered as he remembered Nami beating the stuffing out of him for similar mistakes in the past. So, for once he decided to use his head. Taking on his south bird form, Luffy's head immediately pointed in a certain direction. Aha, so it's that way, huh? South bird, Luffy said with a chuckle before letting off the south bird's unusual sounding call. With a flap of his wings, Luffy started to fly in the direction his body instinctively knew as south. While flying below the canopy, he started to sing. Oh, the islands in the south are warm, and their heads get really hot. They grow pineapples, they grow coconuts, and they're morons. He suddenly heard the baying of a goat calling from somewhere. Interested in seeing what sky goats look like, the Chimera man decided to go to his human form to investigate. Hearing another bleat, Luffy stopped dead as he looked around excitedly. Unknown to Luffy, standing on top of a milky road just above him was a man who was completely bald, had long ears and even horns on his head, was standing there clad in white. This was a member of the Divine Squad, Eneru's soldiers. Luffy was now calling out for the goat to come out. As he called, the goat man jumped, heading straight at him, but acting instinctively, Luffy punched him so hard that he went flying. Like a pinball, he crashed into a tree trunk, went flying up and crashed into a branch, before he fell to the ground, his bottom in the air and lost consciousness. Luffy walked over and picked up his fallen straw hat, which fell off when he landed. Who's this jerk? He asked in annoyance. Man, he got me all excited. He pouted as he put his hat back on. I thought I was gonna get to see a goat. Still frowning, Luffy flew off as a south bird again, but cheered up enough to continue on with the next verse of his stupid song. But he didn't get far when his instincts started blaring at him. Luffy suddenly stopped dead and, with difficulty, was looking off to his side with a tense expression. Standing up on some giant roots was the Shandorian Wiper. He was looking as ill-tempered as he had the last time they saw him, carrying a bazooka over his arm, and his right arm bandaged from his fingers to his shoulder. His left shoulder, however, and part of his wing had been burned and scarred. He was a mess. Wiper was glaring down at Luffy as the captain looked back up at him, turning back to human form with a frown on his face. Oh, it's you, Luffy muttered. His voice was unusually cold.
That's right, Wiper said finally, and just what are you doing here? I warned you to leave his island.
Shut up, I can do whatever I want, Luffy retorted. No, you can't, Wiper said angrily, a warning clear in his tone. This land belongs to us Shandorians.
Huh, it does, Luffy asked, looking around him at the trees in surprise. Really? I thought it was us. Well, then, he said, bowing his head, I beg your pardon?
Luffy then began to head off once again, humming his song as if nothing happened.
Hold it, Wiper called angrily. No what? Luffy yelled in annoyance. Wiper looked aggravated, as he was thinking something over before he came to a decision.
No, Wiper finally decided, I'm through wasting words on you. He turned to face him with his eyes closed, and I'm sick and tired of listening to your idiotic babbling. He held up his bazooka and pointed it at him as his eyes snapped open, a deep anger quickly building there. So I'm gonna destroy you. But Luffy remained calm. He didn't even look surprised by what Wiper said, merely annoyed. I see, he said. He grinned as he took his backpack off and held his hands up, his knuckles cracking as he smirked. If you want to fight you just have to say so. He laughed a little.
Wiper then shot a cannonball from his bazooka, which Luffy reflected by turning his legs into that of Jack Rabbit and kicking right back. The black ball was sent flying narrowly over Wiper's injured shoulder and blew up the tree behind them.
Luffy's leg went back to normal and challenged, you'll never be able to hurt me with that thing. But Wiper didn't listen to what Luffy said as he shot 2 more black balls at him, which Luffy easily deflected once again both with kicks and by simple dodges. And it went on like this for a while. Wiper just didn't seem to get it as he kept firing. It didn't matter how many balls that he used, it wasn't going to hurt him. I can do this all day if you want, Luffy yelled, though he sounded out of breath, but you can't win. Rifles and cannons can't hit me, animal instincts and all. So it would seem, Wiper agreed after a moment of thought, time for a change of tactics. That was when he spit out the cigarillo before his eyes darkened. This couldn't be good, and Luffy's instincts were going haywire as he watched the gorilla pull out a small dial and fit it into his bazooka and fire that. But instead of another cannonball, it was a gust of strong wind.
Luffy was coughing and gasping for air as he covered his mouth and nose, his sensitive sense of smell being numbed by the strange, gassy smelling wind.
This weapon is called the burn bazooka, Wiper said in a cold voice and interrupted his thoughts. By igniting the gas released from the breath dial, a deadly blue flame is created, which will incinerate everything in its path. Let's see if you can dodge this. Wiper pulled the trigger and there it came. It was a path of blue fire from the weapon. Luffy could see it in front of him, a light so bright that it was blinding. Thankfully, Luffy dodged just in time by bounding away as a deer. If he had stayed just a couple seconds longer he would have been burned to a crisp. The fire had ended up burning a hole right through the tree behind them. Luffy was already back on his feet. He was shaken, but unharmed. As he glared around for Wiper, a sudden noise caused Luffy to stare up in time to see the warrior right above him and aimed a kick at his head. Luffy, taking on his monkey form for added flexibility, was then forced to bend over backwards to avoid it. By this point both of their faces were full of anger. Luffy threw another punch which was blocked by Wiper's foot, who used the momentum from it to send himself flying backwards. Luffy didn't wait around for him to fire that burn bazooka again as he swung out of the way as the fire came and was clinging to the trees like the primate he was. Luffy soon launched himself back at Wiper, aiming another kick, which Wiper blocked his foot with his own. But soon the fight got nasty from that point onward. After Luffy tried a series of punches that Wiper endured until he was able to get behind him, he fired his weapon once again. At that, Luffy started to get irritated. He was able to jump out of firing range and hung from a tree overhead as the fire burned. He then let go and tried charging as a bull to get at him, but Wiper was somehow able to get his feet underneath Luffy's body by dodging the horns, flipped the transforming boy over his head and sent him crashing to the nearest tree. Taking aim at Luffy's dazed form, Wiper fired his burn bazooka again. Luffy was forced to avoid it once again, and he rocketed himself out of the way. Now looking seriously ticked off as he became human again, Luffy yelled, "So you like bazookas, huh?" He charged at Wiper, his body becoming that of a grizzly bear as he put his clawed paws behind him for a powerful blow. "Get a load of my bear bazooka. Now you die," Wiper screamed out as they were about to attack, and their attacks hit the other at the same time. Luffy was finally hit by the fire as his fist ended up shattering Wiper's shield and hit him hard. Both of the fighters were sent flying backwards. Both boys here got hit hard. They went crashing to the ground, with Wiper crashing into a tree before he began spitting up blood, and Luffy was burned and covered in ash as he lay several yards away, but it looked as though the thick fur surrounding Luffy was able to prevent most of the damage. Soon though they were both getting back to their feet. Wiper now seemed seriously ticked off and bellowed out, "Where are you, Straw Hat? I'll find you. I know you're still alive."
After catching his breath, Luffy sat up and yelled, "Yeah, and I plan on staying that way."
As Luffy got ready to charge ahead once again, something appeared behind him, a familiar pair of glowing, golden snake eyes. The last thing that he saw was darkness. The next thing Luffy knew was that he was in a place that could easily be mistaken for a cave. It was dark and full of space, full of broken buildings and dead trees, bits of golden treasure scattered every several yards. Luffy had just pulled his head out of the ground and was looking around him. Everything stopped, he said, sounding a little dazed. "Where am I?" He wrinkled his nose, "And why does this place smell like Zoro after a workout?" Luffy pushed himself up and stared around at the mystery cave, as he called it before he walked on, muttering about how he hoped that the others didn't go to the city of gold without him. Luffy found himself a golden necklace among the broken stones and examined it gleefully before he threw it away, muttering about wanting lunch. Soon the Straw Hat's captain started growing impatient of all this walking and just wanted to get out of the mystery cave. He had finally reached a dead end, the back of the cave. Now Luffy was truly frustrated, saying that he had enough of this mystery cave and wanted out. He then came up with the idea of breaking right through. Backing up to the opposing side of the cave, Luffy transformed into a rhino and, lowering his head, charged. Luffy cried out his attack and slammed his horn to the wall. At first, nothing seemed to happen before everything began to shake around him as if during an earthquake. Everything trembled violently, but then a flood of water came out at the other end of the cave, and Luffy screamed in horror. The water flooded the tunnel and dragged Luffy away from where he stood. Eventually the shaking stopped and the water calmed, Luffy dragging himself out of shallow water, coughing and gasping for air. "Okay," Luffy muttered to himself as he caught his breath, "that was scary. What's with this lame cave anyhow? First there was an earthquake, then a flood of ocean clouds. I could have drowned," Luffy said, and he sounded real angry here as he began to scream and throw punch after punch to try and find a way out of this place, going from a whole range of animals with each punch from a gorilla all the way to a raccoon. The cave started acting up again, and Luffy was getting tossed around like he was in a tornado. It eventually got to a point that he didn't know which way was up or down, which way was the front of the cave, or the back. Luffy never got seriously hurt thanks to his insanely durable body, but it was plain to see from the look on his face that he wasn't enjoying this one bit. This went on for a while before things eventually slowed. Once that happened, Luffy began walking towards some voices. He recognized one of them right away as Nami's own voice. There was also the sounds of the old man's and a young child. Luffy walked on for only a few seconds before he found them. Nami, Gonfal, Pierre, and a little girl with a fur dress and cap were there staring at him. After a quick talk, Luffy was astonished to hear that this mystery cave was actually the stomach of that giant snake and he started to freak out. The little girl, named Isa, and Gonfal seemed stunned when Nami told him that he was actually the captain of their crew, especially after she gave Luffy a pounding after finding out that he was the reason the snake was going crazy and that he suggested that they could get out by finding its butthole. "Nami's scary," Isa whispered, moving a little bit away from her after seeing the shape that Luffy was in. "I know what you mean, child. She's meaner than the snake," Gonfal agreed in hushed tones.
The earthquake started up and they were falling back down the tunnel with their vision quickly fading until they were all lying in a pile of debris. Pushing a large boulder off them, Luffy muttered, "Okay, this mystery cave is getting really annoying."
I told you this isn't a cave, it's the snake's stomach. Nami's voice said. Luffy looked around for her and freaked out when he saw a skeleton that was enclosed similar to Nami's, and he thought that she was dead until she appeared behind him and knocked him on the head. Nami was dusting herself off and they heard Isa's shouts. They looked to see that Isa was beating her little fists against Gonfal's armored chest from where he caught her as they fell. Let me go, please, she cried fearfully. You're gonna squeeze me to death.
The weird old guy hadn't done her any harm. In fact, he was smiling down at her like how grandfather would to his granddaughter as he said sincerely, I'm glad to see you're unharmed.
Isa was no longer struggling to get back to her feet. She finally cried out for him to let go before she jumped back and away from him. But to their shock, she grabbed Gonfal's fallen lance and pointed it at his neck. Nami demanded to know what she was doing, telling Isa to stop it.
He is our enemy, Isa said firmly. He's the one responsible for ruthlessly taking away the Chandorian's homeland. So now, I'm gonna take his head.
As Nami tried to talk to Isa, the only person who didn't show any emotion was the Sky Knight. Gonfal didn't say anything as he looked to her very calmly, as if he had expected this to happen from the start.
I don't get it, Nami said sadly. How is taking the head of the Sky Knight gonna fix anything? He's not just a knight, Isa suddenly said loudly. He was the leader of the Scythians before Enri showed up. The Scythians were ones who drove us Chandorians out of our homes.
The Chandorians were driven out of their homes 400 years ago. Nami reminded her quickly, so there's no way he had anything to do with it. If taking my head would be enough to satisfy your people, I would gladly sacrifice it, Gonfal said, his eyes hidden by his helmet. Everyone, even Isa, seemed surprised by his words as he slowly sat up. His expression was oddly blank as he looked at her, not showing any signs of emotion except for sadness and regret. Unfortunately, he added grimly, just my head wouldn't be enough. The level of hostility between the Chandorians and the Scythians hasn't changed, and for good reason. Our ancestors took your homeland away. What a horrifying thing to go through. I don't think I'll ever find a way to apologize for that. Time alone will not heal this wound. Therefore I regret my helplessness in this situation, Gonfal continued regretfully. If at all possible, I would like to apologize to the Chandorians who have spent the last 400 years searching for their homes. I would like to apologize to them all, one by one. He slowly looked up to her and said, true sorrow in his tone, I am truly sorry. Isa stood there frozen, still holding up the lance as if she thought that the old man would suddenly attack. Her face now held confusion, and they knew that she didn't know what to think anymore. When she didn't say anything, Nami spoke up in a soft voice. Listen to him, she pleaded. He's been trying to make sure that everyone's been getting along. He wants the citizens to live peacefully in the sky, so you really should.
We will never be able to get along and live peacefully, Isa cried, not with bad guys. That's just it, Nami said firmly, as if Isa just proved her point. They're not bad. What's bad is when people can't coexist because they belong to different races. Isa sniffled a little at that as Nami added, right.
Isa just stood there, tears in her eyes. She looked like she didn't know what to believe anymore. But something in her seemed to snap as she screamed out, about to strike Gonfal, who sat there with his eyes closed, as if willing to accept whatever she did. Nami screamed at her to stop, but that was when Luffy stepped in. They had been so focused on Gonfal's words that they had almost forgot about him there. But he had stepped up, and stopped Isa from doing something that she was sure to regret by grabbing hold of the top of the lance. Nami sighed in relief as Isa's eyes snapped open and stared at Luffy. She looked furious as she screamed at him, demanding to know why he stopped her. Luffy didn't even look at her, never relaxing his grip on the weapon. He was apologizing, he said softly, probably not the best time to kill a man. Isa stared at him before she stared at the lance, her eyes wide as she slowly realized what she had just about done, and she began to cry. She fell to her knees, and it was clear to them all that she had no idea what to do anymore. Nami looked at her sadly, but very soon, the tunnel was moving again. However, unlike before, they felt themselves falling. They were hovering in midair as their feet left the ground and they could feel themselves as though they were going down in a submarine. Then they began falling, staring around and tried to figure out what else could possibly be happening.
But the others seemed to realize that this was their only chance to escape. Gonfal was back on Pierre as he called that now was their chance to get out of here.
Right, yeah, it's now or never, Nami agreed before she called to Luffy and Isa to grab hold of the waiver. However, Luffy clung onto the jet dial with Isa under his arm, so when Nami revved up the waiver, the force of the air being blown was easily strong enough to blow them right off. As they fell back with the two, before they lost sight of the old man and Nami, they heard Gonfal screaming out, man overboard. We can't leave them, Pierre go back, you have to save those two.
They were soon falling once again, rolling head over heels, bouncing around. After several more turbulent minutes everything calmed around them and the tunnel returned to its dark and quiet self. Luffy and Isa pulling themselves out of rubble. Wow, Luffy said, that was one crazy ride, and Betty say so myself, I think I want to go again. Isa was screaming at Luffy, are you stupid? Why in the world would you hold on the waiver as Jet? Sorry, he laughed. Everyone else managed to escape, she went on angrily, but we've been left behind because we're stupidity, it's all your fault.
Luffy just laughed, telling her not to worry. Get us out of here now, she screamed childishly, and like Nami before her, she hit Luffy when he suggested that they go out of the snake's butthole. They heard a familiar call coming from one end of the tunnel and they looked up to see Pierre was heading towards them. Look, it's the horse, Luffy said in mild surprise. That's a bird, Isa screamed at him. Pierre landed and held up his wing in a salute. Luffy asked, you telling us to get on your back? It let out a squawk, as if confirming his words. When Pierre transformed in front of them, Isa let out a cry of surprise. How in the world did he do that?
Luffy just chuckled as he also transformed into a Pegasus, though his form was pure black and had his signature clothes on as well. As soon as she saw it, Isa screamed even louder. You're a freak too, she shrieked, her eyes popping out of her head. Luffy told her about how he ate a devil fruit and flapped his wings to show her. Freaks, she screamed, the both of you were freaks of nature.
Luffy said happily, no, I'm a pirate. He then reached out with his muzzle and grabbed the back of her shirt so that he could pull her up on Pierre's back. She looked freaked out and seemed too stunned to speak. Better hold on tight, okay? He asked as she jerked her head, afraid to say anything as Luffy looked forward. Now, I think it's time we made our escape. And soon they were running, flying along the tunnel. Let's go horse, full speed ahead and don't stop until you see the sky. Luffy laughed as Isa clung on desperately. However, outside the snake, it was burned to a crisp and its jaw suddenly fell open so that three figures fell out of it. Two Pegasus and one screaming human girl.
Luffy landed on the ground, and Pierre had caught Isa as it fell on the hard stone. Isa stared around at the ground in amazement. They were standing among ruins of breathtaking buildings, though covered up in moss and vines. It was still a gorgeous city to see, but Luffy only seemed interested in the fact that they had finally escaped. With a scream of joy, he took off running in human form, heading up the stairs with a pyramid-like structure that resembled the altar, with Isa right behind him, yelling for him to wait up for her.
But he didn't listen as they followed him up the stairs, and when they got to the top he screamed out at the top of his lungs, we're free. We made it out. He finally looked around and added eagerly, where are we? What are these old buildings? Grinning a mile wide he said, this looks like the place where that golden bell's supposed to be.
Isa looked around in amazement as well. What is this place? She whispered, wait, could this be our homeland? Your homeland, Luffy repeated happily. Hey, not bad, but where'd that big hole come from? At his words, she looked up to see that there was a large crater not too far away from them. Luffy squinted his eyes sharply, as if trying to make something out. The smile quickly faded from his face and was replaced with a serious, almost threatening expression. Luffy's eyes slowly widened in horror and he jumped down, running towards the hole as if the devil himself was right on his heels.
Isa yelled for him to wait, turned back to the stone steps behind her and ran down them to catch up. No one said anything until they finally reached the hole. What they saw caused them to gasp in horror. There they were, Gonfall, Zoro, Wiper, Robin, and Chopper were all laying there on the ground and each one of them was badly hurt. While Chopper looked as if had been slashed to bits, the others were all burnt black and lay there on the charred ground.
Luffy ran to Zoro first, picking him up by his shoulders and gave him a shake. Hey Zoro, he said, his voice full of worry. What's wrong with you? Come on, say something. His eyes were wide in anger and panic. How could this have happened to you? How could any of this happen with you here?
Wiper was able to fight one-on-one with Luffy, and he was now laying at the bottom of the burnt crater. Out of everyone here, he probably was in the worst shape, burnt so black that his face was almost unrecognizable. The others, Zoro, Robin, and Gonfall were each strong, but in the end they were all no match for whoever or whatever did this. This was proof of how dangerous that Eneru truly was. As Luffy tried desperately to wake Zoro up, Pierre and Isa also arrived. Pierre squawked in horror as he ran to Gonfall, also trying to get some kind of response out of him. Luffy was staring around at the others, asking where Nami was when Isa's cry called them. She had jumped down to the bottom of the hole, screaming Wiper's name and begging that he'd wake up. As she cried, Luffy gently set Zoro back down and went over to the edge of the hole to see her sobbing over Wiper's broken form, his own blood seeping into the ground.
Luffy spoke up. Was it the guy who was really strong, but even he fell in this fight? Who could possibly have done all this?
Isa turned, tears in her eyes as she screamed. It was Eneru. She tried to climb out of the hole again, but she ended up sliding back to the bottom until Luffy grew out his chimera tail and used it to pull her out. He's the only one who could do something like this, she whispered in a croak. Eneru, huh? Luffy asked as he set her in front of him and knelt down to her eye level. That god guy. She nodded. My mantra didn't work at all, she said, the whole time we were in the snake. So I have no idea what happened here, but I do know it was Eneru who did this. As they talked, they heard a slight groan and they looked up to see that Robin was moving very slightly. Luffy jumped up and ran over to her. He flung himself down to her side as she managed to croak out in a weak whisper, our navigator, she went with him. Luffy's eyes widened as he gently turned her over and held her head in his arms. Just hang in there, he said in a soft tone, it'll be okay. You're saying that Nami was taken away from here by that god guy. Where?
I don't know, she croaked back. She seemed barely able to get her words out, but desperate to do so. So looking as if every word was painful to say, she managed to say, listen carefully, if we don't do something soon, Skypia will disappear. What? Luffy asked. It'll disappear. Isa gave a sharp intake of breath. My homeland will be completely gone.
Robin struggled for breath, trying to warn them of what Eneru was planning. She looked to Isa with glazed eyes. Everything will fall, she said in hardly more than a whisper as Isa looked as if she had been slapped in the face. He said this nation in the sky was unnatural. He said he'd send it crashing to the ground. Eneru is definitely going after the Golden Bell, Luffy stated firmly and Isa blinked, as if she forgot that he was here. He won't destroy this place until he's found it. Yes, Robin answered him, and you have to stop him. But you must hurry because there isn't much time left. You can't let Eneru find that bell.
Isa stood tall, seemingly coming to a choice. Don't worry, she said firmly. I know where they are. There are only two voices left on his island. It has to be Nami and Eneru. Luffy looked at her, his face deadly serious, and that was when they all knew that Luffy set his sights on Eneru. He was going to take this guy out for what he had done here even if he killed him. Isa, he said as he gently lay Robin's head back down on the ground. I need you to take me to them right now. She sniffled a little before she nodded her head. Luffy nodded back before he looked down at Robin. Don't worry, he reassured her as she seemed to be drifting back off to sleep. I'll take care of this god guy. He's going to pay for all this. Once I beat him, I'll come back here for you guys. He then stood up tall as he added, just stay alive for me until then.
And he waited around long enough for Isa to climb onto Pierre's back when he turned back into his horse form. Luffy then took off running in his own horse form, all three of them having fierce, determined looks on their faces. They knew the risks that they were facing, but they were willing to do just about anything to put a stop to this madman before it took everything away from them.
Thankfully, they didn't have to go too far away from them as they ran through the abandoned city. Isa continued to call out directions, and after only a short time, Luffy asked if she was sure they were heading the right way.
Yes, we're almost there, she yelled, surety in her tone. I'm sure this is the right way. Good, Luffy yelled as he kept going, but then he saw Isa's eyes widen a little as she looked to their left. That's it, Luffy, she called, pointing wildly in that same direction, and when they looked they could see a cave in the side of the rock face. That hole to your left, over there, that's it. Then that's where we're going, Luffy declared, and with an extra burst of speed they went running towards the hole. It only took them a few minutes to reach it and bolted down at this dark tunnel. They ended up bursting through into a large room. What they saw made some of them gasp. A ship, one larger than a fleet of battleships put together. The ship was made of solid wood, with lines of oars one either side of it along with multiple rotors and propellers, but what really got their attention was the golden face on top of the ship. Suddenly, a figure was standing on the edge of the ship and was glaring down at them. He was tall and muscular and dressed in a very luxurious manner. He was in loose, orange pants with a black pattern on them, and around his waist there was a blue, flowing sash, holding up a light blue veil. He also had golden bracelets on his arms and legs with diamond-shaped gold earrings at the end of his extra long ears that stretched all the way to his chest, and two little gold rings around his bigger toes. In his hands he was holding a long golden staff, and he was pointing it angrily down at him as he growled, how aggravating. There's nothing I hate more than when my predictions turn out wrong.
Luffy stepped forward and took a deep breath. He then screamed out so loud that the whole cave seemed to shake. Hey, are you willing to call Eneru? At the sound of his voice, Nami suddenly appeared at the edge, tears in her eyes as she cried out in relief. Why. Luffy's eyes were narrow and dangerous as he hissed quietly, but still loud enough for them all to hear, when you mess with friends of mine, then you mess with me. Those fools were your friends. Eneru snarled down at him. You stay right there, Luffy yelled. I'm coming up there to kick your teeth in. Mind your tongue, mortal, Eneru called. You're speaking to God. What makes you God anyway? Luffy demanded. Behind him Isa and Pierre were hiding in the doorway, looking nervously from Luffy to Eneru. He's deliberately picking a fight with Eneru, Isa whispered, be careful Luffy. Wait Luffy. Nami called down in warning. Watch out for, but she shut up at once when Eneru looked at her. Then Eneru laughed. I can hear it now, the angels partying, he said. The citizens must have learned of Thepia's fate. He laughed again. I wonder how far they can run before the ground gives out beneath them. I said, what makes you God anyway? Luffy screamed up and Eneru lost his smirk. Eneru's smile had been replaced with a sour look as Luffy started running up one of the oars, using his crooked legs to launch himself to the upper part of the arc. Eneru looked slightly surprised by seeing his legs change and he muttered, I see, you're no ordinary human. Still, you're a Mirror's own type. You can't beat me. Then Eneru caught his hand with lightning. Nothing that lives can stand against me. Luffy hurled himself at him as Eneru answered, that's why, I'm God. And he hit Luffy directly with an electrical attack. The blast shook the whole arc, the walls of the cave rattled brutally, and the spectators freaked out, thinking for sure that Luffy was going to be burned to a crisp. But when the attack ended and the smoke created for it faded, Luffy was nowhere to be found. Not even a pile of ash was where he was. Eneru looked surprised for only a moment. I'm surprised, all that bravado and he gets blown away so not even dust remains. How disappointing, he said sulkily as he started to turn away. Suddenly though, Eneru was rocketed back and slammed into the wall of the ark with enough force to shake the entire ship. Blinking both the stars and blood out of his eyes, the self-proclaimed god looked up to see what on earth just hit him. There, standing before him and beside a stunned Nami, was a creature he'd never seen before. It looked somewhat like a wolf, but its fur was electro blue and it had two bull horns on its head with what looked to be arcs of electricity running along its body. However, the creature wore a strikingly familiar straw hat strapped around his neck.
Luffy, Nami asked hesitantly. Turning, the transformed Luffy gave Nami a grin only those of the canine family can give. Hey Nami, check it out. I haven't really given my other mythical forms a workout before, but it looks like the Raiju form paid off.
Oh Raiju, what in the world is that? Enru coughed as he pulled himself up. Luffy looked all too happy to explain. Well, when I was a kid I read about a bunch of different animals, both real and mythical, and even though I didn't get most of what the books were saying, one said Raiju is a wolf that can control lightning, so I figured it'd be great to use against a lightning creep like you. Wait, Nami asked abruptly. You read? Cue massive face vault. Never mind. How do you know he uses lightning, Luffy? I wasn't able to warn you in time. Luffy's grin turned bigger till he represented more of a Cheshire cat than lightning wolf. Back when he tried to roast Cronus, I was able to get a good feel for his power. Crazy thing about most animals, they know when lightning is about to strike. What nonsense, the lightning man's soft. As a mere mortal who's more beast than man could ever stand up to the power of a god. I'll prove it was just a fluke. With that, Enru sent an attack of 60 million volts, in the shape of a dragon to Luffy this time. This time there was no doubt that he hit Luffy, however, when cleared, he was still standing tall. Now looking baffled, Enru vanished so suddenly that it looked as though he disappeared, but it was as if he teleported right to Luffy, his hand right on Luffy's forehead as he used an attack of 100 million volts this time, but Luffy wasn't even budging, his body now almost glowing with the electricity flying around him. Luffy glared at Enru. I've had enough of you, he snarled, get off. And here, Luffy practically threw Enru off him as Nami, along with Ice and Pierre still on the ground, were grabbing at him. Enru was sent back, forcing to do several backflips before he was able to land and get his balance straight. Luffy was still standing where he was, looking ready to fight, but everyone nearly burst out laughing with the look on Enru's face. There was no trace of smugness or arrogance there. His expression was priceless. His eyes were bulging out of his head, his jaw was wide open, a sweat and even snot was falling from his nose as he gabbed at Luffy. With a battle cry, Luffy charged as Enru shook his head to snap himself out of it, but then the rampaging Raiju, tried saying that 10 times fast, rammed his horned head so hard in his stomach that blood and spit burst from Enru's mouth and his eyes were rolling back. Incredible, Nami whispered, as her own eyes widened, realizing what it meant. Her voice now filled with renewed hope. She said firmly, go Luffy, stop him. Enru slowly got up, staring at Luffy before he jumped back, standing on the railing. You, he gasped, you're no mere mortal, what are you? Me, Luffy asked coldly. I'm Luffy, a pirate and a Chimera man. What? Enru asked, looking confused. Chimera. With a crackle of lightning surrounding his own body, Luffy ran forward with his fangs bared. That lightning of yours? He yelled, raising his fist up, won't work on me. Enru closed his eyes and muttered a single word under his breath, mantra. So when Luffy's lightning-covered jaw went to hamstring him, all Enru did was sidestep and Luffy was sent flying by his own attack. Luffy glared back as he gathered lightning in between his horns and shot at the man. But that was when Enru disappeared once again, before appearing a little farther back near where Nami was standing and shot at him claws bared, but he disappeared again and Nami was forced to duck to avoid getting hit. Nami didn't seem to care about that, staring in horror as she gasped out, I don't believe it, he really can predict Luffy's moves. Enru began to beat down against Luffy at that moment. However, while Luffy couldn't quite predict the man's moves, he had the instincts and speed to easily dodge the man's strikes. Don't push your luck, Enru sneered at him as Luffy choked. Lightning can cause far more than electric shocks, but I don't have to tell you that, Chimera man, you'll find out the hard way. Luffy then grabbed a hold of the golden rod with his jaw and he smirked at Enru. You'll have to do better than that, he yelled as he snapped the top half of the spear off with his sharp teeth. Enru had a moment to look stunned before he disappeared again as Luffy swiped at him with a claw that became hand-shaped, Luffy shifting into a towering hybrid form. I see, Luffy muttered to himself in annoyance, he's got that weird ability that lets him predict my moves, crap. Lightning won't work, Enru muttered thoughtfully to himself as he studied the broken half of his spear. Blows won't work, just what is his mortal? He thought it over for a moment. Now hold on, even though he can block lightning and fend off blunt blows, he's still made of flesh and blood. Then Enru seemed to have a burst of inspiration, and he seemed to turn the rest of his staff into molten pellets of gold, held up by his lightning powers. Think of it as lightning in solid form. He cried as he fired the pellets like bullets from a railgun out at him, but this time Luffy was forced to avoid it. He dodged a near invisible attack, getting only a slight scratch along the way as he used his incredible leg strength and managed to jump up the upper part of the golden face, glaring down at Enru who laughed, now sounding cocky again. At the thought, you can't dodge what you can't see. Yeah, Luffy admitted as Nami screamed at him not to tell him that. Just then, Luffy jumped down, ready to use his paw-like fists to pummel Enru, but then Enru disappeared before he could finish speaking the attack. Stuck in midair, Luffy was staring around wildly, trying to figure out where he went, but then Ice's voice called, Luffy, behind you. They all turned at her words and what they saw shocked them all. In the golden face, they could see the god moving through it as if he was swinging up through gold, like some kind of ghost. He can move right through gold, Nami screamed as he jumped out, more golden bullets in hand as he went for Luffy. For a horrible moment it looked that Luffy had been shot as golden blood dripped to the ground, but it was revealed that Luffy, using the lightning-fast reflexes this form granted him, was able to catch the bullets purely on instinct. Steam was building up from his hands as he fought back screams. Enru laughed. You may be immune to lightning, but not to electrical heat it seems. But he got overconfident once again. For Luffy saw his opening, he brought his clawed foot up and used a sharp kick to send Enru smashing down to the deck. Since they were in midair, the jerk wasn't able to move and went crashing right through the thick wood.
Enru burst back through the wood again, screaming out insults, his eyes full of anger. He was done playing around. Now Luffy tried to use his claws coated in lightning to overcome Enru's mantra. However, Enru had been able to find his arms before they hit and catch his hands, using his momentum to swing him down so that he crashed into the deck as well.
Enru pulled himself out of wreckage. No matter how big you are, you're no match for the power of God. He snarled as he walked calmly over to where he threw Luffy, with Nami calling to him worriedly from her hiding place. Sightseeing on Sky Island, Enru said as he reshaped his baton in the form of a trident and began to twirl his weapon around like a baton. You Blue Sea people sure picked a bad time to visit. I am this land's god. I can do anything my will desires, Enru proclaimed as he looked up to a hole in the ceiling. I've long dreamed of creating an ideal world. This dream will become reality and I won't let anyone stand in my way, Enru finished, least of all some wealth from the Blue Sea world. He then turned to climb the steps, where there sat a golden throne just underneath the face. Now where were we? He asked himself, as if he had just been interrupted in the middle of thought. Ah yes, how could I forget? We were going to watch this land die. Enru laughed the annoying laugh that made anyone angry. Standing in front of the throne, his hands went to two large, golden orbs that were on either of him and used his powers to surge electricity through them. Slowly, very slowly, the propellers had started to turn and then spin. With a loud grinding noise, the giant wooden beast beneath them began to move and the ship was actually being lifted off the ground. They were slowly being lifted off the ground and heading up the hole above them. This was actual flying. Iso was screaming in terror from the ground as Luffy pulled himself out of rubble that was smashed right through, back in his human form. But Enru hardly noticed him as he screamed out at the top of his lungs, his eyes wide with insanity. Behold, Maxim, the ark that shall take me to endless VARTH, to the sacred land without end I desire. Enru screamed at the top of his lungs, rise Maxim, rise. And as if his ship heard his words, they began to rise up and began to hover in the air. Nami seemed close to freaking out as she looked around wildly.
No, 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 this is bad. Luffy, hurry up and stop Eneru. She screamed before she realized what she was saying as giant bits of rock fell around them. They had just hit the ceiling and the whole ship was now trying to force itself through. But wait a minute, Nami cried out, this arc is powered by Eneru, so if he's defeated it'll crash with us on it. But if he's not, then Sky Island's gonna be destroyed. And if we stay here and do nothing, then we'll be taken to some land far away with Eneru. She ranted on before she looked to Luffy. Oh, I don't like our options. No matter what we choose, we still lose. The ark was stuck in the earth, struggling to get free as Nami demanded to know what they were going to do, telling him how scared she was. Luffy stood up, holding onto his hat tightly for a moment before he causally tossed it over to her, and it landed perfectly on her head. Tilting it back so that she could see him, his expression was still composed.
Don't be, he said in that calm voice that he only got when things were deadly serious. Calm down. Nami took the hat off and cried out, calm down, but how? You sail with the crew of the future king of the pirates. Luffy answered her as he finally turned so that he could see his face. There wasn't a trace of fear there as he said with no hesitation in his voice, so wipe that frown off, right?
Nami still looked afraid, but his words seemed to calm her down slightly as Luffy slowly walked up so that he was standing right in front of Eneru, clearly ready for another round. Eneru repeated, King of the Pirates. Now looking curiously, he walked away from the throne, standing right in front of Luffy as well as he asked, and what domain does he lord over?
The king of the seas, Luffy declared proudly, the greatest king of all.
Sunlight suddenly washed onto the dark wood as they neared closer to the bright blue sky. Eneru smirked as he said, so you say, but we'll soon learn if that's true, won't we? As the two sized each other up, the top of the ship managed to make it through the earth, and the rest was soon following through. Eneru laughed once more, and they were all growing sick of hearing it. But as he laughed, Eneru used the arc maxim to start a process that he called Death Paella to form massive thunderclouds. Just then, out of a chimney on the top of the ark's head, black clouds began to billow out, and in a matter of seconds, the darkness began to cover the sky around them. Are those? Nami whispered, but even though it came out as a question, she already knew what they were. She of all people would recognize what they were. At her words, Eneru smirked. That's right, he said, thunderclouds. Using my energy, Death Paella forces extremely turbulent currents together that produces those lovely thunderclouds billowing out right now.
But then Eneru was bragging once again as he headed back to the throne.
Telling them that inside the dark clouds, energy will continue to build until it's reached its peak. Once it was ready to pop, they'll start to release thunderbolts so powerful that they'll destroy everything. Nami stared at him with wide eyes as Eneru decided to show them a demonstration. Holding up just a finger, he began to charge a bolt of energy to shoot at the clouds above them. But before he could fire, he was once again struck before he knew what hit him, throwing him back into his throne and causing it to crack from the pressure. Luffy stood in his new form. He now had the appearance of what could only be described as a cross between a deer and a giraffe, a Kirin man. Yelling out in fury with flames flickering out of his mouth, he demanded to know, so being a god, makes it okay to destroy everything. Of course, Eneru said conceitedly as he once again picked himself up, everything here is mine for the taking. He then smirked before it disappeared, as he went on, their land, their lives, speaking of which I'll continue celebrating by taking yours. That was when he tried to attack with his trident. Luffy was able to almost spin over it and kicked out with a hooked foot which Eneru blocked it. Now looking annoyed, he jabbed the trident once again, which Luffy had to force it away with his foot, but the heat in it no longer seemed to bother him as Kirin controls both lightning and fire. Back and forth, Luffy had been forced to dodge as Eneru continued to try and stab him. At one point, Luffy was forced to grab hold of it to keep it from skewering him. The two seemed to struggle for a bit before Luffy opened his mouth and spewed out what looked like fire-coated lightning too. However, Eneru was able to tilt his head out of the way in time by using his mantra to predict the move. Crap, how can I attack him if he keeps predicting my moves? Luffy mumbled to himself before a light bulb went off in his head. Throwing Eneru away from him, Luffy seemed to concentrate for a moment before he mumbled out, Kirin, judgment. With that, Luffy seemed to disappear.
As Nami was screaming at Luffy not to run away, Eneru looked around in confusion before his eyes seemed widen in realization.
Before he could move, however, a strong blow caught him in the chin and sent him crashing to the ceiling. Before he could land, another blow blew him to the right, then left, up, then down, until he looked like a human-sized pinball being beaten from all sides. After several moments of this, Eneru finally fell to the ground with a dazed look in his eyes as Luffy finally reappeared, breathing heavily. Don't stop whatever it was you were doing, Nami screamed at him. That took more out of me than I thought it would, Luffy panted as he shrunk down to human form. I see, Eneru muttered as he shakily stood up looking worse for wear but still capable of continuing. By focusing all the electricity in the air to your muscles, you were able to exceed the speeds of even my lightning, thus making it impossible for me to dodge. However, he regained his cocky smirk as he started moving forward again, trident raised, it looks as though that move took out all you had. A valiant effort, but now I'll kill you in one B. Before Eneru could continue his rant, Luffy was able to surge forward and deliver a powerful punch to his stomach. The arrogant man was so surprised by the action, his mantra was thrown off and he was unable to predict the move. He sent Eneru crashing into the side of the golden face, but at that moment the arc finally broke free of the ground and rose up into the air, with rubble falling everywhere, the trees breaking apart as they shot up.
It worked, Nami gasped out as she beamed at Luffy. You did it, Eneru's down, but then she realized that they were still flying, but wait, the ship's taking off. They heard a loud slapping sound and they looked up to see that Eneru was starting to get up to his feet. Nami looked ready to start crying as she backed away. With blood dripping from his face, he hissed, you fools, is that the best you can do? He demanded before he looked at Luffy with a dark look in his eyes. Make no mistake, boy, he snarled, as he gasped for breath, when you're gone, the world will be mine. And once again, Eneru went on started to get back to his feet, everyone will fear me, worship me, and revere me. I am all powerful, in this world, filth like you must learn the only truth. By my hand, nothing is ever impossible, for I am the almighty god. The ship was now skimming over the tops of the trees. The dark cloud that the ship was creating was growing bigger and darker with every second. Skypia will be destroyed, the angels' lives finished, Eneru went on in a determined voice. But they could hear the slight anxiety in his tone. No one can stop me, his hand was suddenly covered with electricity, not even you. Luffy realized that he was trying something and he charged taking on his chimera form, ready to finally end this fight while ignoring his prior exhaustion, wanna bet. The golden wall, Nami gasped as Eneru placed his hand to the gold behind him and melted it like butter, swirling it around him until he was able to form a giant golden ball that Luffy tried to punch through. The gold closed around Luffy's arm and he screamed in agony as he fell, screaming that it burned. Luffy was struggling to get it off, but the gold had already cooled into a large ball, they could see where his arm was, it was burning and turning red as steam wafted out. Eneru started to mock Luffy, saying that he now evened the odds, that he had taken the fight right out of him. Even changing back to human form didn't do anything, as the gold had hardened right against his skin. Luffy was still struggling to get the ball off as Eneru wiped some blood from his face. You see, I'm honestly not sure I can take another hit from you. He walked over to him, therefore, I think it's best if we sever ties. But in honor of the spirited efforts you put forth, he put his foot on the golden ball and said, take this golden barbule as a parting gift. Eneru kicked the ball over the side of the ship, and now Luffy was struggling to stay upright. But the weight of the ball was steadily forcing him back as he held on desperately. Nami was crying out Luffy's name frantically as Eneru's face was self-assured that this threat was going to be gone once and for all. His lips curled into a deadly smirk as he said, this world will be mine again.
Just as it was before, and not a soul in the world can defeat me.
Not a soul in the world, Luffy repeated with a harsh laugh, and Enru's smirk disappeared. You're an idiot, he said firmly. Even if I can't defeat you, his face smirked. Back in the blue sea, there are 10 more fighters who can put you in your place. Someone like you could never, Luffy began, but he didn't get a chance to finish for Enru teleported to him, and with him in this state, there was nothing that Luffy could do to protect himself. You talk too much, boy, he said, back to sounding arrogant, despite the damage that Luffy had done to him. He jabbed his staff to wood that Luffy was holding on to and it broke apart. Now fall with Sky Island. The side of the arc crumbled, but Luffy was able to scream out one last bat before he fell, you won't win. But the weight of the goal was finally too much for him as he fell, Nami's voice screaming in their ears. Enru, Luffy screamed as he fell, fight me, you coward.
As Luffy fell, Isa and Pierre, in his Pegasus form, appeared and were flying towards him, with Isa screaming that they were going to save him. But Nami's voice called out in warning, Isa, Pierre, he's gonna shoot you. Luffy's voice screamed out in rage, and the last thing that they saw was Enru creating the pillar of destruction and fired it.
Later, the group found their way back in the cave that they had been in before. However, most of it had been destroyed with the arc had broken free. Isa was on top of Pierre, trying to wake him up. Horsey bird, she cried, Horsey bird, I'm sorry, you were trying to protect me. But as she kept shaking him, they heard Luffy's voice calling out Isa's name through wreckage. They followed away and they soon found Luffy's head stuck in the ground and the golden ball still stuck on his arm. How did you land like that? Isa cried when she found him.
Instead of waiting for an answer, Isa went to Luffy's side and helped to pull his head free from the ground. Once his head popped out, he tried to get back up, but was struggling underneath the weight of the ball as he raised it up over his head. He had been able to break stone and crush trees with his bare hands, so seeing him struggling for breath as he tried to pull it off showed just how heavy it was. All right, he said, before he realized that he was truly stuck. Crap, I can't get this golden ball off.
Hey, watch your mouth, Isa snapped at him as he looked up, not seeing a trace of the ship. Gritting his teeth in frustration, Luffy made up his mind. Let's just get back to that beanstalk where Robin was. He gasped to her, I won't let Enru get away with this.
Isa nodded as she went back to Pierre and Luffy looked up to the sky once again. Nice try, jerk, he snarled, but it takes a lot more than that to stop me. Your arc's toast, and I know just where to find you. Luffy, Isa, and Pierre were running behind them, with Luffy being forced to drag the gold ball behind him as Isa was dragging Pierre by his beak. Due to the awkward state of his limb, Luffy couldn't simply fly up as he'd be too weighed down to take off. The ball was so heavy that Luffy was often sent smashing straight into buildings with Isa screaming at him to stop destroying her homeland, pointing to where Giant Jack was. Luffy wound up pulling himself back out of a broken building, only for the ball to drag him back and smash into another wall. Luffy heaved himself out of the wall and back down the path. With only minimal damage done to the city, they were finally able to make it back to the base of Giant Jack, staring around when they got back to the giant hole where the others were. But, to their surprise, when they arrived, they discovered that Robin and the boys were gone. Aw man, Robin and the others are gone, Luffy said, glancing around worriedly, and Zoro and Chopper. And Wiper and Gonfall, Isa added miserably, who had just caught up with him, still holding on to Pierre's beak. Well, where the heck did everybody go? Luffy asked anxiously, and Isa lowered her head slightly so that they couldn't see her eyes that were shadowed over by her hat. She muttered that they must have already climbed up the beanstalk already. Luffy looked up at it and nodded, agreeing that Robin must have helped them and that they should go as well. He turned and began to head towards the vine as well, at least until they all noticed that Isa had moved from where she stood at the hole. She was shaking very slightly as Luffy called to her. Hey, Luffy, she asked in a choked up voice, and when he asked her what was wrong, she looked at him, tears falling from her eyes, truly looking scared. She asked, will the Sky Islands really be destroyed? Luffy just looked at her tears, his face betraying no emotion before he walked over to her and hauled her and Pierre onto his back. Luffy, she asked worriedly as he turned back to the beanstalk. Luffy just looked on with a determination shining in his eyes. I won't, he began with no trace of doubt in his mind, let that happen. Isa's eyes widened at that as he took a deep breath, and as he ran on, they heard him screaming out, I won't let Enru get away with this. He made it to the foot of the vine and with a deep breath, Luffy began to climb right up it. The first thing they saw was that the blue sky was now being blocked by the black clouds. They watched as Isa looked around and she screamed at Luffy to stop and look. He did as she said and spotted Robin standing on her feet, with the others lying around her feet. She looked a great deal better than she had been before, but still not fully healed as Luffy got her attention, calling her name before he threw Isa and Pierre at her. As Luffy threw the two at her, Robin created a kind of net with her powers to catch them. After they were safe on the ground, Isa screamed at seeing Robin's powers before Robin looked back up at Luffy, asking what he had on his arm. Robin, he called, the golden bell's at the top of this vine, right? And Enru's trying to get his hands on it, isn't he?
That's right, she called back knowingly, if Grand Belfry exists, then it would be there, but he's already.
But Luffy didn't stick around, that was all he needed to hear as he began to climb, ignoring Robin's calls. Up and up he ran up the vine, shouting out, you better not think for a second I'm gonna let you get away with this, Enru. I'll never let you have the golden bell.
The thick thundercloud was covering the entire sky by this point and it was looking more dangerous with every second.
Luffy finally burst through a second level of island clouds, and he found himself among the wreckage of burnt buildings and scorch marks that they recognized at once as Enru's work. Luffy had stopped to catch his breath. Lugging that ball around was clearly taking a toll on his stamina. But that wasn't stopping him as he tried to go straight up the rest of the vine. But Enru must have spotted him, for more bolts of lightning were suddenly sent flying down at him. And Luffy was currently conserving his strength to fight Enru again, so he had to avoid transforming at the moment. Thankfully, Luffy was able to avoid it. However, Enru's attack ended up breaking off the very top of the plant, causing half the plant to crumble and fall. Luffy managed to save himself by grabbing onto the stem of a leaf and held on tightly. But things were getting worse all around him. From what he could see in the distance, more lightning was falling around Angel Island like rain, and the clouds seemed to pour directly above the landmass as if the sun could be seen. You didn't need to be a genius to know that was bad. But Luffy was still going. Unable to pull himself up, he was moving up and down to try and get the ball to act like a yo-yo, to be able to use the force to swing him back up to the clouds above him. It was rather clever, and by the time the weight finally broke off the giant leaf, the force truly did send him rocketing back up and he landed with a crash on the soft clouds. Luffy began to pull himself up. Just then, Nami came bursting out of the clouds as well and ended up crashing on top of him. She looked down in surprise to see Luffy laying there. Luffy's squashed face turned around to look at her in great surprise. What are you doing here, Nami? I haven't rescued you yet. I came to rescue you, you dolt, she said loudly. Sanji and Usopp saved me so I was safe down below this whole time. Really, you were, that's great, I was worried, he said with a smile. More importantly, she muttered, looking ready to drag him from here if that's what it took. But before she could finish saying anything, they heard a deep rumble echoing through the air around them and suddenly they were all looking around quickly, trying to make out where it was coming and just what was it. The thunderclouds, Nami said seriously, they're changing shape. And there it was, through the clouds came another, a pitch black thundercloud, as round as a ball and one so large that it was easily as big, if not bigger, than the entire Angel Island. It was hovering right over said island and was shooting off lightning around it. I've got a bad feeling about this, Nami cried out. That ball over there is a massive thunderhead, and it's bursting at the seams with hurricane winds and deadly lightning bolts. None of them was able to say anything else as they could only watch on. And that was when the black sphere fell from the sky. It seemed to take an age to fall.
But what happened next happened so quickly that it was as if they were dreaming. The black cloud landed on the top of the island and the explosion was so great that everything was bathed in blinding light. Though it was miles away, they could still feel the wind. The shockwave that had been created almost blew them back.
The sound was deafening and the entire sky was filled with black smoke. They watched in horror as the smoke began to clear and the lightning continued to fall, but when it did, they were left with a devastating sight.
Where Angel Island once stood was now nothing but a large black hole. The entire island had been completely obliterated. Finally, having enough of this, Nami was screaming to Luffy to hurry and get on the waiver so that they could get back to Mary and escape. But Luffy had his back turned to them all as she continued to plead. Without looking at her, he merely said 2 words, "I can't."
Nami was demanding to know why he couldn't leave when there was nothing stopping them. "I don't have to save you anymore," he said, "but I still have some unfinished business."
Unfinished business? What's left to do here? She screamed at him. Are you trying to get back at Enru? That golden bell is somewhere up there in the sky. He yelled back as he glared above them once again. Nami stared at him. You're after the bell? She asked before she got angry, and then she began to yell at him. Luffy, your life is more important than gold. Nami went on loudly. Look at that. Even if lightning doesn't hurt you, he can still destroy you 1,000 other ways. If it fooled one, you've got a load of it on her arm. So give up the bell, Luffy, for your own sake. I won't die, he said firmly, and she was now looking frustrated, looking ready to argue, but he shouted over her. You saw it right? Nami looked startled as she asked what he was talking about. He finally turned to look at her and asked, the City of Gold. You know for a fact that it exists, right? She looked at him as he went on loudly. Then it wasn't a lie. Old-timer's ancestor. He wasn't a liar. I have to let Old-timer and the others down below know that the City of Gold is up in the sky.
Nami stared at him as he explained, if I ring that bell, then they should be able to hear it. Otherwise, Old-timer and his monkey pals will keep searching the ocean floor until the day they die. Luffy, Nami said softly, but there was understanding in her voice. She fully understood why Luffy was doing what he was doing, and there was now no point in trying to stop him now. Enru won't take the golden bell, Luffy declared. The sound from a bell that huge will be heard far and wide by people everywhere. So I'm not stopping until I heard the sounds of the golden bell. With that, he began climbing again. Soon though, Luffy was gasping for air, glaring up at the beanstalk with the waiver right next to him as Nami was leaning dangerously over the side of the clouds to look below them. Nami ran over to the leaf the size of a rowboat that Luffy broke off before. She heaved it up a little ways and grabbed a piece of charred wood from one of the destroyed buildings and quickly wrote something on it. However, another Rego had started to form above them, and this one was even bigger than the last. It's even bigger than his last one. Luffy yelled up furiously, that jerk.
Now that he's got his grubby hands on the golden bell, he has no more use for Stepia, Nami declared.
She said angrily, that creep's pretty easy to figure out. She then looked to Luffy and yelled at him, as if it was his fault that he wasn't taking care of Enru already. Well, don't just stand there, Luffy. We can't let him get away with this. Luffy looked to her in surprise and asked her what happened to her plan on escaping. She looked away as she said, yeah well, I can't leave now with what's at stake. Besides, you want to ring that golden bell right? I gotta, for Old-timer, Luffy decided. Nami knelt at the waiver, quickly checking it before she told him that he can't drive the waiver with his arm like that. But she could drive it and she'd get them up there. But as she stood back up, she gave him a deadly serious look before she said, listen, you gotta promise me you'll get us out of this mess in one piece, okay? Yeah, you got it, and thanks, Luffy said firmly as they both looked up at the beanstalk. Neither one said anything as they stood there, simply waiting. The stalk would quiver and sometimes shake. Once they could feel it sliding off and they thought for sure that it was falling, but then it stopped. Finally, the stalk was falling once more and they knew that it wasn't going to stop falling this time. Nami revved the waiver up. This is it, she cried. Get on, Luffy. He got on behind her, gripping her by the waist as he directed. Gun it, go. Nami smirked at the order. I should mention, I've never revved this waiver's jet dial up to maximum power before. I was a little scared to see how fast it would go. I guess we're about to find out if it'll be too strong for me to control, huh? Go for it, Nami, Luffy said, a trace of a grin on his own face as she revved it up. And like a shot they were off. Nami screamed at him to hang on tight as they hit the beanstalk and soon they were watching them ride up the side of the plant as it began to fall. Enru noticed them and began to shoot more shots of energy at him, but Luffy taunted him, that shot was pathetic. Nami figured out what Enru was trying to do as the lightning continued to fall. That creep, he's trying to destroy the base of the beanstalk. Luffy screamed at her to do something, but there was nothing they could do at this point. It was taking all they had to just keep going. They were too high up and going too fast. If the foundation was destroyed, the stock would crash before they could reach the ship. But even as the shots that were aimed at them, Luffy was able to deflect the spray with his own body. They were in real trouble, but they kept going up with the stock never slowing down as it began to topple. You know, Nami cried as they tried to avoid the bolts. I think he's trying to make sure you don't get near him again. Luffy declared that it was too bad and that he was going to take him out. The lightning around them were continuing to destroy the base of the stock, when the waiver finally reached the top and were launched right off into the air. Here I come, Enru, Luffy shouted out as they flew. Give back the golden bell, Luffy yelled as it went soaring out, right now. That's enough, Enru shouted over noise from his precious Rego was making. It's ready, he raised his arms to his sphere of death. Now disappear along with this land. Luffy growled angrily, but as the black sphere started to slowly fall as well, Luffy said something to Nami. Thanks, for your help. She turned to stare at him as he cried out, jumping off waiver, and throwing her right off balance so that she was sent falling on a cloud. It won't be for nothing. Nami screamed to him to wait as she landed on the push and fall. No, don't do it please, Nami screamed out as her eyes widened in horror. The air currents and lightning discharges and there could kill even you. Enru continued to laugh and mock Luffy. What can you do against this kind of power, man beasts? He demanded as he roared with even more laughter. With a battle cry, Luffy flew straight towards Raigo and went right through it. Suddenly a familiar voice screaming from inside the sphere. Chimera, Carnival, Golden Baton, and that's when the sphere started going off. Hundreds of bolts were flashing and exploding in all directions. It was as if the power inside that ball was blasting and that power was being released. They could see that lightning was becoming volatile and unstable. Luffy's voice was coming through, calling above the noise of the thunder and chaos. You hear thunder and lightning. His voice echoed throughout the sphere. We made all the way to Sky Island and you had to come along and ruin weather. You electrical freak. The Raigo sphere was cracking apart, like how an egg would before the ship popped out, and with every second the crack grew larger and larger. Clear the sky, Luffy was screaming out and like that, the Raigo seemed to crack directly down the middle before it exploded, within itself and blew out to reveal the bright sunshine. Luffy, in his chimera form, hovered where the Raigo once was with his wings flapping to keep him afloat, the sky suddenly returning to a clear and beautiful day, never guessing that there was ever anything there. Luffy then shot down towards the false god, heaving his right arm back and it twisted around tightly. Enru's face was contorted with rage. You destroyed my Raigo, you insolent blue sea ape, Enru yelled in outrage. But Luffy was far from done. You're next, he yelled, traces of a smirk back on his face. I'll ring you along with the bell. Impudent fool, Enru shouted and lightning burst out of his body, growing bigger and bigger until a giant of a creature was there, one that looked like how you would expect a thunder god to look. One made out of lightning and forging not one, but two, golden tridents which he crossed over in front of him as they burned with electricity. Ring the bell, Enru yelled at him as he held up his massive arm. Is that what he said? You must be one of those fools who believes in the old legend. When the bell rings, it will mean the end of war between Thepia and Chandora. I'm God. Luffy seemed to finally have enough of him as well, but Eneru sent a blast of lightning so strong that it lit up the sky and shook everything around them. The attack hit Luffy head on and Eneru was now ranting on, almost as if trying to convince himself more than Luffy. I don't care how strong you are, you're still just a Zoan type. A filthy animal, you could never match the might of my Logia power no matter how hard you might try. No matter what you might do. That won't work on me, Luffy declared as he burst through Eneru's lightning and was running along Eneru's supercharged arm, the lightning crackling off his fur which now shined his Raiju form's blue color 3. And quit calling yourself God, Luffy suddenly went on, his face full of anger. What kind of God destroys everything and saves nothing? Fake.
And with those words, Luffy made it at Eneru's head and actually kicked him so hard that blood burst from his mouth.
One of Eneru's tridents had come swinging up to try and spear Luffy. But as the weapon came up, Luffy was forced to grab hold of the blade to stop it from killing him from the back. However, it was clear that he was still in a lot of trouble here, for the arm that still had the golden ball was now stretching even farther away from him, thus forcing him backwards and leaning heavily on the trident. The hand that Luffy held onto the trident was burning, steam actually boiling up beneath his fingers as he screamed in pain. Eneru was laughing once again. Well done, beast brat, that was very agile of you. You grabbed it before you could be impaled.
Nami screaming out in worry below them, but they only focused on the fight as Eneru laughed triumphantly. But what will you do now? He sneered. You have nowhere to run. The pull of the golden ball will pull you deeper and deeper onto my trident, and if you would let go, you would fall to your death below.
Luffy was fighting to get away, but the weight was too much for him and Eneru noticed this as well. I admit, I'm impressed you made it this far, he grinned insanely. But this is the end for you boy, and this land, everything. I can easily create another Rego.
Steam was coming from Luffy's clenched teeth from the heated trident when his eyes suddenly snapped open as he was remembering something and then he let go of the trident and allowed himself to fall. So, you prefer to fall, do you? Eneru laughed in victory.
Luffy, no, Nami screamed as Luffy fell past her. But just as they were all thinking that he was going to continue to fall, Luffy suddenly stretched up and grabbed hold of Nami's cloud, dangling there like a worm on a hook. He ordered Nami to get out of the way.
What's this? Eneru exclaimed in shock, finally noticing something was wrong.
You should never mess with me, earlobes. Luffy yelled and they all sneered at the name as Luffy then cried out, now Chimera, dart.
And he launched himself up, the golden ball was continuing to twist around. Eneru mocked Luffy about trying the same old attack again, but Luffy's eyes were filled with determination. I'll keep trying till the bell rings, he declared. Eneru was now holding up his tridents and proclaimed that he was going to spear him.
King of beasts, golden roar, he screamed as he heaved the golden ball in front of him and threw his punch so strongly that it was like a blast from a cannon. One so fast that Eneru could have avoided and his eyes widened in shock, unable to avoid it. Luffy's attack smashed right into God, with such force that it tore up the top of the arc and was sent flying back. Eneru could no longer hold on to that form and changed back as Luffy's attack broke right through it all and he was sent flying back to where they finally spotted it floating on a cloud. The golden bell, which was as beautiful as the city of Shandora, and it was this that Eneru had crashed into.
Let ITRINNNNGGGGGGGG, Luffy screamed as Eneru slammed into the bell. The impact was so great that parts of the bell broke in the ball and Luffy's broke part as more blood poured from Eneru's mouth.
Hey Pops, can you hear it? Luffy screamed out at the top of his lungs, the city of gold is here. For 400 years, the city of gold has been in the sky. And then they all heard it, a loud ringing echoed across the blue sky. A ringing that seemed to strike something within each and every one of them. It was astoundingly beautiful, like some kind of voice from the past telling them of a great civilization that was still there.
The bell was knocked from the cloud, as well as Eneru in the arc. Luffy beamed as he punched the air in triumph.
Are you listening, Pops? SARUYAMA brothers. Luffy screamed once again as he fell back. I did it. The city of gold. IT was right. HHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHH
The bell continued to ring loudly even as broken ship fell to Eneru in the white sea and Luffy landed next to Nami on the clouds. They could all hear the bell ringing several more times as it fell. Each ring seemed to be filled with faith and hope that resounded across the sky.
It rang, Luffy said softly, as Nami merely smiled. Hey, I wonder if Pops heard it, he added as she smiled at him. Yeah, I'm sure he did, she said firmly. Luffy got them off that cloud with his bat-like wings and they ended up making it back to the ship so that Nami could change and let Kanes know that they were all right. The Skypians and the Shandorians then all met on the upper yard in the ruins. The result was a party that lasted for 4 days. For the first time in 400 years, the two people were able to come together in mutual understanding, their feud forgotten. Later the next day they were back in the forest and the sun was bright and behind them they could see Robin and the boys all running towards them. Usopp had a sack of dials on his back, while Zoro, Sanji, and Luffy each carried sacks of gold from inside the giant snake with Chopper and Robin bringing up the rear. When everyone else fell asleep after all that dancing, Luffy took the straw hats inside the serpent who had also been partying and took all the gold they could find there. Sanji turned and began running backwards as he kept his eyes behind him. Looks like they gave up. Sanji called, I don't see anyone. Usopp muttered something about a cannon the warriors were carrying and Robin blinked in surprise. Their cannon, she repeated, sounding lost.
Yeah, you know, that big thing the warriors were carrying towards us, Usopp demanded of Robin. Didn't you see it? Oh, you mean that thing? Robin smiled as if she knew something that they didn't. Nami would have brained them all if she knew what the cannon really was.
Usopp was telling Robin off, saying that it wasn't funny, which Chopper was jumping up and down in agreement as they ran. We made it, Luffy yelled from the front, there's Nami and Kanes.
And when they looked forward, they could see the battered shape of Mirror right in front of them.
Where? Sanji cried out, spinning around, calling out the girls' names before he ran right into a tree branch.
Robin had finally called back to Sanji, after he left him behind for a while, are you okay? But then he jumped up and caught up with them as if nothing had happened. Oh yeah, he cried happily and they understood that here they were finally leaving Sky Island behind. It was a sad thing to see, but also a great relief.
As they climbed on board the Mary with Kanes, Pagaya, and Sue on another bright purple waver that was blowing a loud, annoying horn. But no one minded as they put all their loot in the cabin and pushed off from shore. It was a fun thing to watch, sailing along smoothly across the White Sea and laughing about everything that's happened. Along the way, they all ended up changing their burnt and torn clothes into fresh ones, and they knew that they were all truly ready to leave this place and go on to their next adventures.
After a short time, Konas called from next to them. Okay, we're almost there, everyone. See that up ahead? That's Cloud End. Everyone ran to the front of the ship to see the beautiful gate, looking different from Heaven's Gate, with twin fountains and even a bright rainbow right over the entrance. So that's where you go back down from? Luffy asked her. We got here sooner than I thought. Usopp laughed before the excitement seemed to fade from Luffy's face. Ah, do we really have to go back already? He whined. You know, Sanji said, as crazy as it sounds, I'm actually gonna miss this place. I think it's about time we say goodbye to the White Sea, Zoro said as Chopper swung his feet happily from railing. Sky Island sure is fun, but scary too, he said happily. Usopp told them apparently there was going to be a milky road to take them back to the Blue Sea, and they were all wondering just when, or if, they'd ever see this place again. Well, you never know, Usopp said. Konas and the others sped on ahead a little so that they could get off and run alongside the ship on the platform attached to the gate, calling to them that this was as far as they could go with them. Konas was now waving to them. Take care of yourselves, she called to them and they were all calling goodbyes to her and the others. Sitting on the mirror's head, Luffy said, it was nice meeting you guys, thanks for everything. But Konas was shaking her head, looking a little teary-eyed as she said, "No, you got it wrong. We're the ones who should be thanking you. We'll never forget you. Thanks to you all." "Goodbye, Konas, old guy, furball. Take care now," Luffy called and the final goodbyes were said. Pagaya then yelled, "Now take care of yourselves and hold on tight. You're in for a bumpy ride." The Straw Hats all knew each other so well by now that they knew just what was to do as they ran around the deck and prepared the ship to sail once again. "Great," Luffy beamed as they went through the gate. "Let's go. Once we get to the bottom we'll start a brand new adventure. Guys, get ready. Blue Sea, here we come."
And they all cheered behind him as the milky road curled into a gentle curve for a moment. They held on and enjoyed the ride as they waved back to Konas one last time.
"Everyone," she called, "grab a hold of something. The free fall's about to start." They looked down in time to see that the ship was hovering in the air after it had gone flying off the edge. The Straw Hats all practically had their eyes popping out of their heads as they looked up in time to see Konas and the others one last time. Her hands were in the air as she called out one word, "Hesso."
And then they fell, but as they screamed in terror, something burst out of the clouds besides them as they fell and they stopped falling. They saw that it was the tentacles of a giant octopus wrapping around the Mary. And suddenly everything stopped. The Straw Hats fell to the deck, each of them looking stunned to what had just happened.
Usopp and Chopper screamed worse than ever at the sight of the underside of the octopus, and Zoro looked ready to try and kill it. But thankfully the sudden stop threw them all off balance and they were on the deck, holding on tightly. "An octopus balloon?" Luffy asked. Usopp was looking much like how he looked when they first arrived. Once the Straw Hats realized that they were safe, they slowly began to laugh at that. Just then they heard the sounds of the bell ringing once again, the people's precise way of saying goodbye. They all smiled as they listened to the beautiful sound. The Straw Hats closed their eyes as their ears were filled with the sounds of the bell ringing in their ears. The sound, it was almost as if they were saying, "Thank you." And the scene faded with one last ring of the golden bell, the very heart of the city of gold. Chapter 19. It had been a hectic few weeks from the crew.
After nearly crashing into the ocean after the air in the balloon octopus went out, largely Luffy's fault, but he made up for it by becoming a second octopus balloon to help the Mary float down. The crew encountered some violent storms, enemy pirate crews, and a strange old man who lived on an island full of elongated items including a pair of stilts he was stuck on for 10 years and his best friend a giraffe-like horse. The crew was now faced with one of their biggest challenges ever, the Marine Admiral Aokiji.
At first, He-Man didn't seem anything like a standard Marine. He was incredibly lazy and seemed quite mellow despite encountering what was an enemy pirate crew. He even went out of his way to form a path of ice from the previously mentioned old man in the ocean so he could meet up with his family on a neighboring island.
After saying their goodbyes to the old man and playing in the snow for a while that was created by the Admiral's ice fruit powers, they eventually went over to where the man was. Aokiji was sitting there on the ground, cross-legged, and his head bent to one side as if he was trying to figure out a hard problem. Though he was sitting down, if he's standing up he'd be taller than every member of the crew. He had black, curly hair cut to chin length and fanned out at the tips. His skin was tanned and he was dressed like any other Marine, only with a blue sleeping mask on his forehead. Luffy, who was still enjoying himself, finally noticed that Aokiji was giving him a strange look and stopped laughing to look at him. Aokiji didn't say anything as he sighed and scratched his head, as if wondering what he should do.
"What is it?" Luffy asked imperiously, a slight frown coming to his face.
Aokiji was silent for a few more moments as he thought over what to say. "How should I put this?" he asked at last, seemingly talking more to himself than to them. "You're the spitting image of your grandpa, Monkey D." Luffy looked startled at hearing his grandfather's name as Aokiji finished, or maybe I should say, "You're just as reckless and hard to figure out."
At those words, Luffy froze, a look of anxiety washed over his face and he began to sweat. "You knew, my grandpa?" He choked out, and it looked like he was reliving some childhood trauma, which wasn't far from the truth.
Usopp looked astonished at hearing Aokiji mention Luffy's grandfather. "Seriously?" he asked. "Luffy's." He looked to Luffy, as if about to ask him something before he noticed his face and they could all see how edgy he looked. "Hey, Luffy, what's wrong? You're sweating."
Luffy seemed to have snapped himself out of the past and looked at Usopp, saying a little too quickly as he waved his hands in front of him like he was trying to stop someone from running into him. Nothing, really, I'm fine." "Your grandfather helped me out once, a long time ago," Aokiji went on as if he hadn't said anything. "That's why I'm here. I wanted to see you and Nico Robin together with my own eyes." Robin, who had been fairly tense since the Admiral arrived, now looked fearful, standing farther back than the others, as if torn between staying and running. Aokiji spoke again. "On second thought, maybe I should just kill you. The government still doesn't consider you a threat, but I know enough of your history to see you are a formidable crew," Aokiji stated calmly, looking at them all with polite curiosity. But his eyes lingered on Robin the longest. "You may be few in number, but with the shrewd Rouges gathered here, this crew will likely be a problem later on." "Should we take that as a compliment or an insult?" Usopp asked nervously. "Either way, he's trying to figure out if it's a good idea to let us live or not," Sanji said, frowning. "Considering the circumstances regarding your initial bounty, the numerous daring actions you've taken, and the speed of your overall progress," Aokiji went on, before he shook his head, "I fought outlaws for most of my life, but thinking about how it'll turn out scares the hell out of me." All of the Straw Hats looking tense at this. "Hey wait, hold on a second," Usopp cried out, shaking his hands like how Luffy had been doing before when asked about his grandpa. "You said you're here just to check things out, not to kill anyone." "One among you I consider the most dangerous," Aokiji stated, glancing towards Robin and added, "That would be you, Nico Robin." "So despite everything you were here for Robin," Luffy yelled, his eyes narrowed dangerously and looked angry. "Now I'm really gonna kick your butt." But Aokiji didn't seem bothered by Luffy's words. The size of her bounty isn't merely a reflection of her strength and power, he informed them calmly. It also represents something else, that would be the level of threat and danger that she poses to the world government. That's why a 79 million bounty was placed on her head at the tender young age of 8. "I'm impressed you were able to survive, especially as a child," Aokiji stated, now sounding like he had just read the paper and was telling them what tomorrow's weather was supposed to be like. "You managed to betray, sidestep, and escape from everyone in your path and then found yourself a new partner to make use of. You survived in the underworld by being quick to switch sides and now you've chosen this crew as your next haven." Aokiji finished and Robin's eyes widened in horror at his words, like he had just given her a deadly threat, though maybe in a sense, he was. "That's enough, jerk," Sanji yelled out, no longer able to stop himself from walking forward and let him go on. "I'm not just gonna let you stand there and speak to a lady like that. What kind of ridiculous grudge are you holding against Robin?" Usopp was holding him back, preventing him from launching himself at Aokiji, trying to get him not to do something that he would regret. He may not look tough, but an admiral isn't someone who wanted to mess with right now. "I don't have anything against her," Aokiji informed them calmly. "The only connection we have between us is that I let her escape from me one time, that's about it. It was a long time ago." He glanced at each one of them in turn, with that same wondering look on his face, as if trying to figure out what they were thinking. "You will all learn soon enough that protecting this troublesome woman leads to nothing but regret. If you need proof, consider this. Every organization that she's had something to do with in the past has been annihilated," Aokiji went on. He then stood up and walked a few steps closer. Not one solitary member escaped except for her. He looked at her. "Why is that? Nico Robin." Robin took a few steps back, biting her lower lip, clearly knowing what he was talking about. Seeing how afraid she was made Luffy even angrier. "Shut up, jerk. The past doesn't matter." He screamed at him. Everyone was backing him up with those words, even Zoro, though he didn't say anything. His face held anger as he glared at Aokiji. "That's right," Usopp yelled, pointing an accusing finger at him. "If it did, we wouldn't have a dangerous former pirate hunter guy or a degenerate conniving ex-thief woman on our crew, would we?" Nami gave him a hard bonk on the head, snapping at him not to go overboard. You can't say it's not true, Usopp whimpered as he rubbed the spot on his head where she hit him.
Maybe, but you don't have to bring it up, she shouted.
Sanji then added, we are now more important than we were. Yeah, that's right, Robin is our friend, Chopper yelled out, now waving his arms around angrily, and no longer showing any fear at Aokiji. Don't you dare say anything bad about her, you hear me? Robin looked too stunned to be able to say anything to their words. Hearing those words felt as if someone was wrapping a warm blanket around her. Even though she was terrified by Aokiji, the words alone made her so happy.
I see, Aokiji said, looking a little disappointed as he turned back to Robin. So these poor fools don't suspect a thing. Something inside Robin seemed to have snapped. Just get to the point, she screamed out, her hands held up. If you want to arrest me, then why don't you just do it already? They could all count on one hand how many times that Robin had lost control of her emotions since meeting her, but here the fear was replaced with pure anger. For the first time since joining the crew, she looked truly angry. And despite Usopp screaming at her not to do it, she caused about 30 hands to appear and grab hold of Aokiji from all over.
My, Aokiji said indifferently, his eyes looking at her shaking arms. Did something I say strike a nerve? That's too bad, guess I must have overestimated how reasonable woman you were. And clutch, she screamed, that's breaking him right in half and his body shattered like glass. The straw hat screamed and began to freak out. Not that her attack did any good. Aokiji was reforming from the ice, first an arm, and then his head and upper body began to emerge, as if like a growing plant.
It didn't work, Usopp croaked out, we're screwed, and as Aokiji's body was growing larger and longer, with most of his body was still made of ice he began to freak out. Let's get out of here, everybody run for your lives. Usopp and Chopper were both screaming in terror as Robin panted for breath. Though crouching down, about to get up, he was still taller than them. Now, he said, like a parent to a child who had been misbehaving, that wasn't a very nice thing to do.
They were all tense, knowing that they did it now. Aokiji then reached down to pull out a handful of grass and then he threw them in the air. As I watched, he blew on them with an ice breath that froze them into a large jagged ice sword. Ice saber, he said as he looked back to Robin. I didn't want to have to kill you, but now, he declared as he held up the saber. Swinging the sword like how one would with a bat, Robin shut her eyes, looking ready to die fighting, but just then, Zoro had charged in from the background and stopped the blade himself. Sanji then came running in, ready for a fight himself, and was able to kick the saber out of his hand. As Usopp cheered them on, Luffy was running in to fight as well. Zoro smirked mockingly at Sanji. I don't recall asking for your help, Cook, he told him. Sanji smirked right back. Funny, he said, I was just gonna say the same thing to you, Mosshead.
Luffy had come up and threw back his arm as it bulked up and became that of a gorilla. But just before he finished his attack, Aokiji grabbed hold of Zoro's arm and Sanji's leg just as Luffy threw the punch, and punched him right in the gut. It was like watching a nightmare. The monster trio, all three who had lived up to their titles every single day, were all stopped dead in their tracks with one attack. Luffy's and Zoro's arms as well as Sanji's leg were all frozen, covered in a thick coating of ice, and when Aokiji let them go they fell to the ground in agony.
Usopp and Chopper were on the ground, screaming so loudly that they couldn't make out what they were saying, but Nami was the one who looked the most freaked out. He got all three of them, at once. She screamed and the three were writhing on the ground, holding onto their limbs as if hoping to keep those parts from falling off.
He's freezing them solid. I have to help them quickly. Chopper screamed out, his eyes wide and he was trembling like a leaf, looking completely lost as to how to help. If they get frostbite, their limbs will start to rot. He turned towards Usopp who was also shaking and dripping with sweat. His eyes were twitching and his entire body seemed to be on the verge of spazzing out. Usopp, Chopper screamed at him, what are you doing? We have to help them now.
I want to help, he stuttered jerkily, I'm trying, but I can't seem to move, did he freeze me too? Chopper screamed that he was just too scared to move. They broke down completely and were screaming out that they would help and to just hold on.
Robin, run away, Nami yelled at their friend, but Robin didn't move, looking torn at what she should do. Wanting to run away, but seemed unable to bring herself to.
Aokiji smirked at Robin, not the least bit surprised. You have some very loyal friends, he said as she was now breathing hard as if she had just run away now, but you will never change, Nico Robin.
No, she yelled back, that's not true. But she didn't get a chance to finish for Aokiji towered over her and fell, embracing her in what looked like a hug, but as soon as he touched her, her entire body began to freeze.
Robin, get away from him, watch out, Luffy yelled, getting up from the ground. But nothing he said changed what happened. They stared in horror as Robin's body froze over. With the last breath she gasped out, I'm not, why, but then the ice spread up her face and her voice died as the others stared in shock. Sanji screamed out her name as the others were too horrified at what they were seeing, staring with eyes wide and gaping like fish. By the time that Aokiji pulled away, she was frozen solid, like a perfect ice sculpture, her face still covered in the fear and hesitation that she held before. It was like they were back at Little Garden and they had been turned to wax statues.
Luffy stepped forward, too stunned to speak, but the shock was quickly changed to rage and hatred. You creep, he screamed, looking ready to kill. Aokiji opened his mouth and they could see a cloud of his breath showing them how cold it was. Stop yelling, he said in a bored way, as if explaining what was going on was a chore to him. If you thaw her out carefully she'll live. However, her body is extremely fragile in this state so you'll have to handle her with care. He raised up a fist, if any part of her breaks, she'll die.
They all gasped, knowing what he was going to do. For example, if I were to smash her apart like this, he cried out, and they looked ready to jump in and stop it.
Luffy screamed, running ahead of everyone on cheetah legs. He managed to save Robin but just barely. He grabbed hold of her frozen body like how one would grab a mannequin in a clothing store and was forced to bend back to avoid Aokiji's attack.
Aokiji looked mildly annoyed as Luffy gasped how close that was, but instead, he raised a leg and was about to stop on her anyway. Usopp seemed to have finally gotten control of his legs again and charged out of nowhere. He grabbed Robin's body and ran so that Luffy was in instead. Aokiji was looking deeply annoyed as he looked over at them. What in the hell are you doing? He asked, irritation clear in his voice.
Luffy yelled out at them as Aokiji removed his foot. Usopp, Chopper, take Robin and run back to the ship. Once free, he rolled over onto his stomach and added, thaw her out and keep her safe. The other two didn't seem to have any problems with that order. They didn't stand a chance against Aokiji and they knew that Robin was the one who needed their attention right now. Right, they cried at the same time, you got it, Captain.
And so, carefully picking her up, stiffly aboard, they picked her up and began to carry her away. As they ran, they could hear them arguing. Hurry, Usopp yelled, but be gentle, okay?
It's cold, Chopper gasped. I know, but Robin's even colder genius, he retorted as they disappeared into the distance. Aokiji was walking calmly along, heading in the same direction where Usopp and Chopper went running off in. Every step he made, there was a slight mist coming up from his cold body. Don't bother, he said, holding up one of his own ice-covered hands. The world would be a much better place without that woman in it. Nami stepped in and tried to hit him with her Klima attack, only for him to catch it and look down at her with an amused look.
Not to split hairs, she exclaimed to him, but a pirate crew pretty much consists of people just like that.
But Aokiji didn't even break stride as he answered her, you got that right lady. Now if you don't mind, kindly step aside. He pulled Nami's weapon with such force that she was pulled straight to the ground. The boys just couldn't stop themselves, knowing if they didn't do something, someone was gonna die.
Nami, Sanji called in worry as he and Zoro both jumped up, ready for a fight to the death, for once, not wasting time fighting each other. Sanji yelled, "You're not cut out."
To mess with this crew. Zoro finished, both ready to strike, but then Luffy got back up, stopping them dead.
Wait, nobody attack him. He screamed at them and they skidded to a stop before staring back at him.
Stay back and don't interfere, Luffy commanded them, I'm gonna fight him one-on-one. Aokiji was glancing back at Luffy, watching him hold up both arms, both frozen and unfrozen. What do you say? He asked him, the two of us can settle this on our own. He then flexed his frozen arm and suddenly the ice broke apart, the arm itself becoming the translucent furred paw of a polar bear. The admiral raised an eyebrow at this before turning to face his opponent.
Aokiji's body began to freeze over with eyes. Fine by me, he said simply, but since I don't have a ship to take you back, then I'll just have to kill you all. The Straw Hats all looked upset at the order, but after a few extra long seconds, they all got up and began to head back to the ship, with Nami helping Sanji walk with legs still half frozen. Luffy, Zoro added quickly and there was a stern look and a hard silence between them.
Zoro finally turned and followed after the others, leaving the two to face each other. All he was trying to do was make sure he knew that his captain wasn't going to do something to get him killed. He was silently telling him that they would be coming back so that he better stay alive until then. Luffy must have gotten the message and gave a jerk of the head as they honored his role as captain and did what he told them. Once they were gone, the two faced each other, both of them waiting for the other to make a move. For a few moments, neither did anything, but then Aokiji threw a dart made of ice right at him, throwing it like a knife, which Luffy dodged. When Luffy got back into a ready stance, he now towered over the Iceman as a human polar bear hybrid, his long teeth and claws bared for battle. With a roar, the polar bear man charged his adversary. That was how the battle went on. Now that Luffy knew that just touching this guy was dangerous, even with the extra protection of his fur and muscles, any punches that he did throw didn't remain contact with Aokiji's body for too long, though this spared him from being frozen for the most part, it hardly did any real good. Aokiji leapt into the air and sent a blizzard down at him, starting to create large shards of ice across their battlefield. Aokiji froze water in the air above them and sent a giant block of ice down at Luffy. The straw hat wearing polar bear caught the ice using both arms and, with a grunt of exertion, crushed it into cubes before charging once more at Aokiji trying to get him on the defensive.
After several minutes of this, Luffy was now panting hard. Though Aokiji wasn't able to get real knit, the battle was already taking its toll on him. Luffy's white-colored fur was now stained red from being either too slow or bulky to dodge some blazing man's weaponry.
You really are persistent, aren't you? Aokiji asked him causally, not even out of breath yet. Luffy knew that things were getting desperate, so he decided to go for a desperate move. Taking on his chimera form, he ran ahead, dodging as Aokiji reached out to touch him. He ducked and was able to kick him high into the air.
Chimera's firestorm, Luffy screamed out as he sent out a stream of flames from his mouth. When the flames cleared, they showed Aokiji in a half-melted state.
Pressing the advantage, Luffy closed in and began walloping on the man like a heavy bag until he broke apart.
The boy landed on the ground breathing hard when he suddenly felt a pair of hands clutch his shoulders.
Out of the corner of his eye, Luffy noticed Aokiji looming over him. Shocked, the boy looked over to the melting form of Aokiji only to see the admiral he lacked all color had left behind as it melted. Figuring the real Aokiji replaced himself with an ice duplicate most likely from the time the fire went up. With Aokiji too close to dodge, Luffy knew that it was over as his eyes widened in realization. Ice time. Aokiji's attack came out in seconds. Luffy's body was now covered with a thick coating of ice, just like Robin. It looked he was trying to escape, but like a hot tongue to a frozen pole, he couldn't seem to move. When he was completely frozen, Luffy looked like an ice sculpture of a chimera with his mouth opened in a final roar. Around him, the surroundings became blurred and distorted, like a bunch of watercolors mixed together. Though he could still hear everything, the sound was muffled like the Straw Hat's captain was wearing earmuffs, and suddenly he could hear a strange beating, one so faint that he could barely hear it, his heartbeat. Through the swirl of colors and shapes, he could see the tall shape of what had to be Aokiji there. He placed Luffy's frozen body right in front of himself as if it weighed nothing before he sat down, looking at him curiously. "Aw man," Aokiji suddenly said. "You tricked me. The moment I agreed to fight you one-on-one, I settled on defeating you and you alone. But that your plan wasn't it." Aokiji asked him, "If I were to attack your crew now, I'd be the bad guy here. Isn't that right, Captain? Or, maybe, you actually thought you could beat me?" Aokiji asked, sounding amused at the very thought. Through the ever-growing blurry vision, he could just make out Aokiji standing up and dusting off his clothes. He looked right up at Luffy and said seriously, "Let me give you a piece of advice. Keep a close eye on Nico Robin." Luffy's vision was fading and as the sound of his heart got louder, starting to drown out Aokiji's voice, before it sounded like it was starting to slow down. Eventually, she'll grow to be more than you can handle, Aokiji's voice growing ever more faint. The nature of the violent fate she was born into will be a greater danger than you can imagine, more of a burden than you could ever hope to bear. That's what it means to have that woman as part of her crew, he said, and they saw he was raising up his foot and their heart froze, knowing that he had his chance, just one kick and their captain was gone forever. "You've been warned," he said before he changed direction and ended up shattering a pillar of ice next to them. "Mr. Monkey D. Luffy. It would be easy to break you and kill you right here and now," he said, his voice now so muffled that even Luffy's super-sensitive hearing could hardly make any words out. "But I have a debt to honor." The tall man bent down to pick up something off the ground, his coat most likely, before his faint voice said, "Consider us even for you taking care of Crocodile." As well as, Aokiji's voice added before he paused, never mind. Something to do with Smoker. See ya." There was nothing going on around him, the shapes had blackened so that there was nothing but darkness. Luffy's heart had almost stopped now, and by the time it did, he could make out Zoro and Sanji's voices in the distance. Luffy couldn't hear what they were saying, but it was definitely their voices, and it sounded like they were arguing. But Luffy's heart had stopped right then and there as he finally lost consciousness for darkness took him. Perspective change. Nico Robin. It was cold, that was all she was truly aware of, this terrible cold. But there was also warmth around her, she could feel warm water on her face, trying to heat up her frozen insides. There was a terrible ache inside her chest as if she had been kicked by a wild animal or something. She soon realized that she was soaked through and could hear the sound of running water. After a few more minutes, she heard voices around her, familiar and worried voices. She opened her eyes. "Robin," Chopper's voice screamed out and she focused her vision on his terrified face. He was also soaked as well, his fur smelling of wet dog. She blinked, not understanding what was going on, or why she was freezing, her body shaking violently even with the gallons of water being dropped on her head. She was in the shower room, she could see that much, but she couldn't remember how she got there. Her head had felt stiff, as if it hadn't moved in a long time and was vaguely surprised to see that the room was flooded and she was sitting in the tub, full clothed and soaked to the bone. "Doctor," she asked in confusion, not understanding why she was so cold when the water was so warm. But then it suddenly came back, Aokiji, he was here. He attacked her and her crew. She sat up so suddenly she splashed even more water on the floor, but she cried out in pain as she gripped her chest. "Don't push yourself," Chopper commanded, "I only just got your heart beating again." My heart," she croaked in confusion. "What happened? I was frozen, "Yeah, you were," Chopper said, "but we can explain more later. I'll make sure that you'll be alright, but you need to stay still." She had been frozen, she remembered that much, and she could just remember hearing her captain's voice calling for them to take her back to the ship and get her treated. So that was what happened. She was frozen and her heart stopped beating, and that was why she hurt so much. But then she saw something that almost scared her heart into stopping a second time. Chopper transformed and was carrying Luffy over. Most of his body was out of the ice as well, but he was still half frozen as he moved him more so that he was under the falling water. Fortunately, after he had thought enough, Luffy's body had shrunken back to its human form, making it easier to carry than his bulkier chimera form.
Luffy, she asked anxiously as her teeth chattered together.
Keep this towel on your head, it will keep more heat in your body, Chopper commanded. But Luffy, she asked, what little energy she had left leaving her quickly. He'll be alright, Chopper said determining. He's strong. Once we get all the ice off him, I'm sure that he'll be just fine. I'm just moving you so that we can get him under the water. She didn't say a word, too tired to move or say anything else as guilt racked her insides. Aokiji was here. Normally she would just run away like she always had done, leaving her protectors behind to deal with the enemy. But she couldn't bring herself to run. After traveling with them for only a short time, she knew they were strong, but they were no match for an admiral, this she knew. Even 20 years ago, Aokiji was a monster. She shut her eyes and remembered Saul's face. She had come so close to sharing his fate after all these years, and Luffy as well. Another man with the middle initial D.
Instead of running, however, she chose to stay. Hearing him say that she would one day betray the Straw Hats made her angry, but more than anything, she felt fear. Because she had seen this before in the past countless times.
Yes, she had betrayed people and they had betrayed her. That was just her life. That was how she had lived up till now. She opened her eyes again and looked at Luffy's face as Chopper was trying to wake him up. Looking encouraged with Luffy let out a strangled gasp and was breathing again. She let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. He and the others had protected her, defended her, and said that he would fight a man who had haunted nightmares for 20 years, and what did he get out of it? Almost freezing to death for her. She looked away. What happened? What happened to the others after she was frozen? Chopper, she asked weakly. Huh, he asked. Don't try to talk now. You're too weak. We're not out of the woods yet.
I'll listen, she croaked out. What happened? After I was.
She couldn't finish. She was too tired to do so, but Chopper seemed to understand. He had quickly told her that Luffy ordered them to take her back to the ship and get her treated. Zoro and Sanji had to jump into the ocean to get the ice off their limbs and had them bandaged up before they went running back to Luffy, who had challenged Aokiji to a one-on-one fight. According to Zoro, he said that they just found him frozen there before they brought him back. He then leaned his head against Luffy's chest and his eyes brightened, tears burning.
I can hear it, he gasped out, jumping down and went running to the door. His heart flowing again.
She sighed in relief as she watched him go running out to tell the others the good news and to start bringing in warm towels for them. She leaned back against the tub, feeling so tired she knew she couldn't fight the urge to sleep for much longer. She looked to Luffy's blue face and knew that she must look a lot like that as well. But right now, she was sick with worry for what happened. It was all her fault. She knew that. She remembered Aokiji's words and they hit her with the speed of a cannonball. She was using this crew for protection, just like she used every other crew and organization in the past. Just being here with her was constantly putting their lives in danger. They've done nothing but accept her and treated her well since she arrived, even though she had been their enemy. And here she was repaying them by having them risk their lives for her. Two sides of her were conflicting with each other. A part of her wanted to just leave the crew. It would be best for them all if she did decide to leave. But the other part. She didn't know what to do. She hated not knowing why she was feeling like this. Just then, the door opened and Chopper and Nami both came in, with Chopper giving Nami orders what to do. She could feel her muscles in her face working again as her lips curled up into a smile, for the first time in a long time, feeling safe and was able to drift off to sleep, leaving herself to their care. She woke up much later. She glanced at the window and could see the night sky. She had been moved to the galley and was laying on a warm mattress. She had been changed out of her soaking wet clothes and in one of her long dresses. The others were all there as well. Nami was at the cooktop with Sanji, laying blankets near the stove so that they could get hot as Sanji was filling the entire room with the warmth from whatever he was cooking. She could hear snoring next to her and glanced to her side to see that Luffy was lying on a separate mattress and out like a light. She smiled a little at that, her whole body stiff and sore, her face feeling as if she had a bad sunburn, but everyone was all right.
Robin, Usopp's voice came and she looked over to see that the others were glancing at her.
Robin, Chopper said happily, running over to her and checking her temperature. How are you? Are you still feeling cold? Are you in any pain?
No, she said, her voice faint and weak, not pain really, just stiff. I got something that'll help you, Sanji said, and he came over with a steaming mug of hot chocolate. Something to help you get that beautiful smile back on that face of yours where it belongs. It was pretty much a blur after that. Nami came over to help her sit up and she gratefully took the drink, feeling her insides warm up even more and felt better at once. They told her that Aokiji was gone. Apparently after he froze Luffy, he just up and left. After she finished her drink and Nami gave her a few hot towels, Chopper gave her one last checkup before he told they all decided to turn in. They were all exhausted and didn't have the strength to even go downstairs to their rooms. They all ended up sleeping in that galley with them, wanting to be close by should something happen to the two who lay recovering. She lay awake though, long into the night, staring up at the ceiling, and unable to think of what to do, trying to fight the tears that wanted to come to her eyes. Main perspective, the crew had waited several days before Luffy and Robin were strong enough to travel again. Things had been pretty much smooth sailing since then. Suddenly, the ship jerked to a halt. The crew was scattered on the Merry due to the force from the abrupt stop, but were in a strange place. There was a large lighthouse, but they were still out in the middle of the ocean. Just then the Straw Hats were all getting to their feet as they looked around, wondering if they had come ashore or were stepped on something. But at that moment, they suddenly heard a loud clanging of what sounded like bells going off, and a voice with flashing lights was going off so loudly they made their eardrums ache. They heard what had to be a loud whistle in the distance along with the sounds of something big and heavy coming at them at great speed. They all looked up the starboard side and there it was. Hurtling towards them was a large metal monster, steam blowing out of a chimney like stand on its head, and coming so fast that there was no way that it could stop even if it saw them. Full reverse right now, Nami screamed, turn 180 degrees. What the hell is that? Sanji yelled. Nami began screaming orders that they had to get out of its path since clearly wasn't stopping. The Straw Hats went to the oars and were working hard to try and get married move. With a great heave, they managed to get off just in the nick of time, almost flying away to avoid getting run over. The wind was so strong that it almost ended up blowing them over, but as they glanced back, they could see a giant frog, about the size of a bull, with yellow-brown skin and black hair worn up in Chun age. He was covered with large scars on his body and stood there, somehow standing on water as he faced the train. The train collided with the frog and he was sent flying backwards before diving into water. After recovering from their near heart attacks, the Straw Hats were gaping like fish as they stared ahead at the disappearing train in shock. It looked like it was spitting out smoke. Chopper gasped out. They were all stunned, trying to figure out what just happened, but then they heard a child's voice cry out, Granny, Granny, come quick, pirates. There were two figures on the platform that led inside the station. A young girl with long hair tied up in pigtails that seemed to stand upwards, and a loud mouth that was curled up into a smile despite the alarm in her voice, while next to her was a large, light blue and cream-colored rabbit. At that moment they heard a slurred voice calling out from inside, Bah, is that true, Chimney? Okie dokie then? Suddenly an old woman came out of the station, her facial features making it look as if she was always smiling, with a body that made her look like a frog, and thick green hair tied back in messy pigtails. Her face was red, and there was a bottle of alcohol in her hands. In that case, she hiccuped, better bring Granny that red flounder snail. The girl meanwhile was doing what Granny told her and went back inside. The Straw Hats all glanced at each other worriedly, wondering if it could make it away or no, knowing that if they called for help and the Marines showed up, then they'd all be in for another fight. But it turned out they didn't need to worry, for when the rope rang back was Transponder's nail and gave it to her grandma. Hello, the old lady asked drunkenly at the receiver. Who is this? Sorry, you got the wrong number. She's totally drunk, Usopp yelled out. However, that probably worked in their favor. Because if she had been sober, she actually might have asked called for backup. They came on board the platform and even shared some food with them to show that they meant them no harm. After seeing the food, the trio seemed to warm right up to them and even introduced themselves. The little girl with Chinny, and their pet rabbit who thinks he's a cat was named Gande, and finally their grandmother Kokura who was a station conductor. My name's Luffy, Luffy said seriously, folding his arms, and I'm going to be king of the pirates. Really? Chinny asked interestedly. Yep, he answered and Kokura laughed. I like you, you're funny, she said. Nami stepped forward then when she felt that it was safe to talk to them without fear of them calling for help. By the way, Chinny, she said curiously, jerking her thumb in the direction where the sea train went. That thing's a steamboat, right? Seems awfully long to me, can't imagine it getting very far. You've probably never seen anything like this, she said proudly, seeing that it's the only one in the world. It's not a steamboat, it's a sea train known as the Buffing Tom. How does it work? Nami asked her. It uses a steam engine to turn its paddle wheels and run on railway, she answered brightly as she finished swallowing. Railway, Usopp repeated, sounding lost. Aha, she answered, pointing to the water. If you look closely you can see the tracks right beneath the waves. The train goes the same route every day, taking people from one island to the next. It can even carry ships and packages too. They all looked down and they could see what she was talking about. Indeed, there were iron tracks just below the water so that it couldn't be seen. Luffy and Usopp looked over the side to see what she was talking about. Oh wow, Luffy said impressed. Funny we didn't notice it before. No kidding, Sanji stated. We ran right in it. You should be more careful, Chimney scolded them, pointing up at the signal that had been blazing a moment ago. Didn't you see the signal? It had a bell ringing and everything. Is that what that thing is for? Usopp asked, pointing up to it as well. I thought it was just here to welcome us. How are we supposed to know? And if we couldn't figure it out, then that frog sure wouldn't get would he? Luffy asked them grumbly. It was awful rude of you to hit him like that. We were gonna catch him and cook him, you know. Oh, Chimney asked calmly. You saw the frog? That Luna? Sure was an awesome swimmer, Luffy said, glancing back at the tracks where they last saw the frog. Either way I wouldn't worry about him. He's pretty tough, Chimney answered, not at all surprised by Luffy telling her that their train just ran over a giant frog. In fact, that isn't the first time he's challenged the train and lost. He's really kind of a pain, Chimney added. If you want to see him again, just hang around here. I'm sure he'll pop up. Wow, Luffy said in understanding. That's why he didn't run. I thought the frog was just stupid, but it turns out he was just being super manly. Easy for you to say, Chimney yelled, and for the first time she sounded frustrated. You don't have to bub with him all the time. I can't even count how many times he's broken the rail guard, and just imagine what it was like for the passengers when he slammed into the train. That's crazy, Luffy said before he declared. Alright, since that frog is a fighter like me, then I'm not gonna eat him after all.
Once that was out of the way, Granny Kokura asked them where they were planning on going to next, telling them that the sea train was connected to several of the nearby islands and started to tell them a little about each of them. Nami thanked her for that, but said that they didn't need to take the train, they would just follow their log.
Oh, Chimney asked curiously, where's it pointing to? She held up her wrist and answered, should be someplace east of here. Kokura said, I see, well, in that case it's Far 7 for sure. The train you saw on the way here just came from Blue Station on that island. They call it the City of Water. I think you'll like it.
Kokura started telling them about Water 7's shipwrights and shipyards, how they wouldn't be able to find better shipwrights if they looked. The Straw Hats were all excited at hearing about Water 7's shipyards. They couldn't have asked for anything better and couldn't wait to get going.
Alright then, Luffy said loudly, beaming happily at them all. It's settled, we're gonna find the best shipwright in Water 7 and get him to join our crew. Oh, is that so? Kokura asked, who seemed to have taken liking to them. In that case, hold on a sec. She forced herself to stand up from the stool and went inside the station for a moment. They all looked confused, wondering what she was gonna do, but a few minutes later she came back with a couple sheets of paper and handed it over to them.
I got a little present for ya, she slurred. This is a little map of the city and a reference letter. Just give this to a fella named Iceberg and I promise he'll fix your ship up good. Water 7 is a pretty confusing place, so try not to get lost.
The pirates were ecstatic at Kokura's kindness and were thanking her over and over as they got back on the Merry. We'll be heading back to Water 7 soon, Chimney told them brightly as they leaned over the edge to say goodbye to them. Maybe we'll see you there. Sounds like a plan to me, Kokura said agreeably, holding up a bottle of whiskey in her hands. If you like, I'll even give you guys a tour of all my favorite drinking holes, she laughed. Sounds good, Luffy smiled down at them. We'll try to keep a lookout for you. It'll take about a week for the log out to the next island, so you'll have plenty of time to do some sightseeing, Kokura informed them with a fine wave. Great, sounds like fun, Luffy said before he turned back to them all. Okay, everyone ready? Time to set sail. They were all on deck and Nami was just talking about the nice wind and at this rate, they'll make it Water 7 sooner than they thought. Meanwhile, Sanji was telling the others that he'd find the hottest looking girl in Water 7 for their shipwright. What do I care if the shipwright's hot? Luffy demanded. I want a huge manly dude, like even bigger than a bear, like 16 feet tall. A guy that big wouldn't even fit on our ship, Usopp said, and who knows how much food he'll have to eat. All that matters is that he's good at his job, Zora said in his usual bored tone. If you ask me, the real problem is trying to find someone crazy enough to go out to sea with a bunch of pirates. That is always the hard part, Sanji nodded. Then again, we all joined a pirate crew, so what does that make us I wonder? Crazy, Usopp sighed, but I hope the good kind of crazy. Size doesn't matter, Chopper chirped up with a big smile. I'm just happy we're gonna be making a new friend. We're lucky we ran into that train station on the way, Nami said, holding up paper. This map should be a big help. All we have to do is follow Kokura's direction to that iceberg guy and we're set. But when she opened the paper, it looked like it had been drawn in crayon by a 3-year-old. In anger, she crumpled it up and threw it on the deck, yelling out insults before Chopper picked it up and said they looked like one of Luffy's drawings. Speaking of Luffy, he was holding up a badly drawn picture and telling them that he wanted their shipwright to look like that. If I saw a guy like that I'd run, Usopp said, looking freaked out at the paper. I wouldn't just run. I'd jump in the sea to get away from that freak, Sanji said as he looked at it closely, but he looks like he might be part octopus, so even that might not save me. Don't you have anything better to talk about? Zoro called in annoyance as Robin just smiled as she listened to them all talk and argue with each other. There was a very strange look of peace in her eyes as she watched them all work, but suddenly, Usopp went running and jumped up the mast, hugging it tightly and looking a little sad as Luffy asked him, why are you hugging the ship, Usopp? I know that all these tin plates may not seem like much to you, he said, rubbing his cheek against the wood and steel plating, but they bring back a lot of fond memories for me. He smiled as he finally looked up. I almost hate to see them go, but it'll all be worth it if Mary can finally get the repair she needs. I feel the same way, Sanji said and they glanced back to see him coming up from below deck after a change of clothes. I'm proud of her battle like everyone else, but she's taken a real beating since we've entered the Grand Line. Sanji looked down at the deck and stepped to hear the board squeak. The deck squeaks and we've got leaks popping up everywhere. Nobody wants to admit it, but if we don't fix this up soon we're as good as sunk. Yeah, Luffy said, but even if we can't get a shipwright for crew we still have plenty of money. We can do more than just fix her, we can power her up too. Zoro called out that he could see the island and Luffy was the first one up the deck to get a look. He's right, Luffy called happily. I can see water 7, and he wanted to break out the oars and row the rest of the way, with the others telling him that he shouldn't wear them out before they get there. When they got closer, they could get a full look at it. They were all amazed, their eyes wide and struck dumb. At the very top of the city, they could see an enormous fountain of volcano shape and water was pouring down into canals. The building surrounding the fountain was very colorful, with tan or peaked colorful walls and roofs of the houses which are many times red and semicircular. The Straw Hats were all amazed, staring around as they went right up front, and to their surprise, several people gave them direction to head right down the back street entrances. No one seemed the least bit worried that there were pirates in town. But they were busy looking at the city, heading down canals and waterways that were surrounded by sidewalks and buildings. There were boats of all sizes covering the canals, and there were ramps of water that they were traveling along like streets. After sailing around the back streets for a short time, the Straw Hats ended up coming to the outskirts of the city and anchored at a small cave. Everyone was thrilled at the thought of going in and were impatient to get going, but as Zoro was pulling up the sails on the mast, just as he pulled to tighten it, to everyone's horror, the mast snapped almost right in half and he was forced to grab hold of it to keep it from falling.
The others screamed at him, Usopp loudest of them all, are you trying to break the ship? No, Zoro gasped, just as surprised as the rest of them. All I did was pull the rope like I always do, and with a great heave, he began to stand it upright once again. Holy crap, he cursed, after they heard the loud creaking sound of the wood. If the Mary's falling apart this easy, we're lucky we made it here at all.
Nami frowned and worried up at the mast before she turned back to the others and said, by the way, they aren't scared of pirates here, are they? Don't you think that's kind of strange? That's cause we're shipyard customers just like everyone else, Zoro grunted as he continued to push the mast, not needing Usopp there hitting him and telling him to put it upright. They probably aren't concerned about pirates because they have enough security to deal with them if they misbehave, Robin offered and Sanji grinned at that.
Bet there's plenty of Marines here too, he said eagerly, comes with the territory huh?
But at their words, Usopp looked close to freaking out. Where are you kidding me? He yelled out, you mean they're gonna have you guys arrested?
I don't think that's a problem since we're paying customers and all, Sanji pointed out and they calmed down at once. Now comforted that they didn't have to worry, Luffy and Usopp were the first to jump ship, but before they could run off, Nami called them back, telling them that they were to come with her so that they could cash in their gold and get a look at the shipyard. Later Luffy, Nami, and Usopp were somewhere in the city where people were coming and going all around them. They smiled at the boats coming up and down the canals, being pulled by some of the strangest looking creatures they've seen yet. They looked and acted like horses as they pulled the boats, the creatures themselves called Yagara bulls. Soon though, the three were coming out of a large building behind them, each of them carrying large black cases. The three were each filled to the brim with 100 million berry, making the crew's new treasury come to a grand total of 300 million. They were able to find someone to convert the gold they found on Skypia into money and, thanks to Nami's persuasive bargaining tactics, the crew was now considerably richer.
I don't feel comfortable having all this money in one place, guys, Usopp said nervously, hugging his case tightly to his chest. It's scary. I mean, what if I trip and it all falls out or something? That was great, Luffy laughed, swinging his case around. You sure were scary back there, Nami. I estimated 300 million from the start, she answered with a smile, but I figured they wouldn't give it up easy, Nami said. You really got work on your game face. She looked back smugly, good thing I was there. Cut it out, Usopp hissed to Luffy, glancing around, you're making me nervous swinging that around.
Well, whatever, Luffy said happily, we got our money now and that's all that matters. But at those words, he accidentally ended up letting the case go and it went flying out over the canal. At that, the other two screamed in horror and actually went jumping over, ready to catch it. But as they were about to grab it, Luffy grew out a long lizard tail and used it to snatch it back. Phew, he called, that would have been bad if the money got wet huh.
The other two fell in the water, and when they climbed out, they gave him a hard beating for doing that, promising that if he lost that money he would be paying in blood.
Luffy promised that he'd be more careful if they would just stop hurting him. After that, Nami gave Luffy's case to Usopp and they got into their boats, and let their Yagaras pull them along. They followed after them, Usopp staring around nervously with his hands wrapped around the black cases. Luffy pouted at how far away they were choosing to stay away from him.
I don't know, Nami, Usopp whimpered behind her, maybe we should have taken the money back to the ship after all.
That'd be a complete waste of time, she retorted, the shipyard is right around the corner.
Luffy was moaning from his Yagara, come on, you don't have to ride so far away, let me play with money. Anyway, Nami went on as if she hadn't heard him moan, we'll probably be heading back to Mary soon enough. After he'll meet with the shipwrights, they'll probably need to look at the damages before he can give us a quote. I didn't think of it that way, Usopp said smiling, I guess I can live after the money until then. I've never carried this much cash at once, that's all, I don't know how to handle it.
They soon sailed onto the large steel door marked with the number 1.
They could see and hear people working in there, moving large lumber, rolling cannons, and raising up sails.
The sounds of hammers and saws were constantly going, they could see the forms of ships, all the way from just a pile of boards and nails to halfway finished ships, and even some already done. It was very impressive as they all stepped forward to get a look at it. The three pirates climbed out of the boat and began looking around for Iceberg, at least until they realized that they didn't have a clue to who he was or how to find him, they didn't even know what he looked like. Naturally however, Luffy was just gonna waltz right in and ask, but as he began to climb over the fence, someone came out of nowhere and stopped him. Hold it right there, the man said, a single finger to Luffy's forehead and pushing him back. You've got a lot of gumption just waltzing in like that, why don't we take a step over here and then we can talk? He raised his head, don't worry, it's not personal, you're outsiders is all, so you're not allowed inside the plant. But they hardly heard anything else that he said as they stared at his face. He had big black eyes and a long nose so similar to Usopp that they looked like they might have been related, only his nose was rectangular in shape. He climbed over the little fence and walked over to them, dressed in simple workman's clothes and a tool belt at his belt.
Alright champ, he said casually, as if they were old friends, we'll bring you to the docks today. Come on Usopp, I know it's you, Luffy said with a smile, with the Usopp next to him smacking at him, reminding him that he was right there. Nami came out of her shock at the man's appearance and began asking him about Iceberg. The man, named Kaku, was looking surprised by the request and was asking them if they were customers before Nami held out Kokura's letter. Oh, that's nifty, Kaku said reading it, not every day that youngsters come here with a letter of introduction from Brandy Kokura. Luffy rather bluntly asked how old he was after hearing his odd manner of speaking. I'm 23, why do you ask? Kaku asked politely. You know for someone who's hardly any older than us, you sure do talk like an old man, Usopp couldn't stop himself from saying. Rather than be offended, Kaku just laughed and answered, I get that a lot.
So do you know Iceberg or did we come to wrong place? Nami asked and Kaku told them a little more about his boss. How he was the mayor of Water 7 as well as the CEO of the Galila Company and manager of the sea train the Puffing Tom. Kaku then confessed that because he's always so busy, finding him can be difficult at times so he offered to go and look over their ship for them himself. After putting his tool belt down and asking them where their ship was moored at, he went running off, and literally at that. He was amazing, running and jumping right over the edge, practically flying through the air. The three Straw Hats looked freaked out at seeing him go over the wall until a calm voice behind them spoke up, don't worry. He's always soaring through town.
Everyone turned around to see two people standing there, a man and a young woman.
The man was rather tall with blue hair and dark lips and a faint beard starting to grow in. He was wearing a red and orange striped jacket where he was caressing the little head of a small white mouse from his front pocket.
Standing next to him was a slim, pretty woman with blue eyes and glasses, with her long blonde hair tied up in a bun at the back of her head. The man then finished speaking to them. They call him the Mountain Wind. If you didn't know, he's Galley Law's dog 1 carpentry foreman, Kaku. Geez, that was a big surprise. Usopp sighed in relief, knowing that was alright.
I've never seen someone jump that far before, Luffy said in awe.
Well, the man said, trying not to sound smug, my craftsmen are the best in business for a reason.
There was some silence between them before Luffy whispered to Usopp, who is this guy? Don't ask me, he answered back. Extraordinary ships are not born from ordinary circumstances, the stranger continued, as he looked over them all. They require nearly a superhuman level of skill.
The man then turned to the woman and asked, by the way, Khalifa.
I've already finished the background check, the now named Khalifa answered him, adjusting her glasses before she began to read from a clipboard. The one in the middle is Straw Hat Luffy. His crew also includes pirate hunter Zoro and Nico Robin. Most people didn't notice the change, but some of them spotted it on the man's face, a slight look of anxiety and surprise. However, it passed quickly as she went on to read. Their combined bounties are 239 million. They have 4 others currently without bounties and their crew was formed in the East Blue. Named after their captain, they're known simply as the Straw Hat Pirates.
Usopp was looking freaked at how they knew all this information on them before they even introduced themselves.
I see, welcome, my name is Iceberg, the now identified Iceberg said, sounding a little impressed as he continued to bet the little mouse. I'm the boss here, and this is a mouse I just picked up. His name is, let's see, Tyrannosaurs. I'll need some rodent food and a cage. Khalifa already informed Iceberg that she had already taken the liberty of ordering those for him. Iceberg complimented her on doing that before he even asked her to. Speaking of which, Khalifa, looking back at her notes, she began to list all the things that he had to do today. Such as a lunch meeting with an hotel in Shiza with the glassware executive, then after that he was set to make a speech at the Liguria Square, followed by a meeting with the mayor from Pucci and give an interview before he was to overlook some paperwork when he got back to the office. Iceberg whined out, like a kid who was told to go to bed early, I don't wanna.
Khalifa didn't seem the least bit surprised as she began crossing them off the list and said casually, very well, I'll cancel everything here for you. Usopp yelled out, hold on, you're not serious are you?
What's the point in having power if I don't get to do what I want? Iceberg asked them calmly.
If that's how you run things you gotta be the most irresponsible mayor in the world, Usopp informed him.
Yeah pops, that's pretty lazy, Luffy said. That's rich coming from you, Luffy, Nami said with a roll of her eyes as he turned to look at her and asked her, you sure this is the guy that old lady was talking about? Aha, he's the guy alright, Nami stated, but at those words, Khalifa suddenly charged and began kicking them all so fast that they didn't realize what had happened until it was all over. How dare you? What's the big idea lady? Luffy shouted at her angrily as Nami and Usopp were both trying to recover from the shock. Funny enough, Luffy and Nami appeared to be just fine having dodged a majority of the blows, but it was Usopp who seemed to be the one who had taken the hits and was now on the ground with a dented face. I won't stand here and let you insolent louts and insult one of the world's leading ship engineers. Khalifa told them all angrily, pushing her glasses back up her face. Thanks to Khalifa losing her temper, several citizens in the area heard what was going on and began to draw a crowd. Noticing this, she seemed to remember where she was before she apologized. Pardon me, I get a bit carried away from time to time. Still, Iceberg is a respected figure here in Water 7, so try to show some courtesy. Yes, please don't provoke, Khalifa. When she lashes out in anger, Iceberg warned, and when they looked they could see that he was covered with lumps and bruised like a banana. Tears of pain were even in his eyes. She doesn't discriminate.
Usopp then yelled at outrage, we might have hurt his feelings, but you hurt his face. You're way meaner than us, Luffy added in equal outrage. Nami said suddenly, putting all that behind us, if you're Iceberg then you're the man we're looking for. She took out Kokora's letter and handed it to him. Here, we brought a letter of introduction for you to look at. Iceberg carefully took it from her and read it out. From Granny Kokora, take a look at the ship, it says, he nodded in understanding before he torn paper to shreds.
What, are you serious? Nami exclaimed startled. There has to be something we can do to change your mind. She held up a black case so that he couldn't hope to miss it. If money's the issue, we can pay. If you're really the best then you gotta be the one to fix our Mary. Luffy pleaded with him, come on, we're begging. Okay, Iceberg answered casually. That's it. Usopp yelled at him, looking ready to fall over. You don't even need to think about it. No, Iceberg said disinterestedly. Then why did you tear up the letter? The sniper demanded hotly. The lipstick mark was creeping me out, he answered as if it was obvious. Even so, Granny Kokora and I have been drinking buddies for years, Iceberg explained. Well, and since Kaku has already gone to make an estimate for me it would seem like a waste to turn you down now, wouldn't you say? He stretched out his arms and even began to pick his nose in boredom. Besides, it's not like I had anything else to do, I'll show you around the shipyard, sound good? Did he serious cancel all of his meetings just to give us a tour? Usopp asked.
Luffy happily began to follow Iceberg and Khalifa into the shipyard, but as they were getting closer, they heard Nami's voice screaming out behind them, did you drop it somewhere?
I don't know, Usopp yelled out, sounding terrified and they all turned around to see the two there, staring around wildly. Just then Usopp pointed out towards the water and when they followed their gaze, on a couple Yagaras, there were a few men wearing some of the strangest outfits they could think of. Some kind of roundish, metal lederhosen with a pink star on it that they wore like overalls, as well as covered in tattoos and specialized goggles. Usopp realized something. Wait, he yelled after them angrily. Who are you? Why are you taking our money? Give it back. We need it, you jerks. Do you hear me? Thanks for the cash. One of the men mocked. Usopp was now chasing after the boat on the sidewalk, looking ready to jump into the canal and swim up to them. But when Luffy caught up to him and asked him why he gave the money to them, Usopp was yelling at him for that, telling him that they stole it. However, just as Luffy was about to go after the money himself, a man jumped from the bridge directly above them. He had blonde hair that was slicked back and a pair of orange goggles as well as having a cigar in his mouth. He wore a flame-detailed denim jacket with cigars strapped to it like how Smoker wore his. As he jumped a set of ropes came out from his sleeves, and using them like whips, he was able to knock the Frankie family right into the river.
Usopp thanking him for getting their money back. However, as soon as the man, named Polly, heard the word money and looked at the cases, his face brightened and he was one sailing off this time. You got to be kidding me. Usopp groaned out, hey, get back here. Finally tired of waiting, Luffy held his arms up, ready to sprout wings and go after it himself, although just as he was about to fly off, someone stopped him.
A very tall and slim, yet muscular man with arched eyebrows and a close-shaved goatee was standing there. He had a shoulder-length wavy hair, and a large black top hat on his head that seemed to clash with the causal workman clothes he was wearing. His face held no emotion as the white pigeon, wearing a light red tie, on his shoulder spoke up, I'll get your money back, he said in a rough voice. He then ran off after the boat at incredible speeds. Shortly after that the rest of the group caught up and they could see that the boat was coming back with the man with the bird was there, holding onto Polly's ear like a child who had severely misbehaved and his mother was hauling up to bed.
Ow, 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 ow. Okay, you can let me go. Polly yelled, let me go, take it easy. Jeez, I'm not gonna run away. You got me, alright? You can stop bitching me here now. He added as he pushed the man away from him and nursed his red ear. Ow, I was lucky enough to find the money and you screwed up. Better watch your back, Luigi. I'll remember this.
Don't pay back your debt with somebody else's money, you idiot. The pigeon said, have you no shame? Hey, I happened upon that money fair and square, Polly yelled.
Stealing from thieves is still stealing. Baka, the pigeon said as the man, Luigi, grabbed him by the ear again. I didn't steal anything. I was just borrowing their Yagara for a while, he reported.
Looks like they're back, Iceberg answered next to them. Luffy sighed in relief, saying how happy he was for Usopp. At those words, Usopp and Nami began to pull his cheeks out, snapping at him that was their 200 million to fix the Mary. And Nami demanded to know why he didn't get it back himself, and Luffy just answered that the pigeon said that he'd take care of it.
Well, Iceberg said as he held the little mouse in his hands for a moment before he slipped it back into his breast pocket. That was embarrassing. Rest assured we'll deal with our employee appropriately. Allow us to handle this so that there's no bad blood between you. Although Polly's behavior was reprehensible, Khalifa added, it's fortunate he saved your money from the Frankie family. Well, I guess you can look at it that way, Nami nodded thoughtfully. No harm done, right? Luffy said, and the two of them finally let go of Luffy's stretched out cheeks and let him fall to the ground.
But Nami had more important things to talk about. She turned back to Iceberg and Khalifa, asking them, so who is this Frankie family? Did they rob from everyone they run into, or just us?
Well, that depends, Khalifa said, pushing her glasses back up, but normally they dismantle ships. You mean they're workmen? Nami asked in surprise as Luffy stood up. I don't know about you, but I never hired a team that looks like that.
Khalifa and Iceberg explained that the Frankie family were a public nuisance, that they dismantled ships for a living but were also bounty hunters. Whenever they hear that pirates were in town, they go after them and try to collect the bounties on their heads. After that, they take their ships, dismantle them, and then sell them on the black market. Though underhanded, it's just good business to them, and Iceberg finished by warning them that if they catch them, they'll bleed them dry. I don't know, Luffy said with a smile. Those guys look too weak to do anything to us. Iceberg gently petted the mouse's head before he said softly, the men you saw were underlings. Frankie, the leader of the group, is not nearly so harmless. If I were you, I'd avoid him at any cost.
The two had just got back and were getting out of the boat, with Lucci carrying the suitcases in one hand, and dragging Polly over by his ear in the other one. Here you are, Iceberg, the pigeon said when they got up to him, do with him as you will. I'm here, you can let go, Polly yelled, finally getting himself free from Lucci's grasp as Iceberg complimented him on his good work.
Truly, the pigeon said to the three straw hats, I can't apologize enough for the actions of this oaf. Cuckoo. Ah, Luffy yelled, eyes wide in shock, it is talking. Lucci threw Polly on the ground and tossed him the cases. Tell the nice people you're sorry, oaf. That pigeon really has it out for that dude, doesn't he? Luffy gasped, pointing to the bird and then to Polly on the ground.
So the little bird talked, but the guy doesn't? Usopp asked in bewilderment before he smiled. Anyway, I'm just glad that we got all our money back. Oh, Polly said, getting up and walking over to them with the cases in them. So this money belongs to you, huh? Polly passed them in Luffy's arms. Good thing I was around. Yeah, Luffy agreed. Thanks a lot. Polly put his hands on his shoulders and told him, if you really want to thank me, give me 10%. Not gonna happen, Nami said, and almost glad to see Lucci hit him over the head with a hammer and at it. Again, I'm quite sorry. The pigeon went on to tell them that Polly had a gambling problem and was in so much debt, he lost sight of everything but money. At those words, Polly lost his temper and began to fight him. After Lucci's pet pigeon got out of the way, the rope wrapped around Lucci's arm, and when he pulled, he swung him around like a ball and chain. Lucci was able to stop his head getting slammed into this man with his arm, his fingers digging into the ground and holding him up as straight as an arrow. The fight ended soon after that, and the Straw Hats found out about Lucci's ventriloquism act with Verhotori. Luffy and Usopp were especially impressed and were applauding him as Polly seemed to calm down enough to start laughing again. He's just a weirdo who doesn't know how to talk to people on his own, he said as he pulled out a cigar, but then Polly spotted Nami and freaked out. Hold on a second, he shouted out, turning red and pointing a finger at her. What does that woman think she's doing? Nami looked confused and asked what he was talking about as he yelled out, have you no shame? And when she continued to look confused, he added, don't play dumb with me, you harlot. I can see WALAY in my flag. Cover up and show a little decency, would y'all? This place is a man's workplace, you know?
Khalifa stepped in front of Nami, trying to calm Polly down, but he freaked out when he saw her as well. You too, Khalifa, he yelled as Lucci grabbed his arm to stop him from doing something stupid. How many times have I told you those clothes of yours are not APPROPIRATE? If you want to look PROFESSONAL, you should wear pants. Or at least ankle-length skirts. This guy's got issues, Usopp whispered. He's serious, isn't he? Nami asked them and they only shrugged alone with her as Iceberg told them to come with him. After everything was said and done, they opened the door and Iceberg began to show them around the yard, all of them staring around in amazement at every little thing they could see.
Watching the hustle and bustle of the shipwright working, seeing the ship being built from the ground up was truly an amazing sight to see.
Iceberg gave them a tour. Everyone was glad to see him and Khalifa explained that there had been several shipbuilding companies, and about 5 years ago, they all united under him as Galila. Luffy even offered for Iceberg to join, which he politely refused, but told him that they had plenty of shipwrights, and though he doubted any of them would be willing to join a pirate crew, if they found someone, he wouldn't get in the way. By the way, Iceberg mentioned to Luffy after a short time, Khalifa mentioned that Nico Robin was part of your crew, is that correct?
Sure is, he confirmed. She's nice to have around since she's so smart, but then he noticed the serious look on Iceberg's face and the smile faded from his own. What's up? He asked. There's not something wrong with her, is there? Oh no, Iceberg said suddenly, and though he did a good job of hiding it, they could see the lie in his eyes. However, Luffy seemed to buy it as he went running over to look and climb up from the ships, becoming a monkey as he did so. Soon Nami was yelling up at Luffy to get down from the large galleon they were walking around on.
Okay, be right there, Luffy yelled as he jumped down and landed light on his feet next to them all, quickly becoming a human as he straightened up. But he frowned a little as he looked around and asked Nami where Usopp was. Nami explained that the last time she saw him was when he was looking at the cannons. As they looked in the direction, one of the shipwrights spotted them. Hey, you there, he called to them and walked over. These bags are yours, right?
It was true, he was carrying the 2 black cases with him.
He put it down next to the other one and Nami looked angry as she said that Usopp was supposed to be taking care of those. Luffy thanked him as Nami looked around again for Usopp in frustration about leaving their money behind. The shipwright looked surprised and Luffy told them that the 2 bags he found had 200 million in them. The shipwright laughed, as if he thought for sure that they were pulling his leg before he left and Luffy waved after him in a friendly way. Nami looked startled at the laughing shipwright but seemed to let it go.
So, Luffy said, turning back to the others, going back to the matter at hand, how much do you think the repairs are going to cost? We got plenty of money to spend, and you paid each bag fondly. No price is too high for our Mary.
Kaku went to sit down on a large pyramid of lumber, acting like bleachers. And while you're at it, Luffy added, why don't you make her stronger, faster, tough as nails and of course, decked out with cannons.
I'd like some pretty engravings or some kind of decorations along the hull, Nami added eagerly. Also, can you guys renovate the inside?
Not so fast, he said, his expression unusually grim, and Luffy and Nami's smiles faded at his tone, sensing that something was wrong. That ship of yours, Kaku began, she's gone on some really extraordinary journeys, hasn't she? Yeah, you bet, Luffy agreed at once, we've done it all. A while back we flew to the sky, fell back down, we climbed a big mountain too. So, you have to work hard to fix her up extra good, okay?
Kaku, however, hadn't said anything as he listened. Noticing this, Luffy frowned a little and asked, almost like a dare, you don't think I'm lying, do you?
That's not the issue, Kaku said with a slight pause. He then turned his head and finally glanced back up at them as he informed them. Her battle scars are far worse than you think. Then you're saying it's gonna take a long time for you to fix her? Nami asked, sounding a little surprised at that. No, ma'am, Kaku said bluntly, it's not about the time, it's not about skill either. I'm saying no one can fix her, not even us.
Both Luffy and Nami looked stunned, so convinced that they were finally about to get their ship fixed up, only to be told that it was already too late.
Polly came over to sit down on the timbers well before he puffed on his cigar and asked them, so that means that the keel was damaged, huh?
That's right, Kaku answered. It looks like it's taken a real wallop. No way, Nami gasped out, stepping forward before she explained. We've gone everywhere without any problems up until now. In theory, Kaku went on, even if we did everything we could, the probability of your ship lasting till the next island is 0. Luffy looked at them in pure disbelief, staring at them as if he couldn't believe what he was saying.
What, you can't fix the Going Merry? Luffy cried out, clearly not wanting to believe it. Why not? I thought all of you were supposed to be awesome shipwrights. He smacked one of the cases and told them, don't worry about the money. Look, we got plenty.
It's not about money, son, Kaku informed him. No matter how much you pay, that ship can't be restored to how she used to be. Luffy and Nami were both looking heartbroken at the news. To be honest, I'm rather impressed you were able to get that old girl this far, Kaku stated, a little bit of impressed tone coming through on his voice, considering the condition that she's currently in.
What is that supposed to mean? Nami demanded hotly. What exactly is going on with the Merry?
Do you know what the keel is, Amoro girl? Polly asked the navigator. Amor, Nami began hotly before she asked, the thing on the bottom of the float? Yeah, Polly confirmed, breathing out some smoke is the most important part of lumber on a ship.
It crosses from stern to bow, and provides support. When you build a ship, you start off by placing the keel. Then you set the wood for the steam, the stern, the frame brackets and deck beams. All of the pieces are carefully assembled together with the keel serving as the core. It's the very backbone, framework, and life of every vessel constructed. And when it's severely damaged, then that's the end of it. You can't just replace it with a new one. That'd be the same thing as building a new ship from scratch.
That's the reason we, or anyone, won't be able to fix her, Polly finished up dismally. Your ship is just a bunch of wood stuck together, waiting her end.
Hey, you, don't say just horrible things. Nami yelled out, obviously feeling the sting of what they were saying. Luffy, however, didn't say anything as he just looked at them, as if trying to hold back what he really thought of their assessment.
Horrible or not, it's the truth, Polly said indifferently, and they all glared at him.
Okay, fine then. Luffy yelled at them. Just rebuild her from the ground up like you said before. Build another Going Merry.
Cuckoo, sorry, not possible, Luigi's pigeon said.
Why not? Luffy asked in frustration. We could build you a very similar ship, the pigeon explained, holding up his wings like hands. But no one can build you one that's exactly the same. Nowhere in the world are there two completely identical ships. It simply can't be done.
Nami, who looked lost as to who she should be looking at, Luigi of the pigeon, asked, what do you mean, why?
Tell me, are there any two trees in the world that grow exactly the same way? The bird, Hattori, asked them and she blinked as she thought that over, everyone knowing the answer there. A sailing ship is mostly built out of lumber, Hattori went on. So the overall size and shape of a vessel is determined by the type of wood used. That's why a complete duplicate of your ship can't be built by us or anyone. Even when using the same blueprints, if we made a ship like that with those specifications, the ones who would notice the difference and feel like it's a completely different ship would be all of you guys. Caw.
Nami's hands curled into fists. No way, she said, sounding like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. So you're saying it's absolutely impossible for us to continue sailing on the Going Merry?
Unfortunately, yes, Kaku confessed. You can either wait around for her to sink, or you can dismantle her immediately. Luffy, however, was still glaring at the shipwrights as Iceberg told them that it sounded like the Merry was on her last legs. But if they had so much money, they couldn't ask for a better opportunity to get a new ship. They were in the best place in the world for a new model. I understand your ship was a Carvel, Iceberg informed them. So sailing on the Grand Line with an old ship like that would have been difficult to begin with.
No way, Luffy said firmly, we're not getting a new ship.
Nami whispered his name, but Luffy had already got one talking. The Merry is, he paused for a moment before he looked up and proclaimed loudly, the Going Merry is the ship of the Straw Hat Pirates. If she's repaired, she can still sail.
She'll be fine, you'll see, she got us here today, didn't she? He asked, and you tell us out of nowhere she can't sail anymore? I can't believe that, I won't, you guys are saying that cause you don't know her, you have no idea how strong she is. Iceberg just looked at him. Then her plan is to just keep sailing her until she sinks? He asked as Nami looked surprised by the coldness in his voice. I'm shocked, so this is the decision of the ship's captain? Luffy looked startled that he would ask something like that, now shaking and looking confused as to what to do.
Iceberg sighed and shut his eyes. This discussion is over for now, he told them, just think about it. If you decide to buy a ship, let me know, my people can help. He looked back up. If you're able to spend 300 million, we can build you a state-of-the-art ship. He turned to Khalifa, who handed him a catalog of all their used and new models to use as a price reference. Luffy was still looking lost as to what to do as Nami took it miserably. She was just telling Luffy that they should head back to the ship and tell everyone the bad news when someone came walking over towards them. A muscular man with black hair, a mustache, and thick sunglasses came walking towards him. His chest was covered with intricate tattoos, and on his head, there was a part of his hair that stuck up like a spike.
The man named Lulu called Iceberg. There's someone at the front gate who wants to see you.
Iceberg looked to Khalifa, who looked at her notes. There doesn't appear to be anyone on your appointment schedule for today, she said in surprise.
It looks like those world government officials again, Lulu said. Should I tell them you're unavailable?
Iceberg nodded, telling Lulu to tell them that he wasn't here, but it was too late for several men in suits were heading towards them. Polly warned Luffy and Nami to hide, and they went behind the large stack of lumber as they heard them all talk. What worried them all was the fact that the middleman claimed that he could smell pirates around, but told him that wasn't important, he just wanted to talk to him.
It was funny watching Iceberg acting like a child, telling him to go away as he picked his nose. In the end, he walked away with the government men, however, leaving the other shipwrights talking with each other. They moved back to Luffy and Nami, who was muttering to Luffy that they should leave now before they got spotted. But when Luffy didn't answer, she looked back to see that he was frowning heavily at the two cases he grabbed. What? Hissed Nami. What's wrong? Something seemed weird about these bags when I grabbed them, Luffy said as he lifted one of the cases and looked at her. They're really light. Huh, what do you mean? Nami asked him, putting on a fake smile. Oh, come on, stop kidding around. How could they be with all that money inside?
As if to prove her point, she took her case and weighed one of Luffy's cases in her hands. But then she stopped and stared at them as if she realized that he was right. Luffy's case seemed to be much lighter. They took the two cases and opened them. They only peeked inside them before they screamed. They screamed so loud that it seemed to shake the entire shipyard, and all the shipwrights were turned in their direction, startled. You idiots, Polly yelled as he walked around to glare at them. What the hell are you? His eyes widened and he turned red when he saw how Nami was sitting on the ground. Hey lady, how dare you sit like that? Nami completely ignored Polly as she crawled over to the two bags, almost afraid if she spoke too loudly, it would make it true. Don't tell me, there's no way.
I don't want to look, Luffy also stuttered, but they looked anyway. The outside were glossy and looked new, the inside were all patched and sewed together, and most importantly, they were empty.
200 million, Luffy yelled. Gone, it's really gone. Nami screamed. Wait, look at these bags, they aren't even ours. Hey, keep it down, Hattori said as Lucci came over to see what the yelling was all about. What's wrong?
Our money is gone, Luffy croaked out.
Vanished, gone, disappeared, Nami whimpered, sounding close to tears. Polly looked alarmed at that and asked what they were talking about. Hattori looked at him and asked, Polly, was it you again?
Huh, no, Polly yelled back at him. Honest, Hattori pressed him.
Why would I lie? Polly demanded. You mean it, Hattori again. And soon they had gotten into a slight argument as Lulu asked Kaku what he was doing with the Frankie family. Kaku looked confused at the question, claiming that he hadn't been anywhere near the Frankie family all day. Lulu seemed baffled too as he mentioned that he could have sworn that he saw his long nose.
But at the worst, Long Nose, Luffy, and Nami both stuck their heads around the corner to stare at him.
Whoa, 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 hold on a sec, Nami yelled, running out and asking what he was talking about. Lulu looked surprised by their sudden interest and said, just outside the gate I saw someone who looked like Kaku with the Frankie family. They had 4 cases with them, but they left 2 of them behind. And the guy with them looked like he was about to cry. That's Usopp, Luffy exclaimed. You saw him with the Frankie family. Nami yelled at them. Well, you could say he was with them, Lulu admitted as he pushed the spike of hair into his head to get it to behave. It ended up being pushed out in his mustache. Or maybe you could say they were dragging him away.
That's called kidnapping, Nami yelled at him. She then turned to Luffy, telling him they had to find him. But Luffy had already took off so fast that he was leaving cloud of dust behind him. It took hours of searching for the missing Straw Hat member.
Even with Luffy being able to cover land, sky, and see through his various animal forms, Water 7 was a huge city causing the search to be difficult. Eventually Luffy was able to meet up with Zoro, Sanji, and Chopper who had heard from Nami what had happened and came to join him in his search for Usopp.
With the combined usage of Luffy and Chopper's sense of smell, Luffy even turning into a bloodhound for extra nose power, the crew was soon on the right track.
They only had to travel a couple miles from where they met up before they found it, and as soon as they spotted it, there was no doubt who it belonged to. Sitting on the cove, there was a large, colorful house. The front held the words, Frankie House, in giant golden letters, and there were large, robot-like arms hanging off the sides that reminded them all of a workshop. But the 4 Straw Hats weren't even looking at it, all of them were gathered around something laying on the ground. When they approached, some of them gasped. It was Usopp. His body was all mangled and twisted. He was covered with bruises, cuts, and his face was dripping blood. He looked like a pretzel all twisted up, but the worst part was seeing the dust imprints of footprints covering his body, as if he had been used as a doormat and the dried tears that made tracks down his face. Luffy's voice sounded almost far away to him, but he listened anyway, asking Chopper if he was still breathing.
Chopper was examining Usopp, turning his body over very gently so that he could see him. He's unconscious, but he began, sounding close to crying. Yes, he's breathing. He'll live. I can still save him.
Once he heard that Usopp would live, Luffy lowered his hat down so that they couldn't see his eyes. He then said softly, you wait out here for us, okay Usopp? Everyone seemed to ready themselves for what they were gonna do. Sanji just lit up another cigarette as Zoro tied his bandana over his head. You could almost see the steam coming out of Chopper's nose. And though Luffy's face was oddly blank, there was a deep anger emanating from his body. And if there was one thing they knew, it was when you couldn't see Luffy's eyes before a fight, something bad was about to go down. Walking side by side, they headed to the house without another word. We're going to level that stupid house to the ground, Luffy promised, and they all slowly walked, and the closer they got, they could hear the sounds of laughter and partying going on inside the building. They stood out the front door for only a short minute. Just then, the door opened and a large man had appeared, with his head turned over his shoulder and seemed to be laughing at someone. He turned, ready to leave until he looked down and spotted them all there. He looked baffled, but Luffy had already changed his arm into that of a tiger's stripped paw and, curling it up into a fist, took him out with a single punch, sending him flying back and breaking the door clean off its hinges. At the sound, all the other members stopped partying and were freaking out at what was going on.
What was that? What happened? Who the hell are those guys?
You jerks, you got a death wish. The 4 of them just stood in the doorway and glared at every single one of them. It was clear that this was no longer about the money, they had just made this little grudge personal. All the members of the Frankie family had been enjoying themselves, there was booze and cards laying all over the place, but they were now staring at who came knocking with terror on their faces and they gulped.
I recognize them, one of them shouted, pointing at Luffy, it's that pirate, Straw Hat Luffy.
So you came to get your money back, did ya? One of the largest guys said, marching forward and slipping armor around his upper half. Bad move, just take a look around you. You really think the 4 of you are enough to handle all of us? Ha, 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 but since you're here, might as well take those big bounties on your heads.
Once everyone calmed down, they all began to smirk and already seemed to be making plans what to do with their war money for turning them in.
The temporary leader, a man named Zambai, grinned. He's the captain of that long-nosed weakling we took care of earlier. He mocked at them and Luffy's eye twitched before becoming slits at those words and his anger seemed to grow even more so when the others laughed.
With that pitiful excuse for a pirate on his crew, he can't possibly be that strong, someone laughed. The giant of the man came over, daring him to attack, which Luffy was only too happy to do so. He marched up to the man before turning around, causing the game members to blink in confusion. Horse, Luffy muttered ominously as he got into position. What do you think you're doing? He taunted him with a laugh.
Are you going him with your back turned? Another guy laughed. Not that it mattered, as even a bombardment of battleships can't put a dent in that armor.
Ha, what a joke, someone sneered, but Luffy simply got on his hands, resembling Sprinter's Poseidon.
The guy raised a giant axe, ready to take him out here, but at that moment, Luffy's legs transformed into that of a horse and he sent out a rapid-fire series of donkey kicks right into the man's gut. The hooves which could crush solid steel hit so hard and fast, that sparks weren't even produced as the metal got superheated from the blows. As the last kick landed, a bright light came bursting, burning hot, and blasting through the armor with a giant hole. Burning rodeo, Luffy screamed out as his opponent was sent flying back, a giant hole in the armor. For a moment no one moved but then the Frankie family began to scream in panic as they stared at their friend on the ground.
He kicked a hole right through it, someone yelled, but Luffy didn't have any trace of enjoyment on his face. He was ticked off and he was going to make sure that these guys pay for it.
Zambai held his hands out in what looked like surrender. Hey, hold on, just wait a second guys. Let's talk about this first. Okay, guys, but then he turned to the others who had their cannons out. Okay guys. Fire the cannons. His men then fired their cannons at him, but Zoro was the one who ran ahead. Now, 3-sword style, Karasuma, he cried out before sticking the sword in his mouth. He cut through each one of the cannonballs and finished, Raven Hunt. And as he seemed to hover in the air, the cannon split clean in half and exploded safely away from the others behind him. The Frankie family screamed in terror as Zoro looked up at them dangerously, looking like some sort of demon. What? Zambai screamed, his eyes practically popping out of his head. Impossible. Those cannonballs are made of iron.
As if he wanted to prove a point, Zoro went and sliced through one of their cannons clean in half and scared them worse than ever.
Holy crap, someone screamed, these guys are seriously bad news. Let's get out of here. Everyone run for the back door. Another yelled, but as they tried to run, Sanji jumped over them, doing a one-hand stand on one guy's face. You guys started this fight, the cook said darkly, it's kind of pathetic to run from it like cowards. Sanji was far from over. Party table, kick course.
He then spun around rapidly to deliver a savage kick to the face of anyone within range. After he ran out of targets, he jumped down and kicked the poor guy he was swinging on so hard that he went flying. Now the rest of the Frankie family were getting ready to do just about anything to get out now. But through all the smoke, Chopper was there to stop them from jumping through windows. He had swallowed Rumble Ball and went into Horn Point before he charged ahead.
Roseo Coronado, he cried and he chased them all down, tossing them all up in the air with his horns, and to see them land on their heads, embedded in the ground with their bodies sticking straight up out of the ground and their bodies sticking straight up like a column. Wait, Zambai cried out, trying to stop the destruction, only now he didn't have any cannons to back him up. He was close to crying here as he begged, you guys. It's the money, right? You just want the money back. The 200 million that long-nosed guy had. Luffy's eye twitched once again when they mentioned Usopp, a non-human growl escaping his lips that reverberated all the way to his chest. Is that right? I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but that pile of money isn't here anymore. Zambai shouted, a smile coming back to his face. Frankie, the family boss, took it all and went on a shopping spree. And since he's buying something on the black market, we don't have any idea where he is or even how to find him.
He went on, so no matter how much of a rampage you go on, that 200 million won't be coming back, so why don't you just go on in?
But Luffy heard enough. He punched him, sent him flying back and crashing into the wall.
Zambai, one of them yelled in fear, but they were far from done.
Shut up, that's enough out of you, Sanji snarled. This has nothing to do with the money.
Got that right, Zoro added. It's too late for that.
Not even your ashes will be left when we're done, Luffy said, darkly cracking his knuckles as he glared at them with disdain. We're gonna leave no bone unbroken. It was all over at those words. The Frankie family panicked worse than ever as they pulled out a giant cannon, the fire anything ya got cannon. But nothing they fired out of it, which consisted with everything from clothes to a kitchen sink, worked against them.
They were easily able to dodge every attack they had to throw at them before he gave them the beating of a lifetime. Luffy unleashed the fury of the animal kingdom upon their collective behinds. Zoro slashed them like he was cutting weeds. Sanji served them heaping helping his foot to their faces, and Chopper showed why it's a bad idea for doctors to make house calls. None of the men were killed, but it was a close call. Like Luffy had said, no one seemed willing to leave until they broke each and every bone they could get their hands on.
They ended up blowing up the house, and his men all laying on the ground beaten and bloodied. Among the smoking wreckage of the house lay all of the Frankie family. Sanji and Zoro sat there, both of them looking bored, but their anger seemed to have mostly disappeared as Chopper went back to Usopp and began to treat him. With their anger spent, they were all talking about what they should do. Luffy didn't join in their talk as he jumped up higher on the burnt crescent moon that had once hung on the outside of the house, and looked out at the sea, as if lost in thought.
Sanji kicked a piece of shrapnel near his feet and asked stiffly, should he go after Frankie?
And start looking where? Zoro asked him dully as he retired his bandana around his arm. Aw man, looks like these idiots really didn't know where he took the money, Sanji spat as he glanced with antipathy down at some of the men. They all followed his gaze to where Chopper was still bandaging Usopp up. And if we do find him, if he spent it, then there's no getting it back. Zoro was looking up to where Luffy was standing and asking, what now? Even if we wait around for him, he may not be back for quite a while. Chopper was yelling at them that he had finished the first aid treatment for Usopp but he needed help to carry him back to the ship. Sanji and Zoro both got up saying that sticking around this dump wouldn't help matters anymore. Sanji added that they left Nami alone at the ship and they still didn't know where Robin was, as well as the whole matter with the ship. Sanji then turned back to Luffy and called to him, hey, Luffy. Luffy just continued to stand there for a short time as if coming to a painful choice. Without turning to look at them, he said, I've made a decision. Both Sanji and Zoro looked at him curiously, wondering what he was talking about. About the ship, he added after a slight pause, it's time we part ways with the Mary. We'll say goodbye to her here. Chapter 20. It was much later in the afternoon after reaching the Frankie family's house.
Things were strangely peaceful. The ship was rocking gently at the cape.
The air was chilly. A cool and pleasant breeze was giving gentle touches to the crew as light falling like liquid amber on the vast deck and soaking it with its rich color. The straw hats were all scattered around the deck. They were all looking at the catalog, but no one seemed to have their hearts into it as they flipped silently through the pages. They kept glancing anxiously to the door that led to the galley, and they knew they must be waiting for news on Usopp.
Chopper came bursting through the door, yelling happily that Usopp was finally awake.
All of them beaming, looking happier than they had for the last couple memories. They all got up and went into the galley to see that Usopp was lying on one of the mattresses they used for Luffy and Robin when they had been recovering from being frozen. He was sitting up, covered in bandages, but he couldn't seem to bring himself to look at any of them as they put the ship's catalog on the table and gathered around him. You know, Nami scolded him, I should punch you for scaring us like that. Yeah, no kidding, Sanji added, like a father would to a kid who had been trying to pull off a stupid and dangerous stunt. Though it looks like you've taken enough punches already if you ask me. What were you thinking taking on those guys alone? Zoro scolded Usopp, telling him that he can't just run off and fight whoever he wanted. Sanji snorted, oh, that's a good one coming from you, he said to Zoro as Luffy laughed at the two of them looking ready to fight. Already, it almost seemed like the money was forgotten, like nothing had happened. But despite everyone's attitude, Usopp still sat there, looking close to breaking down completely. This wouldn't have happened if I was strong like you guys, he mumbled to himself before he looked up, his eyes begging that they forgive him, letting them know how sorry he was. I'm sorry, it's all my fault. And with those words, he forced his wounded body to get up and flung his arms around the one standing closest to him, Zoro, and hugged his legs as he cried out, I'm so ashamed of myself.
I knew how important that money was, he cried out, and I he trailed off, seemingly unable to go on any further. Okay, I know you're sorry, Zoro yelled out, but you don't have to get so touchy, feeling on me, okay?
But the others were all smiling, even as Usopp yelled out, but all our savings. All the trouble we went through, what about the Mary? Come on, calm down, stop your whining and listen to the doctor, Nami urged, and after a few minutes, they were able to pry Usopp's hands from Zoro, who was looking greatly relieved, and got him to sit back on the mattress. It only took a few more minutes for him to regain control of his emotions and settle down as they informed him that they took care of the Frankie family, but their leader Frankie had already left by the time they got there. Did you catch him? He asked hurriedly. They all looked at each other grimly before Sanji came out and said, no, none of his men seemed to have any idea to where he was. Apparently he went to go buy something on the black market, so who knows where he is right now. So, is there a chance we might get our money back after all? Usopp asked, though from his tone, they could tell he must have guessed the answer.
Well, maybe, Luffy said, sounding encouraging, but they could all hear it out as well. We won't know for sure until that Frankie guy shows up.
I see, memory, Usopp whispered, sounding grim as he apologized, I'm sorry.
Hey, Luffy went on cheerfully, even if we can't get the rest back, we still have 100 million berries left over. Don't worry, he began to laugh until Nami glared at him and snapped, yeah, but he lost twice as much. The others in the room were looking at Nami with hard expressions before she realized what she said and muttered a quick apology to Usopp. But Usopp didn't seem to blame her for that as he kept his eyes shadowed. No, it's fine, he said softly before he looked up and asked, more importantly, is Mary gonna be okay? Now things were getting tense all around them. The Straw Hats all felt a strong surge of sympathy for Usopp, and guilt over what they had to tell him. Luffy's eyes were sad but he forced on a smile as Usopp went on pleadingly, I mean, can we get her repaired with the money we have left? We're lucky we have all these awesome shipwrights to work on her. Usopp went on, but I know that things are gonna get rough out there, so I want her to be stronger than ever before. We gotta do a lot more than just a little touch up. So, do you think those guys will still do a good job with only 100 million left to pay with? The other Straw Hats were looking away and this time it was their turn to seem to be unable to look him directly in his eyes as he went on talking. Luffy was the only one who kept the smile up, but it seemed to be becoming hard work. Usopp looked at them all, as he asked if they talked to the shipwrights about it.
Ah, yeah, Luffy finally said carefully, but we aren't having her repair it. Still keeping that winning smile plastered on, he came out and told him, we decided to get a new ship instead. Usopp stared at Luffy as if he just couldn't believe what his own ears. I know that we probably should have asked you first, Luffy told him apologetically, but we didn't have much choice. Either way, I've made up my mind, Luffy finished. The Going Merry has taken good care of us, but it looks like our journey with her has to end here. Anyway, Luffy went on, as he reached behind him to grab the catalog and flip through it as he explained, Ice Pops gave us this awesome ship's catalog to flip through. There's all kinds of different ships we can pick from in here. And if we try to shop for a used model we can go bigger than the Merry and still keep our budget under 100 million. Wait, Usopp interrupted Luffy, holding up his hands at once before a rather rough smile came to his lips. Just stop, I get it Luffy, but the joke's gone on long enough okay. See, he looked down at Chopper, who was shaking a little, looking worried. Chopper doesn't know you're kidding. Look at how upset it's making him. Geez Captain, you know better than to treat your crew like that. He looked to Nami and added, come on Nami, back me up here.
When none of the other crewmates backed him up or even scolded Luffy, Usopp seemed to really realize that this wasn't a joke.
That Luffy meant what he was saying. He stared around at them all in horror before he gasped out, hold up, does that mean that we don't have enough for the repairs? It's because I lost the 200 million isn't it? He seemed convinced that was the cause, and under the situation, they supposed that would be the natural response wouldn't it? And now we can't afford to work on the Merry. Is that what this is about? Luffy didn't say anything as he closed the catalog and looked at Usopp right in the eye, as if trying to figure out the best way to break the news to him. But Usopp wasn't done, telling them that had to be the reason. After all, a first-class shipyard was bound to cost a fortune, and was hardly even listening when Luffy tried to get him to stop talking and to listen to him. The long-nosed sniper was yelling now, almost desperately. He screamed out, what is it? Tell me, don't try to sugarcoat it. I'm not, okay. Luffy yelled back at him, his smile disappearing completely now. I don't even care that you lost all the money. That's over now. If that's how you feel then what's all this crap about buying a new ship? Usopp screamed out, the redness in his eyes standing out violently as he did so. Zoro stepped forward, both of you stop it. Fighting isn't gonna help. Luffy and Usopp just glared at the other, none of them ever seen each other look like that before. Zoro glanced at them both before he said firmly, just calm down for a sec.
I don't see what I'm doing wrong, Usopp yelled out, though his voice was softer. He's the one saying all this dumb stuff.
I know how you feel. Nami yelled as past Chopper stood between the two, trying to get them to stop fighting, looking more scared with every second, but you shouldn't get so worked up now.
Listen to Nami, Usopp, Chopper said worriedly. If you don't get any rest, you're not gonna get any better.
WHO cares about me, Usopp shouted, getting up. How can you sit here as he's making jokes about getting a new ship? He demanded of them all.
But Luffy was yelling this time. I'm not joking about anything. This was a hard decision for me to make too.
Oh yeah, I feel really sorry for you, Usopp shouted, hitting the catalog right out of his hands and knocked it to the floor before he screamed out, already window shopping for a new toy.
You're trying to pick a fight with me, Luffy demanded, his voice as cold as ice, almost daring Usopp to say yes.
I don't want your pity, got it? Usopp yelled at him, as the others looked ready to force the two apart if this went on any longer. If you tell me it doesn't matter that I lost the money then why are you talking about buying a new ship? Just spit it out already. Luffy was looking like he was doing something against his will as Usopp continued on his rant, if we can't afford the repairs because I screwed up then tell me. Don't show me some stupid catalog and change the subject. I want to know the truth.
And finally Luffy came right out and said it, almost screaming it, Merry can't be repaired.
Usopp was looking horrified at what he just stared at him, Luffy panting hard, trying to catch his breath. What did you just say? He gasped out. Luffy's hands curled tightly. Don't make me repeat myself, he hissed at him. I told you, the Merry can't be repaired anymore. He lowered his head so that he was staring at the floor. No matter what we do we can't fix her. Usopp fell to his knees, looking as if Luffy really did strike him, though they doubted that any punch could have hurt worse than hearing the news about Merry. Everyone seemed to have trouble speaking at that, no one wanting to watch.
Otherwise I wouldn't say something like that, Luffy said sadly. You mean this ship? Usopp suddenly yelled, hitting the floor with his bandaged hands. This ship we're all riding on right now is broken? That's right, Luffy said, in an oddly cool voice that didn't sound like him at all. It's only a matter of time before she sinks. Usopp turned away, snarling, what are you talking about, Luffy? That's nuts. No, I'm serious, Luffy answered and told him what the shipwright said about the ship after he had looked at it, how Merry wouldn't even make it to the next island.
Usopp turned to glare at him as he demanded, then it's settled. That's it, a bunch of strangers tell you to scrap your ship and you don't even ask any questions.
That's enough, Luffy asked flatly, and this time it was an order. But he might as well have just said nothing at all for Usopp went on. I understand these guys know what they're talking about, but this is just wrong. With every word that Usopp said, Luffy seemed to be growing angrier and angrier, his pupils becoming slits as his powers started to show. If this kept up it was only going to be a matter of time before he slugged him.
Don't give up on the Merry, Usopp yelled. What about all the adventures we've gone on together? What about all the battles we fought? She's our friend, he went on. She's one of us. Are you gonna abandon her for another ship without a second thought? The two glared at the other, both shaking with anger, and what Usopp said next made them all feel like wincing. After all we've been through, is that how little the Merry means to you, Luffy? I know you're upset, Usopp, Chopper pleaded, looking like he wanted to restrain him, but you need to calm down. Sorry, but no, Usopp said impatiently, though he didn't sound sorry at all as he started to cough and gasp for air. I'm not backing down until we settle this. What? Luffy demanded harshly, so you know better than the shipwrights. If we had someone on the crew who knew about this stuff, we wouldn't ask them in the first place. Then forget them, Usopp yelled defiantly. We don't need those guys telling us what to do. I'll repair the Merry myself just like before. We made it this far, there's no reason why we can't go on that way. He moved from the bed and actually began to crawl his wounded body across the floor. Here, I'll get started right now. Come on guys, help me out.
That's not gonna work, Usopp, Sanji said as he continued to crawl to the door.
That's right, we don't have enough lumber do we? Usopp said, completely in denial about all this. I better go buy some at the shipyard. We've got a lot of work to do. Luffy, who was shaking, finally snapped as he yelled out, you're not a shipwright, Usopp. You hear me? The sudden tone that he used here shocked some of the Straw Hats. He sounded truly angry, the only one who seemed calm was Zoro. He just watched the whole scene with a dark look in his eye, it was impossible to know what was going on inside his head. Nami was now trying to calm down Luffy down, to get him to stop, but Usopp was crushing the catalog when his hand found it. Yeah, you're right I know, he yelled out, sounding close to tears again, but so what? I don't see why you're so hung up over what those stupid shipwrights said. If they knew what she'd gone through they wouldn't give up on the Merry so easy. They just want your money. Nami gasped out Usopp's name, unable to believe what he was saying, as he went on, the Merry's our ship so it's our job to take care of her without someone else butting in. I'm not giving up, I'm not letting them take the Merry away from me, he screamed out finally. This is stupid, you all got fooled by a bunch of salesmen trying to pawn off a used boat. He stood up, the Luffy I know wouldn't cave into some sales pitch from a complete stranger. He believed in the strength of the Merry and the strength of his crew. He stumbled over to him and grabbed him by his vest, but Usopp's speech next was what stunned everyone. But here you are acting like you know everything while ignoring your friends. I can't believe that's the kind of captain you turned out to be. I thought you were better than that. Luffy's eyes were filled with rage now and his hands were shaking so violently it was only gonna be a matter of time. Nami frowned at that as she stepped forward. You're not being fair, Usopp. She said angrily. Luffy felt the same. But this time Luffy held up a hand to cut her off as he warned her, you, stay out of this. But his full attention was back on Usopp as he said loudly and firmly, it was my call and I stay by it. There's nothing you can do. We're getting a new ship whether you like it or not. This is the end of the road for the Mary. I'm not leaving her here. I don't care what you say. Usopp yelled, now shaking him like a ragdoll. I know you're always trying to think about the future but not everyone on this crew is like that. I see the Mary as one of our friends, got it. And I won't abandon her while she's hurt. Don't be stupid, Luffy shouted out, even if she is a friend, that doesn't mean she's a person. He then threw him off, but Usopp still kept going. Well, she is to me, Usopp yelled angrily, and she still has the strength to live, but you wouldn't appreciate that because all you care about is getting a new ship.
Sanji stepped in, trying to tell them to stop fighting, but Usopp was yelling over his yells so that they can hear him. Stop being so selfish and think about your crew.
Luffy finally knocked Usopp to the floor and held him down as he shouted out, would you listen to yourself?
Luffy, Nami cried out in shock. Don't ACT like you're the only one torn up about this. We all feel the same way, Luffy yelled right in his face. If that were true then you wouldn't be looking for a new ship, Usopp yelled as he struggled in Luffy's hole. Alright fine, Luffy yelled out, finally losing all self-control he had and bellowed out, if you don't like the way you captain this thing then why don't you go ahead and get off?
Sanji stepped in before he could finish speaking, kicking him so hard that he was sent flying and smashed into the table, breaking it into pieces. But it was too late, they all knew exactly what he was about to say. Sanji's face was full of rage and he was breathing hard as if he had run miles. This is going way too far, he said to them both furiously, what the hell is wrong with you? If you don't watch it you're gonna say something you can't take back. So calm down.
Luffy slowly pulled himself from his smashed table and put his hat back on. He was breathing hard, but he seemed to have calmed down from that big. Yeah, I'm sorry, he said, I don't know what I was thinking. You don't have to apologize, Usopp said, a feeble smile on his lips. He too seemed to have calmed down, and for a moment it seemed like things were gonna be alright, and then he said, cause that's how you really feel, isn't it?
That's not true, Luffy snapped, his anger already starting to rise again. But Usopp ignored him as he rolled over and sat up. Just get rid of any dead weight and move on before they can slow you down. He taunted them, if you're gonna throw away the Mary, the two glared at the other, might as well throw me away too.
There was silence in Mary's cabin as they looked at Usopp. Sanji was the first to snap out of his shock as he said angrily, I know you're ticked off, but don't say such stupid crap like that.
No, I'm serious, he answered back, his eyes filled with such anger that there was no doubt that he knew what he was saying. I've been thinking about this for a while now. It isn't like what it was before, you guys are just too strong for me. I can't keep up anymore. I mean, look at what happened today. You can't even trust me with your money.
There's no point in keeping me around if I'm just gonna cause you trouble, Usopp exclaimed as he got to his feet.
You don't want weak people on your crew, do you? He looked to Luffy. Luffy, he said, his voice sad but firm, I still believe that you'll be king of the pirates one day. But as for me, I'm just lucky to have made it this far. Even back when we first met and I was gonna set off alone, you probably just invited me on your ship out of pity. That's the only reason I'm here, he continued. There's no sense in traveling together if we don't even have the same goal. Luffy just glared back at him, but he didn't move from where he was. Zoro just opened his eyes and watched without saying a word as Usopp walked to the door. Hey Usopp, where are you going? Sanji demanded harshly. Wherever I go, is my business, he responded with ice in his voice. It has nothing to do with you anymore. Sorry guys, I'm leaving the crew. This is goodbye. And as if they were watching it in slow motion, he walked right out, shutting the door behind him even as Sanji, Nami, and Chopper made to run towards it. However it shut and Nami fell to her knees as they stared at it, unable to believe that it really happened.
No Usopp, why? Chopper asked cheerfully. Oh no, Nami whispered before she rounded on Luffy. Hey, don't just sit there Luffy. Who knows what he's gonna do out there? Go say something to him. Stop him before it's too late. But Luffy didn't move a muscle as Zoro still didn't say anything as he glanced at him as if curious as to see how he would handle this. We've come too far together, Nami went on hurriedly, looking like if she reminded him of this, he'd find some way to stop this from happening. We can't parade like this. Usopp's not just a crew member. He's one of our friends too, isn't he? She asked cheerfully. Gavin, stop him. Nami asked, tears welling up. Luffy, what's wrong? Please, you're the captain, aren't you?
Seeing Luffy wasn't moving, she turned to the door Usopp left out of. Fine, Nami said to him darkly. Have it your way. She then got up and ran outside with Sanji and Chopper, all of them yelling at Usopp to come back. After a few seconds, Luffy slowly got up as well and he and Zoro went out to join them, but they didn't say a word as they watched Usopp's retreating back in the distance. Sanji was agreeing with Nami and Chopper, as Chopper cried next to them. Just then, Usopp stopped walking and stood there with his back to them, as if he could sense that Luffy was there right now and he addressed him. Luffy, he called, his voice full of hardened determination. I'm sorry I can't follow after you anymore, and I'm sorry I was a pain to the bitter end. I know that you're the captain of this ship, so the Mary belongs to you. He added before he finally turned around to look at them, and they could hear Luffy almost growling like a wild animal about to attack. That's why I want you to fight me, Monkey D. Luffy, they glared at each other. I challenge you to a duel.
Whoa, wait, Nami cried, staring between the two as they glared at the other. What are you saying? At 10 o'clock tonight, Usopp yelled again, pointing a finger directly at him. I'll be back, so you better be ready for a fight. Captain, I can't stop you from destroying your own ship. But if I win, I'm taking the Mary and leaving. Either way, when we're done, the last bond between us will be broken. The crew could only watch in stunned silence as their now former friend and crewmate walked off in the city. Later in the men's room, Luffy was laying in one of the hammocks and Nami was standing next to him. Luffy looked quite unlike himself, just sitting there calmly, indifferent, reminding them all of Zoro. It was actually kind of distorting to see how serious Luffy was acting here.
What's with you? Nami demanded harshly. Would you just stop this nonsense already? Usopp just got worked up because things were moving too fast, right? That's no reason to fight with your own friend, especially when he's hurt. If you give it some time I'm sure both of you will see how silly this is.
Luffy glanced at her dully, before he looked back at the ceiling and moved his hat up to cover his eyes. We've gone too far to turn back now, he answered simply. That's not true, she disagreed. There's nothing stopping you from apologizing and talking it over one more time.
Luffy finally answered Nami. Like I said, he said coolly, no, turning back.
And why not? She demanded, now sounding frustrated.
Usopp is willing to risk his life to fight me, Luffy reminded her, he's more than just angry. Besides, if talking it over was enough to make things right, it wouldn't have come to this in the first place. Luffy then rolled onto his side. That's all I have to say, so good night.
Luffy, she asked quietly, but she didn't say anything else as she turned and left. She must have realized that she was fighting a losing battle.
Luffy laid there in silence as the minutes ticked by. Just then he could hear arguing coming from somewhere above him. He heard Sanji's voice echoing, think about it. You said the Frankie family came here this afternoon, right?
He heard Zoro's voice this time arguing with Sanji. Yeah, so, what are you trying to say?
If you hadn't let them off so easy they wouldn't have stolen the money in the first place. Sanji yelled, it's your fault those guys attacked Usopp. He's just freaking out cause he feels guilty.
Hey, don't go blaming me for not beating them hard enough. Zoro yelled back at him. You were the one when running off no shopping. What am I supposed to cook if I don't have any food? Sanji yelled back. Luffy rolled onto his other side so that his face was facing away, but the yelling soon died out from above him when Nami yelled at them to shut up, and that there had been enough fighting already.
I know, Sanji said, sounding abashed for Nami yelling at him, but this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for him.
Zoro said to someone in mild surprise, "Oh, hey, you're back. You were going after Usopp, weren't you?"
Even if he was mad, I still wanted to treat his wounds, Chopper's voice said, but he turned me away. He found a place to stay in town, so at least he can get some rest. But do you know what he said to me? Past Chopper sounded close to tears. He said we weren't friends now. So I should just leave him alone and go back to the ship.
Luffy lay there for some time, clearly waiting for the time when he was to go up and get this fight over with.
But after what felt like an hour, Luffy finally got up from his hammock and slowly made his way to the ladder onto the deck where the rest of the Straw Hats were already waiting for him. It was already dark out. Luffy didn't say a word to anyone as he went to shore and walked a decent distance away, close enough so that they could all watch what was going on, but far enough away so that they shouldn't be touched by the fight that was about to happen. The wind whipped across the land, sending an odd chill down their spines. It's 10 o'clock, he muttered to himself. Usopp will be showing up any second now. The dust picked up and swept around them. Listen up, he called to the others on the ship. I don't want any of you leaving the ship. You got that?
They all looked upset at this, but they did what they were told and stayed where they were without saying a word. Soon, through the cloud of dust, they could hear the sound of footsteps and a shadowy figure they all knew too well.
Look, Nami gasped. Please don't fight. Chopper screamed desperately, as if hoping if he spoke up he could prevent it all from happening. But they both ignored him as they faced each other. The tension in the air around them was so heavy they could feel it. Everyone felt their resolve tighten at that as the wind picked up and blew through their hair and their clothes. The two never looked away from the other.
So, you didn't lose your nerve after all. Luffy finally spoke up, his voice uncharacteristically cold to him. No matter how this battle ends, you can't regret it. This is exactly what you asked for.
That's perfect, Usopp answered, no trace of a smile or good-natured person they all knew. His face was fixed with sharp determination as he told him, don't go easy on me. I won't be the underdog this time. In fact, I've already figured out a way to defeat you.
Luffy unfolded his arms and looked ready for anything. Make no mistake, I'm not like any other opponent you faced before, Usopp said, as he pointed at him. We've been friends a long time. I know all your powers, all your strengths and all your weaknesses.
But there's something you don't know about me, Usopp proclaimed as he raised his arms and shouted out, I have 8,000 men on my side. If you don't surrender now, I'll order them to attack.
Chopper screamed in shock at that. Why didn't he tell me? Zoro looked annoyed at Chopper's reaction and said, seriously, just go inside.
Luffy however was looking angry now as he yelled out, if you're gonna fight, then at least take this seriously. But instead, Usopp was trying to use mind games to cause him pain, like how Luffy was supposed to imagine needles in his teeth. Ah, it hurts just to imagine it, Chopper cried out, holding onto his mouth at the idea.
I'm telling you just go inside, Zoro told him harshly.
Luffy seemed to have lost his temper once more and ran in, changing into a charging bull as he closed in. But as he neared him, calling out the attack, Usopp suddenly fell to his knees, blood bursting from his mouth and soaking the ground. Luffy was so startled by seeing this he stopped dead in his tracks, looking afraid as some of the others yelled in shock. Usopp lowered his hand from his mouth and snarled, special attack, ketchup star. Pity for your enemy, Usopp mocked him as he got up, sounding angrier than ever as he snarled, that's awful arrogant of you, don't you think? Luffy looked ticked off, ready to ram his horns right into the lyre, but then Usopp held up a dial and the next thing they knew was that with such a bright flash of light all of them were momentarily blinded. While the others couldn't see, Usopp was now shooting rotten eggs at Luffy now. Luffy, now covered with the gunk, was still trying to get his eyes working again as they could all pick up the stink of the eggs. Luffy got it the worst, however, as his nose was as sharp as any animal's, and the pain from having two of his senses cut off caused him to go into a blind rage, charging and bashing his thickened skull into multiple objects but unable to come into contact with his former crewmate. Usopp
then threw a breath dial and now the entire field was being filled up with gas. He wasn't letting up either. Again, he cried, hitting him with even more eggs. Luffy was now coughing and yelling at the smell, going back into his human form to help dampen the stink.
Luffy was coughing worse than ever. They stink. They're rotten. He opened his bloodshot eyes and glared at Usopp, who had already pulled out another projectile from his bag. Would you stop messing around already? You think this is a joke, huh? Usopp demanded angrily, because I'm dead serious.
Oh yeah, Luffy retorted, as he was now dripping with rotten yolk.
That's right, this is the way I fight, he shouted back, his eyes looking angrier than ever. Usopp put the next projectile into his slingshot and warned Luffy to keep his mouth shut or else his mouth was gonna get burnt. He fired it directly to Luffy's mouth and when Luffy bit down on it, it turned out that it was one of Usopp's tobacco stars and Luffy's face turned red, fire spewing from his mouth and he yelled in pain.
With Luffy in pain from the tobacco, Usopp used this as a chance to fling out spikes and have Luffy surrounded. He wouldn't be able to move without stepping on one of them.
I wouldn't jump around too if I were you, Usopp yelled, cause the whole battlefield is kill drop hell. Luffy was able to make out what Usopp said and, sprouting dragonfly wings, started hovering out of the surrounding caltrops. However, before he was out of range he was pelted by a barrage of lead stars. Due to Usopp's accuracy, he was actually able to hit the animal man unlike other less skilled shooters, causing Luffy to cry out in pain as he landed right in the needle-covered ground.
Listen, Luffy, you can pay me if you want, Usopp yelled threateningly, but I'm going to beat you and take Chimera with me, and I don't care what it takes. By the time that Luffy was able to get to his feet and get out of the field of spikes, Usopp had shot one of his pepper stars at him, once again blinding him and now he was coughing and sneezing. He fell back once more and was now thrashing on the ground and trying to get his lungs to breathe through the pepper.
Like I said, I know you, called Usopp to him. So, I know what attacks are going to work the best.
At last, Luffy recovered enough to get up, moaning and groaning about how much it hurt, how he couldn't breathe and his mouth was now burning. Usopp declared that he wasn't going to give him an inch, and here he used a new technique. He pulled out a string of shurikens and launched them.
Luffy was forced to dodge and jump, trying to avoid the shurikens and the spikes on the ground, going from hopping on cricket legs to shrinking down to a mouse to avoid the deadly projectiles. But Luffy was almost flying without wings to get away, finally reaching a patch of ground that was free of spikes, panting hard.
It was then he could see the dial lying on the ground and there was a slight haze surrounding the battlefield. Luffy must have finally noticed it as well. Smoke? He asked in confusion.
Usopp glared at him. I'm using a breath dial, he hissed at him, and the captain of the Straw Hats was startled to hear how distorted and deep it sounded, like it wasn't even him who was talking. You didn't notice the smell because of the rotten eggs. He held up his slingshot as he said, and now, you're completely surrounded by gas.
Luffy's eyes widened. Sorry, Usopp said to him as he loaded another weapon in the slingshot.
The two stared at each other in the eyes for only a moment before he fired it. It was one of his flame stars this time, and soon, the entire battlefield went up in flames. It was a massive fireball. The explosion was so great that the observers had to cover their faces like they did with the flash dial. They could hear the roar of the boom in their ears, the fire making the ground feel like it was shaking.
Nami was screaming the boys' names out anxiously, thinking that they were both hurt. This battle was getting out of hand. The fire engulfing the entire surrounding area soon turned to smoke and drifted up the sky. They all stood there and watched with a feeling of horror going through them at what they were seeing. The fire died down and there was smoke all around them, but they could see Luffy once more. He appeared a bit scuffed up from the blast but was largely unharmed thanks to the fact he was now a hybrid of human and salamander. He transformed back and lay there flat on his back and stared up at the sky. His expression was empty, full of self-hate and anger, and it was clear that Luffy had come to the decision that this had gone on long enough, and now he had to fulfill his last duty as Usopp's captain. He had to take him out. The straw hats on the Mary were soaked from waves created from the explosion, and maybe it was the salty water from the crashing tides, but Mary's sheep had bow, it left Elizabeth had tears falling from her eyes. I'm no fool, Usopp said. I know they will take a lot more than that to beat you. At those words, Luffy got up just as the smoke around them was beginning to clear and walked out towards Usopp once more, his face down and his eyes slit. He was now fighting seriously for this, but in his face, it was clear how much pain he was in, how much he felt sick with himself for what he had to do. The strength that he always seemed to become fragile all of a sudden, the happy gentleness that was usually in his face was hiding behind a cold mask. I know you, Luffy, Usopp told him. You fight every battle with all your strength. But I'm ready for any technique you got, and he proved that when Luffy charged with Rhino Charge, but Usopp must have seen them coming. He shot a blasting cactus star, and as soon as his horn collided with the ball, it seemed to burst apart into hundreds of needles and began to embed themselves into his thick skin. Luffy screamed in pain and had to avert his face to keep the needles striking out like slivers. Usopp was now shooting exploding stars to keep Luffy on his toes. However, Luffy had anticipated this and shrank down to a chinchilla before scampering over the darkened street, his black fur and small body providing a perfect camouflage. When he was close enough to the seemingly unwary Usopp, Luffy shot back up into human form and, transforming his arm into that of Gorilla, pulled back to strike. Now, Gorilla, break, Luffy yelled and finally he hit Usopp, throwing him straight backwards, but no one was celebrating, each of them feeling sick to their stomach as Luffy charged in, ready to finish it. It's time to put an end to this, he cried out, going to his Chimera form with both his powerful reptilian arms pulled back, Chimera, Blitz. But as Luffy threw his arm forward, Usopp held something up and the attack stopped dead. It was then Luffy recognized the dial that he had this time, but because of the force from that last attack, Luffy couldn't pull himself back and was instead flung towards Usopp. Recognize this, Usopp taunted as Luffy was flung towards him. I bet the blitz will have hurt. Let's find out. Impact, Usopp screamed as he held up the dial and fired once he hit Luffy's face. There was a boom that sent them both flying backwards, with blood splashing from Luffy's mouth and nicotine veins in Usopp's arm, here the very muscles bursting. Usopp fell to his knees, his face contorted in pain as he screamed out so loud that it sounded like he was going to tear his own throat out. I won't lose. Why? Whoa, you.
Just then, Luffy, who was shot backwards through the air, was able to land on the ground lightly and stood to his full intimidating height. Usopp glared at him, gasping for breath, and silently daring Luffy to do his worst. They all knew that it was over, even as Usopp forced his hurt legs to get back up, to face him standing on his own. Luffy didn't say a word to him as they looked at each other long and hard. Luffy glared at Usopp for only a moment longer before he gave a powerful flap of his wings and shot at the sniper with a forceful bullet. Usopp couldn't do anything here, he just stood there and waited for what was going to come. Chimera, wing tackle, Luffy shouted as he nailed Usopp right in the abdomen with muscular shoulder. Blood falling from the former straw hat mouth as he was knocked to the ground several feet away, and he lay there, unable to get back up this time. Usopp, Chopper screamed from the ship behind them, but no one bothered to turn around and look at him. Their attention focused solely on what was happening in front of them. Everything around them seemed cold and empty as they watched Luffy breathing hard, but not in a tired way, more like he was trying hard not to be sick. Luffy, shrinking down to human form, suddenly fell to his knees. He was holding onto his fist, but no matter how much he wanted to, it was as if he couldn't bring himself to let go of that hand that he grabbed so tightly. You idiot, he said, finally finding his voice and yelling harshly. You knew you couldn't beat me. You knew you could never beat me. Even though Usopp didn't say anything to that, even he knew that he was right. Luffy knelt there for some time, before he seemed to realize that there was no longer any point to staying there, and he slowly got back up and turned around to face the others. He walked back to where his hat had fallen and slowly put it back on his head, hiding his eyes from them all. And we'll have a look back at Usopp, he said, as if choking back tears. Do whatever you want with Mary. They looked and saw that Usopp raised his head ever slightly over the words. I won't let anything hold us back. We're getting a new ship and sailing forward. Luffy went on as he walked on, not even once looking back as he said quietly, so long, Usopp. It was fun while it lasted. Chopper, leave him alone, Sanji yelled when they looked up in time to see that Chopper was ready to jump down to help his winged former crewmate. What are you saying? He demanded, trying to throw Sanji's arm off him. He was already hurt before fight. If I don't help him, who knows what'll happen? Sanji was holding him back, saying, he isn't part of our crew anymore. So what? Chopper screamed out desperately, trying to fight his way to Usopp. I'm doctor, it's my job to treat him. He then transformed, attempting to take Sanji out. The cook was forced to tackle him to the floor and hold him down as he told him that it was bad enough that Usopp lost the duel, but if it beat him right now, then he'll end up hurting him more than any of those wounds. The best thing that they could do now was to give him dignity in defeat and to just let him be. Nami looked at him with tearful eyes, and seemed to be choking back sobs as Zoro turned away from them all when Luffy came back to them, his shoulders shaking and unable to show his eyes to them all. Luffy then whispered out, it's too much. The others were looking at Luffy in confusion, wondering who he was talking to when Zoro answered him, obviously having heard his words. This is what it means to be captain, he reminded him in a soft voice, while looking at him. You can't doubt yourself. In times like these, if you lose your confidence, then who can you have faith in? Chopper, however, ran up the deck and towards Usopp, but he didn't touch him, rather, he left a bunch of medical supplies next to him before he went running back to the others, crying and looking miserable. Zoro sighed as he said, let's pack our things and go. You know as well as me that after tonight, we can never return to the ship again. And the last thing they saw before they left was seeing tears. The silent tears that were falling from Luffy's eyes, though he couldn't see them through his hat. But one thing they didn't know was that he was crying almost as much as the pool of tears around Usopp's face. It was early in the morning the next day. The sun had just risen up in the sky and there was a cool wind blowing around them. They all knew the feeling. It was as if weather was reflecting their gloomy emotions. They watched dully as they glanced around the roof. Zoro and Chopper were both there, and after a little bit of looking, they spotted Luffy on the roof of another building, just a little bit away from them. He had his back to them, but they didn't need to see his face to know what expression he had on. Luffy was like an open book. You could read his mood on his expression. He still had some slight burns on his skin and a few bandages, but otherwise seemed to have recovered completely from his fight with Usopp already. Suddenly, the door behind them opened up and Sanji came up. He was looking tired and worn out as he glanced around at them all.
So this is where you've been, he said as he looked around. He sighed before he walked forward and shut the door behind him and added, we went through all the trouble of renting a room and no one's using it. I guess no one's asleep, huh? He stopped in front of Chopper and asked where Luffy was, before he pointed a hoof up at the building. He walked over to lean against the railing and pulled out another cigarette. I kept looked out on the rocky cape all night, he answered. I wanted to be there in case Robin came back. He paused for a moment as he breathed in deeply and let out some smoke, finishing up. She never said anything about leaving. I wonder where she went. Chopper was looking down at the ground before he mumbled. Ever since we got to this island, it's been one bad thing after another. Our money was stolen, and then there's everything that happened to poor Usopp. He's injured, Chopper went on anxiously. He could barely even stand up, and by now, on top of everything else, he's probably got fever. He looked like he was about to go on, but Zoro, who was leaning against the wall, interrupted him. Chopper, he said in a firm voice, yet at the same time it was soft and sounded a tinge of sadness. That's enough, he said, looking up at Luffy, okay? Don't talk about him anymore. Sanji merely gazed out of the city before he muttered something about going to try and look for Robin around town. Do you think we're gonna find her? Chopper asked him worriedly. Who knows? He asked. It's not like I have any place specific in mind to check out. I just feel certain she's still here, somewhere. Sanji glanced down at Chopper and told him, if anything should happen we should use this inn as our meetup point. I want to help. I'm gonna come too. Chopper insisted. He hated feeling so hopeless, not able to do anything to stop Usopp from leaving. He didn't want to be like that with Robin. He was worried about her and needed something to take his mind off Usopp and Mary anyway. Alright then, come on, Sanji said calmly as he pushed himself off, but just as he had turned to the door, it had burst open and Nami came running out, calling Luffy's name. Nami, what's wrong? Sanji asked, looking up at her as she gasped for air, beads of sweat on her forehead. It's awful, Nami called out, the whole city's talking about it. When Luffy didn't turn to look at her, she then yelled out to him, Luffy, listen to me, last night, something terrible happened to Iceberg. Luffy finally looked back at her and there was a flash of worry in his eyes at her words. Ice popped from the shipyard? He asked her. Yes, Nami called nervously, I heard he's still unconscious. Luffy looked away again. I thought everybody in this entire city loved that guy. Why him? He asked, and he could hear the frown in his tone as Sanji asked Nami who they were talking about. He's a nice man who helped us out so much yesterday, she answered quickly, the president of a shipbuilding company as well as the mayor of Water 7. Sounds like an important guy, he muttered back. Yeah, Nami agreed, it's pretty much the worst thing that could have happened to this town. Luffy got up and offered to go check in on him, and as he jumped down from the building, they could hear Nami calling after him to wait and that she'll go with him. Soon the two were sailing up the canal, Nami and Luffy and Yugara, and when they arrived at Dock 1, they could see an enormous crowd right outside the giant doors, all of them trying to get in and ask what was going on. They could hear some of them calling out and get some answers. Can't you tell us anything? Hey, Iceberg, what happened here?
What's going on? Can't go that way, Luffy muttered while frowning in worry as he was looking up and trying to see past all the heads. Man, we're never gonna find out what's going on unless we find some way to get to Ice Pops.
Nami nodded as she pulled their Yugara up to the nearest person and asked if we could tell them where the main office was. Yeah, it's at Dock 1, the man said in trepidation, but I don't think you'll have any luck getting in. With everything that's going on here, they're only allowing authorized personnel to get through. You're not alone. Everyone wants in. We're all so worried about him.
Nami looked disappointed, but didn't seem surprised as she thanked the man and pulled their Yugara away. But before they could get far, they heard a loud beat sounding off with a great rhythm to add to it. As soon as the gathered people heard the music, they were all freaking out and staring around wildly for the source of it all. Just then, at that moment, they heard a voice calling down from above.
Hey guys, question, did you just say my name? No, we didn't, just go away, someone yelled in the crowd.
Where is he? Where's it coming from? Up above them, they could see a large curtain being held up, and the forms of 3 people behind it.
Come on everybody, no need to be shy, yelled the voice, say my name.
Naturally, no one in town wanted to, instead they were screaming up insults and threats up at the man's voice. They could hear him sigh as he said, what a bunch of noisy flies. He then threw the curtain away as he began to dance and sing.
I'm Water 7's super guy, I'm the face of the underworld and you know why.
I'm the man with the plan, power, and fame, and people everywhere call out my name.
And by striking a pose where his 2 forearms connected and he bent his body to the side he called out, wow, Frankie. And standing there was none other than Frankie, a powerfully built, literally, man with huge forearms and his biceps looked puny. His bright blue hair was sticking out like a large pompadour, and the blue star tattoos on his arms were shining proudly. He was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and speedos with a golden chain around his neck. As for the townspeople, they freaked out and began to leave the area in droves.
So that the only people that were left were Luffy and Nami, looking up in bafflement to what was going on. Frankie wasn't alone either. There were 2 women with him. They both had long, pointed noses, one had straight-edged hair, a white fur collar, and dressed with yellow goggles, bikini top, slacks and high heels. While the other one had curly-edged hair, a lilac pearl necklace, pink crop top, bikini bottom, gloves, and high heels. These 2 were Kiwi and Mozu of the Frankie family. Frankie moved his sunglasses up so that they could see his eyes, which were red and filled with anger. Come out and show yourself, Straw Hat. Frankie yelled out in a challenge. If looks could kill, come on Straw Hat, you can't hide from me. Stop being such a pansy. Come out and fight me. Luffy said, sounding completely lost. I don't know how that weirdo figured out my name. I've never seen him before in my life.
Didn't you hear what those people called him? Nami asked, a hint of anger in her tone. I think that guy might be Frankie.
At those words, Luffy's confusion was quickly replaced with anger. He glared up at Frankie, and they were all aware of a battle here. His hands were curled up into fists, as if longing to throw a punch, and his eyes were just as red and angry as Frankie's were.
Then we found him, Luffy hissed, his voice sounding almost like a growl as he glared up at Frankie. Luffy, Nami whispered in worry, but he ignored her.
Hey, bikini guy, Luffy roared up at him, even as Nami tried to quiet him down.
Frankie glared down at Luffy when he heard that. Huh? He called down. That me, Luffy yelled up at him, I'm Straw Hat.
So you're Luffy, huh? Frankie screamed, didn't expect you to look so shrimpy. Luffy didn't say anything as he readied himself for a fight.
I got a bone to pick with you, kid, Frankie said as he cracked his neck. It seems you and your gang had a little party at my place while I was gone. At those words, Frankie started to dance with the 2 square-haired sisters on either side. When I came home now, what did I see? My house was in shreds and my gang was on its knees.
And it's all thanks to Luffy. I'll make this as plain as can be. When you mess with my boys, you mess with Frankie, he declared as he finished his song and crossed his arms in front of him. I hate to be you right now, he threatened, cause I'm on one hell of a roll this week and ain't nobody gonna stop me. Now you can cry if you like, but either way, I'm gonna pound you so hard even your own mother won't recognize you when I'm done.
Shut up, Nami suddenly yelled up, sounding like she wanted to give him a beating of her own. You jerk, give USR 200 million berry as back already, y'all hear me? Frankie put a hand up to his ear as if he can hear her. Huh? You want her money back, you say? Well, that's a shame, cause I already spent it all. Nami, with the image of the Grim Reaper behind her, looked ready to fight him as well. Frankie smirked. You pirates are all a bunch of sore losers. Don't act so high and mighty when you probably just stole the money from someone else.
Money doesn't matter, Luffy shouted. Maybe not to you, but it is to me. Nami snapped at him. But again, Luffy ignored her as he exclaimed, all I care about is getting revenge. So money or no money, I'm gonna make you pay. You're stealing my line, you punk. Frankie shouted down, are you trying to make me mad? Whatever, just come down here and fight. Luffy yelled, back up at him, and the few people that were in the area went even farther away, crying out that Frankie was going to start destroying the town. Frankie suddenly started to breathe in deeply, looking like he was starting to inflate himself. Is he holding his breath or something? That's weird, Nami asked in confusion, but before Luffy could think of a way to answer, a giant fireball burst from Frankie's mouth and went striking down towards them. Freaking out, the bull they were riding was forced to back away and almost jetted across the water to avoid it. He just spit fire. Luffy yelled out, yeah, I can see that much. But how? Nami screamed at him as Frankie smirked at their fear.
Oh, he teased. Are you scared? Having second thoughts? Nami warned Luffy to be careful, that he must have devil fruit powers to be able to do that. Okay, but that doesn't really help, Luffy asked her quickly. But Frankie only laughed again. So far off the mark, he said, and then he jumped right off the building and straight for the water, landing with a giant splashing and shocking the other 2 in the boat. If that guy did eat a devil fruit, he wouldn't jump into the water for no reason. Luffy reasoned at once, would he? Maybe nobody told him if you try to swim you die. That would be pretty pathetic, Nami said, sounding cautiously hopeful, but it would save us the trouble of fighting that weirdo.
But meanwhile, the Yagara stuck its head under the water to see for itself. Soon though it tore its head from the water and was making strange sounds in its throat. Frankie suddenly jumped out of the water with such force that their boat was broken clean apart. The Yagara streaked away as fast as it could as Luffy and Nami were sent flying.
I guess he can swim, Luffy yelled, lucky he didn't drown. Nami, however, could seem to care less as she screamed when they began falling back to the water. I didn't eat no devil fruit, Frankie yelled as he floated in water next to the destroyed boat. You think I'm crazy?
Luffy spun around in the air and, sprouting wings, tried to attack as Frankie pulled himself up to part of the destroyed wreckage. But Frankie seemed prepared as he shocked them all. He used what he called his strong right technique, launching his right fist forward with the chain, much like a wrecking ball. Luffy didn't even have time to react as he was hit with Frankie's fist and was sent flying back into the giant steel doorway of Dock 1, leaving a deep impression there. Nami was gasping in shock as she tried to pull herself out of the water, and when Frankie pulled his arm back, Luffy fell limply from the door and hit the ground like a doll. Luffy, Nami gasped out desperately, hey, are you okay? She then glared at Frankie as he got out of the water and started walking towards them. She then demanded to know that if he didn't have devil fruit powers, then what was he? He looked too happy to explain it. Oh, you poor saps don't know anything, do ya? He asked in a teasing way, as if he knew a big secret that no one else did. Alright then, I'll tell ya. He then pulled his right arm off so that no one could hope to miss to see the chain and how his arm was attached. I'm just a normal guy with some extra parts. A cyborg you might say. Normally, Luffy probably be all bright-eyed and excited over the thought of meeting a cyborg, but now he was looking ticked off as he pushed himself back up. With a roar, Luffy turned into a full lion and leapt at the perverted cyborg, who responded in kind by punching him with a literal fist of steel, sending Luffy reeling.
However, Luffy was quick to recover and, with some quick changes, turned into a boa constrictor and wrapped his body around Frankie like lasso.
Frankie's face turned red from the pressure, but his metallic body prevented his organs from being damaged. He then blew another, smaller fireball into Luffy's face, making him let go, and the two quickly went on to exchanging blows, Luffy going from animal to tear Frankie apart while the underworld boss showed that he was a lot tougher than the common thug and literally armed to the teeth. Then there was their cheer section.
Luffy, Nami yelled out, tear him to pieces and then make him put some pants on. Hey bro, Mozu cheered on, striking a pose with her sister. You gotta put on a good show, Kiwi added. The two were now out of breath as they continued to glare at the other. You're a lot tougher than I thought you'd be, Luffy said, but I'm still gonna beat you, bikini guy.
Frankie laughed at that. If you say so, but it's gonna take a long time with those weenie attacks of yours. The fight looked ready to go into round 2, with Frankie using his weapons left now, just as Luffy got ready to change into another beast. However, before the fighting could really get underway, the shipwrights of Water 7 appeared, knocking Luffy to the ground. Polly, Lucci, Kaku, Lulu, and another shipwright that they didn't recognize. A large man with thick muscles with a tattoo going from his chest to his shoulder and arm, as well as having brown hair tied in a ponytail on the back and a light-colored beard whose name was Tilestone.
Who just punched me? Luffy demanded after he got up from the ground and was glaring around to see the shipwrights there. However, unlike yesterday, they didn't seem to be looking friendly. In fact, they all looked downright murderous. This is too easy. If you knew what was good for you, you would have skipped town a long time ago, Polly said, giving Luffy an unusually cold look. You're in for it now.
The shipwrights were all looking ready to fight themselves, the crowd behind them cheering them on for breaking up the fight. But that didn't last too long.
Galila, Frankie demanded, looking annoyed, his sunglasses flashing in the fading light. Great, that's just what I need. Wow, lucky break, Nami sighed. Finally, somebody can put a stop to this nonsense. I bet they hate Frankie too. I'd bet out of this if I were you. Frankie warned them all. Once these fists start rocking and rolling, they don't discriminate against pirates and shipwrights.
And that goes for other people's property too, Kaku answered, no longer sounding like the polite man they met the day before. He was all business. Surely you don't expect us to stand here gobsmacked while you wreck our entire shipyard. I'm
warning you here, Frankie. Tilestone yelled out loudly. If you don't pay for these repairs and berries, you'll pay in blood.
All right, Tilestone, Polly said, giving him a hard look, silently telling him to calm down before he told him that they would take care of Frankie another time since they had more important things to deal with right now. Polly then turned back to Luffy, looking menacing as he said, yeah, I'm looking at you, Straw Hat. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't know if you're brave or stupid, but either way, you're dead. Wait, what? Luffy asked, clearly not understanding what they were talking about. We just came here cause we heard the news about Ice Pops. At the mention of Iceberg, Polly began to growl at him and Luffy stopped talking, now looking even more lost than usual. Wasn't enough for you to wreck my house and beat up my boys, huh? Frankie asked, what's wrong? Don't feel like a man unless you're pounding the crap out of shipwrights too. I know that puberty can make you do some really crazy stuff, but wow.
I don't even know what's going on, so quit making fun of me, Luffy yelled at him as he was starting to pull himself up.
Play innocent all y'all like, Polly yelled out furiously, and it was clear that he wasn't playing around anymore as he pulled out rope from his sleeves. I won't go easy on ya. Rope action, half knot.
Before Luffy could register what was going on, Polly wrapped the rope around his neck and made it look like that his head was inflating. Starting to turn blue and was choking out, gasping desperately, clawing at the rope. Can't breathe.
Air dive, Polly yelled as lifted Luffy up high, the same move he used on Lucci in their tiny scuffle the day before he slammed him right onto some of the destroyed pieces of wood. Luffy himself was so stunned by the suddenness and source of the attack he couldn't escape in time.
Just go away, Frankie screamed out at them all. I told you shipwrights to stay out of this, didn't I? I'm the one WHO owes this guy a beating, not why you.
Nami was looking stunned, crying out in panic at seeing Luffy forced to fight everyone off. Luffy picked himself off the ground and stared the shipwrights in confusion. What are you doing? I don't have any reason to fight you guys. Just hold on, Luffy yelled out, but there was no reasoning with these guys. Lulu took a shot at Luffy with a double-barrel gun, which Luffy was able to dodge without too much trouble. But that didn't stop Lulu from attacking, and kicked him hard in the face and sent him flying back. Frankie was looking seriously ticked off. Hey stupid, he yelled at them all, how many times do I have to tell you bozos? For the last time, he then began to fire at the shipwrights as well. Straw Hat is mine, morons. As Frankie fired at Polly, he jumped out of the way and Kaku jumped up, soaring overhead.
Sorry Frankie, he shouted down at him, but we don't have time for shenanigans today.
Get the hell out of my way, you flying monkey, he yelled back, ready to start firing up at him. You're the one who's in the way, Frankie. Tilestone suddenly yelled and hit him with a large log like a baseball bat and sent him flying this time, and Kaku, still in the air, grabbed him by his shirt before he threw him back into the ground.
At this point, Luffy was trying to get up, but as soon as he did, Lucci used the chance to jump in and began to fight him hand to hand. Already tired, Luffy was struggling to keep up with him, but then Lucci finally hit him so hard that we went crashing once again.
Gasping for air, Luffy pushed himself up and glared at Lucci. Crap, you guys are strong, he said, but I still don't know why we're fighting.
Polly stepped forward so that he was standing right next to Lucci, only a few feet away from Luffy before he said deadly serious, Straw Hat, I think we're the ones who deserve an explanation, not you.
Luffy gave him an annoyed, but confused look, clearly wondering just what he was talking about before Polly explained, his eyes full of the same anger that both Luffy and Frankie had before their fight. Someone broke into Iceberg's house last night. They shot him twice in the front and 3 times in the back before they left.
Then Polly pointed an accusing finger at them before he yelled out, "They were from her crew." Luffy's eyes were wide with shock as he stared at him, unable to believe it.
Iceberg was shot, Frankie repeated, sounding surprised. That's news to me.
That can't be, Nami gasped, her eyes wide in shock, looking completely stunned.
Luffy stared at him before he yelled out, "No way, we didn't shoot Ice Pops. That's just crazy."
But Polly didn't look swayed as he looked deeply angered now. "Listen kid, you might as well fess up."
"I'm telling you we didn't do it," Luffy insisted. Iceberg said it himself. Polly snapped. "There were two people who broke into his room and attacked him." He held up two fingers as he went on. "He may have been hurt, but that doesn't mean that he didn't get a good look at them first. One of them was a big guy with a mask on, the other was a tall woman with black hair. Iceberg said that he recognized her and the government confirmed she one of your crew." Polly went on furiously. "The archaeologist, Nico Robin." "You're lying," Luffy insisted. "I won't ask you why." Polly went on darkly. "Maybe you came to Water 7 to kill Iceberg. Or maybe you did want your ship repaired and attacked him on a whim after we turned you down. I don't know how you pirates think, and I don't care," Polly said. "Point is you tried to kill my boss, so I'm gonna have to take you down."
The crowd was now thirsty for a fight. They were cheering the shipwrights on, ready for them to win over the evil pirates and save Iceberg. Frankie was asking about Iceberg, and though most of them couldn't tell, he sounded worried.
"Don't look so surprised. That guy's tough as nails." Polly scoffed, but he wasn't the least bit interested in Frankie anymore. "But if they tried it once, then these scumbags might go after Iceberg a second time too. So we're gonna settle this now." But then Kaku had thrown one of the tools he had at Luffy's face. Luffy moved in time to miss the weapon, but it still ended up cutting his cheek and was now deeply embedded in the wood behind him. "Dead or alive, the government doesn't care either way," Kaku said softly. "That's what it means to have a bounty on your head, therefore you can't complain. No matter how terrible your fate may be, you've broken the law, and now the law has turned its back on you." "That's right," said Luffy's voice and he was speaking again. "We chose to live this way," and as he wiped up some of the blood off his cheek with his thumb, he added, "We're all outlaws but I don't care." He glared at them all as he screamed out, "You're wrong. If you knew anything about Robin you wouldn't say that, so take that back."
Luffy, Nami whispered as Luffy pleaded with them to let him talk to Iceberg about this, sure that there had to be some kind of mistake.
"We'd be fools to let you anywhere near him," Lulu retorted coldly. "You criminals have no right to make demands."
The crowd cheered behind them, even grabbing hold of Nami, all of them practically yelling out for blood, no matter how much she yelled that they didn't do anything.
"This doesn't make any sense," Luffy yelled desperately. "There's no reason that Robin would attack him."
Yeah, Nami in agreement, clinging desperately to that little bit of truth. Not only that, but we never even heard of the guy before we met him yesterday.
"You brats just keep saying that all you want," Polly said. "It's over. Fact is, you've picked on the wrong guy. The moral of this story is, you make an enemy out of Iceberg, then you make an enemy out of the entire Galila company. And that's not the half of it. You also man enemy out of everyone in this entire city. You understand?" "Listen," Luffy yelled, "I don't want to fight any of you. We can still talk about all this, okay?" But it was too late. Polly flipped out as he yelled, "I don't give a crap what you want. Word like this is gonna spread like wildfire. There's no place to run and no place to hide." He punched his fists together. "It's the end of the road. You pirates are going down." Luffy, no longer affording to hold back, was forced to fight them although he tried not to hurt the shipwrights too badly, though that itself wasn't the problem as it became apparent why pirates don't plunder the city more. The shipwrights were as strong as most pirates. Things were looking grim until Frankie lost his temper and hit them all with a little coup de vent attack, and in the confusion two Straw Hats were able to escape. Luffy, determined to prove their innocence, told Nami to hide while he took to the skies, searching for the entrance to Iceberg's home.
However, this method soon caught the townspeople's attention and soon Luffy was running around a large building with people attacking and shooting at him from all sides.
Luffy wanted to see Iceberg no matter what, and was right outside Galilaw's headquarters before he just went smashing right through the window and began looking around for him. Luffy dodged several dozen more shipwrights and began running down a seemingly empty hallway before he heard someone call out his name. Stopping dead, he looked up in time to see that it was Khalifa up there.
"It's you," he gasped, and he seemed to recognize her. She pushed her glasses up and said, "This way. Apparently Mr. Iceberg wants to see you." They suddenly heard the yelling behind them, and it was growing louder. It was only going to be a matter of time before they were caught.
"Right," Luffy said, "thanks." He gave a cheetah speed and hand sleep and quickly followed her to the end of a long hallway to a pair of double doors. She led him inside before she turned in time to see the mob coming down towards them. The Straw Hat Captain walked through the doors as they heard her telling the shipwrights that no one had come this way and that they were to get out of here since Iceberg needed his rest.
Iceberg himself was covered with thick bandages and looked tired. Nonetheless, he was sitting up in bed as he petted his pet mouse. He didn't seem too concerned that an infamous pirate was standing right in front of them, the captain of one of the people who did attack him. He didn't even bother opening his eyes as he said casually, "Well, hello there, pirate boy. Were you looking for me?" "Sure was," Luffy said once he caught his breath. "Thanks for saving me from those guys." Considering the angry mob, Iceberg went on calmly, "I'm assuming you didn't go bursting in here to murder me."
"All I want is to hear your side of the story," Luffy exclaimed. Iceberg didn't seem worried at all as he finally looked at him and answered, "Last night, I saw Nico Robin here without a doubt." Luffy's eyes widened, looking like he wasn't able to believe him. "And mind you," Iceberg went on, looking at him fully in the face, "I have nothing against any of you. I have no reason to lie."
"Are you sure it wasn't someone who looked like her?" Luffy asked, starting to come forward, but Iceberg suddenly pulled a gun out from under his covers. "Shut up and listen, boy," he hissed, sounding as cold as his name. "I didn't call you in here to bicker about who did what." Luffy stopped in his tracks. "I have a favor to ask, and it's in your best interest to grant it," Iceberg said. "No matter what it takes, I have to see Nico Robin again."
"I'll say it once again," Iceberg repeated, as he cocked his gun, "let me see Nico Robin."
"Sorry," Luffy said after a moment of silence, "that's not possible. We have no idea where she is."
Iceberg didn't seem to like the answer. He fired, however, Luffy didn't even have to dodge it as Iceberg missed him completely and the bullet hit the floor. They glared at each other for only a second longer before Luffy went to the window, jumping from the wall to the rooftops to where Nami was waiting for him. Luffy landed on the roof next to Nami, who turned to him at once, asking what he knew. "Yeah," Luffy answered her as he stood up, his eyes hidden by his hat. He said that it was Robin, no doubt about it.
She looked horrified at what she was hearing. "No way," she gasped. Why would she do something like that?"
But Luffy just looked up, his expression still serious and a touch of anger. "I refuse to believe it," he proclaimed. In order to find the rest of the crew, Luffy became a monkey man and grabbed the navigator before taking to the rooftops. Luffy swinging over, holding on to Nami, who seemed to be out of her mind with fear. They swung over and landed rather clumsily on the roof. "Phew, good, safe and sound," he said, looking a little bit more cheerful than he had been all day as he glanced around. At his words, Nami slowly stood up, her face hidden by her hair. Luffy was just going on about how worn out that was before she hit him so hard over the head that she knocked him to the floor. "Safe and sound my butt," her screamed at him, "I thought I was gonna die." Luffy looked back up at her angrily, nursing the sore spot on his head and a large lump. "What was I supposed to do?" he demanded. "You were the one WHO said that we couldn't use the elevator because we'd get caught. I didn't have a choice."
Nami grabbed Luffy by the front of his vest, and he became limp. It was a lonely defense to try and protect himself from her wrath. I didn't mean, hey, let's jump down, idiot, she screamed as she shook him. You can't jump around like that, square nose ship, right, got it? Right, he croaked out feebly, his eyes spinning, sorry about that. The navigator let go of him and sighed that it was fine since they were safe now. Then stop hitting me, he snapped at her. However, she said worriedly, a breeze came over and blew her hair and her skirt around. We might not be safe for long. We won't, Luffy asked in confusion. Why not? What's wrong? This island's topography and climate, she answered, and she told him that the weather was becoming unstable and that there would most likely be a typhoon here tonight, and if the city of water's biggest weakness was water, then there was bound to be some flooding.
Okay, so it floods, Luffy said looking down, so what? Well, it worries me that's all, she said, the wind's still blowing, we'll check into it later. She turned back to him and told him that they should head back to the inn for now. Plans quickly changed as Luffy and Nami were soon running again with Zoro right behind them and an angry mob behind him. The mob behind them were all screaming furiously, brandishing long saws and looking like they meant business. Hold it right there, don't let them get away.
This is all your fault, Zoro, Nami screamed back at him. The whole town is out looking for you, Zoro retorted angrily. It was going to happen sooner or later, wasn't it? You can't run forever, someone shouted behind them and they knew they couldn't keep running forever. Suddenly, Luffy spied a side street and yelled out, this way.
Right, Nami called and the two turned down the path. Naturally, Zoro went running right past them despite Luffy's orders, and Luffy had to quickly grab him so that they wouldn't lose him, practically strangling him along the way. As the three pirates ran, with Nami scolding Zoro for running off in the wrong direction, they quickly came to a bridge and she told them all about her plan. It was only gonna be a matter of time before they were caught and they needed time to stop and talk about what it was they were gonna do. But in order to do that, they needed to lose the mob.
That was when Nami gave them her idea, and so, once they reached the bridge, Luffy in monkey form flung out underneath it, gripping the side with his hands as his hand-like feet grabbed onto both Zoro and Nami underneath him. The mob soon caught up with the bridge, but were baffled as to where they went.
They could hear the mob above them, asking each other what they should do before they all decided that they must be hiding in one of the buildings or even on the roofs. They could hear them breaking off into groups to go and look.
Is it okay now? Luffy croaked out, looking like he was in pain from holding on.
Hold on a sec, Zoro whispered back seriously as they all waited, wanting to make sure that everyone was gone before they felt it was safe to come out. They listened as they heard the footsteps and all their voices die down. Just a little longer, Nami encouraged him softly. Soon, the voices and the sounds of the mob disappeared and all they could hear was the sound of the river below them. They sighed in relief, glad to see that was over with. But just then, as Luffy was now sweating with the effort of holding on, Chopper's face leaned over the edge and spotted them. Luffy was so shocked at seeing him there and accidentally let go so that they all fell into the river. After fishing the trio out, they found themselves on a rooftop with all four of them gathered around each other. Each one of them was looking around worriedly, as if thinking that they were going to be spotted at any moment. Zoro then spoke up, looks like the crowd cleared out. Nami glared at him fiercely. Yeah, she snapped. No thanks to you. I'll have you know that Luffy and I had a perfectly good hiding place until you lead that angry mob straight to us.
Wouldn't have mattered, Zoro shot back. The whole town is after us. We can't head out here forever. Luffy suddenly looked at Chopper and asked him how he knew they were all down there, which Chopper answered him that he tracked them using their smell. Oh, should have known, Luffy said in understanding to Chopper before he seemed to notice something. But wait, wasn't Sanji with you?
Chopper was looking upset as he looked down. Well, he answered quietly before he told them that he and Sanji went looking for Robin. It was right after they heard about Robin attacking Iceberg did they find her. He told them what she said, how she said that inside her there was a darkness that none of them knew about and that one day that darkness will be the end of them all. That was why she was leaving. She said that they would take the fall for what happened last night as she escaped and they would never see each other again.
The Straw Hats and they were staring at Chopper, dumbstruck at what they were hearing, except for Zoro who merely looked at Chopper with an unreadable expression on his face. No way, Luffy's voice yelled out furiously and they all looked up at him as he glared at Chopper. That doesn't make any sense. Did Robin really say that to you?
Chopper could only nod at that, looking ready to start crying while Zoro put his hand to his swords. We were prepared for this, weren't we? He asked them all as they all looked at him. He held out one of his swords in front of them before he reminded them that Robin had been their enemy before they let her join up with them. This could be their only chance to find out the truth so they shouldn't run away. There's still a lot of things we don't know about Robin, Zoro went on grimly. Is that woman our enemy or our friend? He then looked directly at Chopper and asked, just making sure he heard him right. She said the situation will only get worse and we won't see her again after today, correct?
Yes, Chopper nodded, not liking where this was going.
Zoro frowned a little further at the confirmation before he said thoughtfully, from that statement we can infer that something is going to happen today. Now it's time to decide if she's a friend or a foe. The others looked at him. Chopper and Nami looked shocked and horrified at his words, but Luffy's face was still empty of emotion. It was really starting to worry all of them how he just continued to look dully on ahead.
She says that she won't see us after today and things are gonna get worse. Zoro went on seriously. Maybe that means the attack on Iceberg was just a warm-up and she has something even bigger planned for tonight. Luffy just looked at him as Zoro went on. I don't know why Robin's doing any of this, but it's hard for me to guess at what she's planning. But seeing how much of a promotion her first attack on the mayor was, there's only one way to make things worse.
In other words, she'll murder him, Nami answered, getting what he was trying to say and they all looked on in worry. Zoro frowned a little as he seemed to think it over. I think that's what she's trying to tell us at least, he muttered. Also, since she told Chopper she'll be pinning the crime on us, it could be that she's feeding us all these little hints to try and lure us out to the crime scene tonight.
Think so, Chopper asked him. If that's her plan, it would be convenient for her if we didn't happen to show up seeing how we're at the scene of the crime, he answered grimly.
You say you don't know what she's thinking, but it sounds like to me you've already decided that she's our enemy. Nami responded angrily. He looked back at her, his face showing her how grave this all was. I'm talking about possibilities here, that's all. You should always be prepared for the worst case scenario. Understand? He asked them all. If I get locked into a single line of thinking it'll only slow me down, Zoro informed them. If she's my friend, I have to be ready to forgive, Zoro went on as he flicked his sword out just so that they could see the blade, but if she's my enemy, I have to be ready to fight. He resheathed the blade and added, our best chance to settle this is tonight.
Now looking like it was the eve before a great battle, he looked over at Luffy and asked if they were going to go.
He didn't even have to ask that. Luffy looked over at him and said, of course. They all looked at each other long and hard, knowing that none of them were ever gonna find any peace until they got to the bottom of this and heard it straight from Robin's mouth. They were readying themselves for a fight. Nami sighed, a frown on her face, not looking the least bit happy about what she was hearing. It's not that I object to the plan, she said, closing her eyes for only a moment but still were forgetting something. She looked to Luffy and reminded him, Sanji said he saw Robin walking with someone in a mask, remember? Obviously that wasn't one of us, but Iceberg said exactly the same thing. That he was attacked by Robin and a large man in a mask that he didn't recognize. Nami finished up, whoever he is, I bet he's the reason that Robin's doing all this stuff. At her words, Chopper blinked and realized that she was right. Yeah, he cried out in new conviction. That means it isn't her fault and we just need to beat the real bad guy right. He looked at once to Zoro, as if hoping that he would agree. That's the ideal situation, Zoro agreed, but on the other hand it's also possible that he's one of Robin's friends. The problem is, Nami said thoughtfully, we don't have much to go on other than a big man in a mask. So where do we even start? I mean, what is our goal here?
We find Robin and capture her, Luffy said without hesitation, lowering his head so they couldn't see his eyes as they looked at him in surprise. That's the only way we'll ever know the truth. He put a hand to his hat as he stood up.
Zoro seemed to agree with what Luffy was saying. You're right, he said, we're wasting time here trying to figure it out. Just one thing, Robin won't be easy to catch. After all, the world government's been trying for 20 years and it still hasn't happened. Like he said, it's the only way we really know for sure. Nami finally agreed as they all stood up with Luffy. Yeah, let's settle this right now, Chopper answered, sounding unlike himself. He sounded ready to fight as well. Right, Luffy said, and they all looked into the distance to where Galleyla's headquarters were. Come on, Galleyla is waiting.